This is AI generated. You're not wrong.
What are you guys talking about? AI generated.
Oh, my fucking image is AI generated.
Uh,
It's it's just like some giant fat baby just jumping like from the earth, and it looks like like I said, he did like an omega jump.
All right, we're on.
That's
we're
why
on
he's up
Twitch
there
now.
in this what
Oops, is Cass
above the stratosphere.
is Castle Labs on the whole time? No way. Oh, I forgot I did my driver. I'll do that after.
Your what?
I did my driver.
Oh, I thought you're driving. I don't do that.
Why not, dude?
Well, there's no problem. No need to update it.
Well, there was a problem with my OBS. I don't know why it was. Was it my OBS? Or was it my Caster Labs? It was a problem with something. It was my OBS, yeah. And it didn't let me stream on my OBS until I updated my driver. And this sucks, but whatever. It happens. Alright, we're here.
Golly gee.
So
What do you
I
think, dude? We got
mentioned
Pip.
extra
Fucking
arguments or
wires are
parameters being a
crazy.
thing for our remote events, and that's what I'm gonna show you.
This is not good.
So
My body is
when
super
we
sore
have a
from the
remote
gym.
event,
It's because like
it doesn't
my
matter
fucking
how many
I
arguments
guess
we
my
throw
body
into
decided
here,
to
because we can
regen
have as many
my
as we
legs
want.
instead of my upper body.
This is usually to pass
No,
in
my legs are
information to the
Jesus.
server.
My legs are
Just
fine,
too
dude.
weak.
Using
My,
this remote
you don't
event,
have
if
you don't have
we
enough
wanted to
hate.
do
I guess
anything
not.
specific,
I don't have enough hate for
it
cardio.
gives us
Yeah,
more
Richard.
power to be able to
Yeah, Richard, you have to
say
hate fat
exactly
people a
what
lot.
we want to
Yeah,
do
you're just gonna
with arguments
Like
that we
fat phobia?
pass into this event
Yeah,
called.
like fat phobia. That's
So,
how I lost all
in
my
this
weight.
case,
I was
we
like-
have
Yeah.
I was
give
like,
currency,
I don't
which
want to
gives
be
us
like
50,
I don't
which
want to be
gives
like
us
Boogie.
a
I don't
fixed
want to be
amount
like
of
them.
coins every
Like,
single time we press the button. But what if we
Hmm.
wanted to specify it on the
This is
client?
not wrong.
We would do that by
Use
creating
hate to my advantage,
parameters
Richard.
and
That's how I lost so
passing
much
in
weight.
arguments
Holy shit.
to our
Is this
function
true,
calls.
Chris?
So we're going to create another parameter here
Give
after
me.
player
Will
by
he
putting
gain
in
it
a
back
comma,
like Harold?
and this is going to be
Oh, man.
the coins
I don't think
amount.
so. Not to the level of Harold
And we're going
anyway.
to take this
Michael
coins
might
amount
slip
and we're
up,
going
but
to
definitely
replace
not to
it
the level of
with
Harold.
our fixed
Hey,
50
relax.
currency that's over here.
What's he
So
doing?
No,
now,
I
what we're
did
gonna do
slip up, but
is
then I
we're gonna
lost
go
it,
to our
When?
fire. We're gonna go to our local
What?
script.
You don't remember?
And inside of this fire server,
Guys thinking,
remember
That
that
was a while ago. I think it was on my
player is
birthday, actually.
implicitly passed into
Oops,
our
I
function
did
calls.
this.
So we actually
Yeah, I ate
don't
too much.
need
Yeah, I
to
was like
pass in
270
player,
or something. I was
but
like,
rather
like,
we're going
wait,
to
I'm
pass
doing
in
too much.
our
And
coins
I started
amount.
losing weight.
So in this case, it's going to be 50. So
Then I
what's
got
going to
lower.
happen
I
here
even got below
is that
250.
when we call
Pretty cool.
fire server,
why can you do
we're
that?
going to pass in our
Like
coins
at
amount.
289.
And over here,
Like,
it's going
he's
to
about to reach you.
implicitly pass in
You better
the
lock
player
in.
argument
Huh?
and
About to.
then
He's about to
our
reach you.
coins
Yeah,
amount.
Yeah,
So it's
bro.
very
You better
important
lock
to
in,
understand
or he's
that
gonna
we're
beat
not
you
passing
and
in
wait.
player first.
That shit's
This
gonna
is
take a
actually
long
our
time
second
to get to
argument, which is our
Michael's
Well,
coins
Chris,
amount.
maybe
But over
if
here,
you
we're going to
stop
pass in player
Kenny.
first thing.
Chris, I thought
and
you
then
told me you were
all the
gonna dump that
arguments
all out,
afterwards that
'cause,
we,
yeah, that's bad for
I
you.
provided
ate one
inside of these
piece of
parameters.
candy yesterday.
So if we go back
and it
I'd
wasn't
say
even
and
two.
like,
test it,
Two?
it should
Was
it two?
essentially do
oh no,
the exact
yes,
same
the
thing.
gummy bears.
So if we
and
press
the,
it,
Unbelievable.
then it should
Skittles?
do
How much
the
sugar
same
do they had?
Yeah,
So
and the
that
no,
works out
no
wonders.
high fructose syrup. No, it's a
And
Trader
like I
Joe's,
mentioned,
candy bar.
you
Ew,
can
who the
have
fuck is
as
all
many
those?
arguments
And then the-
as you want,
Trader Joe's,
as
yeah.
long
I mean,
as
no,
you
the
have
chocolate
this
was
player
good, actually. I
parameter.
actually liked it.
You can
And
have
then,
as many arguments as
and
you
then I
want.
had some
You can pass in
gummy
as much
bears. And what
information.
is it? What's that
and
brand?
the
That
script
white
will not
bag
go
Bro?
brand?
Hair,
So
hair
what we
bow?
just did
No, that's
was
no,
we
that's the gold.
communicated
That's
from
the gold in
s-
the packaging.
from
That's
the
the one I know.
client
I don't
to the
eat gummy
server.
bears.
But now,
like that,
what
so
if
I
we
don't
wanted
know.
to do it the other way
Yeah, there's
around?
like a white
What if we
brand.
wanted
It's
to
like
communicate
new. They
from
do
the
stuff in
server
there. It's
to the client?
But
Like for instance,
yeah, I ate
if
that,
the
and
player
that, and
has
that's
joined
it.
the game,
And
then
the-
we'll
my
tell the
giant
server
bag
to
of
send
candy,
a
I just gave it
message
to my
to the
mom.
client to
Ball
give them
guys.
like a
I thought
special
your mom didn't like
greeting
candy.
through text or
And
something.
it was a lot.
So that's
no,
what we're gonna do
no,
with
she's
this
gonna take it to the
example.
dealer and then give
This
it to
can
everyone.
also be done by using a remote event. So for this example, we're going to create another remote event.
And she just
So,
safe kids just
like I
come
said,
around.
it's going to be
It's
inside
actually
of
mostly
replicated
adults
storage
that
because that's the
take the
folder
candy.
I
It's not
recommend
even
putting
kids.
all your remote
It's
events
chats.
in. So we'll hit the plus sign, and we're going to create
Just take
another
out our
remote
candy.
event, and we're going to rename this.
Here's
Yeah.
a portrayal
Great.
of my
Especially our mechanic that comes by
And
every time.
let's go
He's
back
like,
to our
"Trick or
leader
treat,"
stats
and it
script.
takes like 5
So
pieces
in our
of
leader
candy.
He's a
stats script,
homie.
let's make room
Yeah, it's hard
for
remembering
our
every day for
reference
that guy.
to
Holy
the
shit,
Greet
this sounds
player
crazy.
remote event. So we'll say local
Oh,
greet
hold
player equals game dot replicated storage
Stupid
dot
pikes.
greet player. And now what we'll do is we'll
Oh my
drop 2 lines after we
Yeah, it
create
has
the
to be here
coins
then.
leader stat by saying greet
Oh,
player.
lullaby.
And you remember
Stop.
how we
Well, Kevin's
communicated
on.
from the client
We
to the
never can actually
server.
pay for other
So
teams.
we took the remote event and
In
we
my
called
deepest
fire
Oh, yeah, I
server.
forgot we're live streaming.
But
Sorry,
this
everybody.
time what we're
Hello,
going
this
to do is
me,
we're going to
Andy.
do the opposite. We're going to say
And I'm
colon,
Chrisman 233 too.
fire
Welcome,
client.
Mike.
And welcome to the
So
Three
it
Idiots.
basically
You will-
does
you
the
will
opposite
soon
of fire
hit
server.
20
It
subscribers.
does
Close to
fire
three
client
idiots.
instead. But here's
I
the
was
very
gonna say
important
the
thing.
other word.
Come on,
We
dude.
are
I was gonna say,
required,
more like
much
what,
like
three
our
words?
on-server
What
event,
the- Man.
we're required to
Is that what you
pass
are, Michael?
in the specific
We
player
should-
we
we-
want
we-
to
we have to
send
do the three
this
bucks.
message
Dude,
to.
So
like
in
I
this
said,
case, it's going to
you
be
could
our
say.
player,
I feel
which
like
we
people are
labeled
taking the
right
R word
here
out
as
of
player,
shut up.
Wait, no,
variable.
dude. Let me
So
talk.
we're
Let me
going to
talk, you
simply
fat
pass
guy.
in player.
I feel
So
like
this is
people
the
can
basic
say the
syntax
R word
for
as long as
our
it's not
fire
in a
client
derogatory
event.
way towards
like I mentioned
a
before,
person
you
who is
can
actually,
pass
you
in
know.
other parameters if
Well,
you
Richard,
really
like
watch
want
that.
out the 2 million
but that is
people
totally
that
optional.
actually have a
What
mental
is
disability.
required
How they feel.
is
They'd
specifying which
understand
player
me.
we're trying to send this message to.
They don't understand my
And
pain.
like with our on-server event, we need to catch this
You
call
understand what I'm
onto
saying?
the client
Messed up,
instead.
man.
So
You
in
understand?
our
How
local
come you don't
script,
say that?
we're
Come
actually
on.
going to
'Cause,
copy our agreed player reference.
I
and
just,
then we're
I
going
just
to
no, wait, no,
paste it
dude. I
down
try to
here,
make sure you know what I'm saying.
And
You
then
know?
what we'll do
If you're really
is
fighting for
instead of
for what's
on
right,
server
I'm not
do it.
we're
fighting.
going to
I'm not really
say
fighting. I'm just telling. I'm just
on
clarifying.
player,
I'm just
and it's
clarifying
going
it.
to
Yeah,
look
that's for
like
yourself.
I am
it's going
just.
to look like
then
this.
you'll-
Whoa,
Is that when we're
whoa.
like, you
Greet
said it, you're like,
player
Mike,
on
he's not fighting. He's
client
taking it.
event,
No, dude.
colon
I'm
Next.
just
Dumb coward.
I'm just laying down
function,
some ground
open
rules.
parentheses, close parentheses, and we'll hit enter.
No, you're
Now you might
laying your
notice
back down,
we're
so
not
sometimes you can blow it
required
out.
Gay,
to
so
pass in
all my
player
buddies are
reference
gay.
because we already
Oh my
know
God.
which player we're trying to send the
God
message
help
to.
my friend Richard.
So this,
Michael,
this
don't you wanna
does
play the,
require a little
Isaac
bit of
game on
practice
Roblox
to
with Chris?
understand like the
I'll show
different
you an Isaac
parameters,
game.
what is required, what's not required. But as long as you understand it, I think
Oh,
it'll
you know,
make
that just
sense.
reminded me.
So in this
This
case,
guy.
let's actually pass in an argument.
It just reminded me. We should
We're
play
going
that
to
game.
create one
I mean,
argument
Chris
here
saw.
that's
Pillar
basically
Chase
going
4?
to be the message. So we'll
No.
say message
Pillar Chase 3,
as
actually.
our second
You
parameter
always skip a
to
trilogy.
our fire client call. So
Let
the
me look
first
around. Let me
argument is
see if
going
it
to be
actually is
player,
like in my
and then we'll
in my
space it out with a
recommended.
comma.
I feel like it should be.
And we're going to
Are you talking
pass
about
in a
escape the
message.
Costco
We'll
guys?
say,
If you do one,
hello,
I played that. Sounds good.
No,
player.
dude, stop
That's going to
playing
be our
those
message
games.
that we're
I
going to
swear, I
pass
think
into the
me and
client.
Chris, I saw you like.
And so it's
when
going to
we
be
were
passed
watching, I
into
think
here.
Chris saw your
So now
stream.
what
You
we'll
were
do
just watching
is
videos.
we're going to
Did
create
you
a
actually
text
do that?
label
do you
that we
mean?
will use.
I was talking to Pinecone. I was talking to
So
Pinecone.
let's click the plus
No,
sign
but Chris saw
and
you were
let's
wa-
add in
you
a
were-
text
you-
label.
he was,
And we're going
literally,
to
you were
call
just
this
sitting
label
there, and there was like audio, like a video. in the
Oh,
background.
okay.
I was like,
That
let's
was
move
because I was
this
eating
over
Chipotle,
here.
and I
Let's
can't.
scale
If I
this
play,
up a little
if I
bit.
like,
That's fucking.
no, no,
this,
no.
Right?
Look,
This
look,
XQC.
here,
look,
let's
dude,
scale
look, dude,
it
look,
up.
dude, look, dude, look, dude, look, dude.
Scale
If I eat Chipotle and start
let's go
playing
back
a
to the
game,
local
I'm never gonna finish
and
my
let's
Chipotle
first
because,
make
especially if I'm
reference
playing My
to
Hero.
our greetings
I tried that
text
fucking
label
like 2
by-
nights ago, and I couldn't.
You were
by
not
dropping
playing
line,
My Hero.
and
No,
we'll
I
say
was. Check it 2 nights ago,
local
bro. I was actually getting mad. Low key.
greeting
It was actually that
label
bad.
This-
equals
I mean, yesterday-
GUI
Yeah,
dot
so yesterday.
The
greeting.
15-minute
Now what we'll
stream
do here
yesterday.
is we're going to say
I don't gotta pull up
greeting
fucking stream now.
label
Yeah,
dot
not only was it
text
15 minutes, but you
equals
start watching
message.
videos. That was
All right,
pretty
so now
funny.
Yeah,
this
brain on
should
it for a
work
second.
as
Now I'm
soon as
pulling
we
the
join the
video.
game.
Yeah, then I'm
Then
pretty
this
sure-
text
I'm pretty
label
sure, like,
should be
the
updated
oh,
to
shit.
entire
the
5 minutes of it
message
is
that we
dedicated to you just
specified.
watching
So
Okay,
videos.
as
wait,
you can
I was-
see,
I was playing
the text
Isaac
label
for a
will be
bit. I was
updated
playing the
to
Isaac game.
Hello, new player.
And then
Because
I'm
when the
assuming I
player
was
joined the
talking
game,
to,
we called fire
yeah, I was
client
talking to fucking
to
Frank.
that
Oh
specific
no, I didn't
player,
talk to Frank with them. That
and
was
we
2
gave it a
ago.
message here. We
Oops,
passed it into
sad.
here as an argument,
As
and
the
we
stream
changed
before.
the greeting label's text
Fucking liar.
to whatever the message
yeah, that was
was.
mad tight
And
that
in
day.
this case,
Why
the
so
message was
serious?
"Hello, new player."
Why
We
so
can be
gay,
even
Richard?
more specific by concatenating this message.
I just want to
with
be like
the
a,
Why is
I,
this
I,
game
I just want to be a
Jeff up
react
here?
So
streamer.
we will
Fucking hate
say,
that game.
"Hello, new player."
That's what
but
Richard
instead
told
of
me
an
2
exclamation
days
point,
ago,
we will
and I guess
make
he's
a
making it a
colon,
reality.
And we will
Oh,
use
I just want to
string
be a react streamer, you know?
concatenation to
Watch
add in the
videos and I
player
just don't do
name,
shit. Albino
to
carp.
create a customized message. And the way combining strings work is
Fuck, I was on
by
my
putting
bait.
in the two dots here, and then we're gonna put in player
Oh, I really
dot
hope I didn't
name.
miss it.
We're gonna get the
There's
name
no way I
of
don't
the
get
player
recommended. That game's so cool.
and pass
that's
it
not
into
here.
this.
Michael, you know cool
string.
games will get
So it's gonna say,
recommended.
Hello, new player.
Only
colon,
stupid brain
and then
rot
the player's
simulators get
name, which in
recommended
this
now.
case it's Brawl Battle.
They
So
use Roblox
let's go into the
Slap.
game and hit play again. So
Like,
now
get
it
fat and
says
roll off-
hello
roll down a
new
hill?
player Brawl Battle because
Yeah,
Brawl
I don't know
Battle
if you know
is
how
my
like
name,
Roblox like
so it's going to
getting
give out
paid
a
works, but
customized message.
apparently like if you're like
for
a premium
each
member, like you get
individual
paid for
player
if premium
whenever
members
they join the
stay
game
in
for the
like
first time.
your game.
All right, and the final event.
Basically,
we
if you
will
if
talk
you
about
like
with
retain
remote
players
events
for a
is
long amount of
called
time,
Fire all clients.
then you know
and this is
you know,
useful.
you get paid
if we
as long as
want
they're in the
to
game playing
go-
it, or not
if
even
we
playing,
want
it's like
the
in
server
there.
to send a message.
And so that's
to
why simulator games are
every
so popular,
single
because you know
player
all you do
inside
is
the
sit there and
game.
be AFK.
So this is very useful for, let's say,
You know what I'm saying?
round-based round-based.
I'm assuming
Roblox
that's what
games where
like
it's
I
if we
haven't.
had,
I don't think I've touched like
let's say
one
a
set. God
status
damn,
bar
that guy has a
up
giant
here
squid.
that says
I don't think I've played
there's a
like a
current
second
game
of
in
like Pet
progress,
Simulator or like Bee
we're about to be
Simulator. But
teleporting
I'm
all the
assuming that's how it
players
goes.
to the new map. Like,
And
you
that's
kinda
why
get what I
people
mean.
like
Murder Mystery
obviously
2
play it that much.
and a bunch of
because
other
I'm
round-based
assuming it's a
games
good
do
game.
this, where
Like
they have a
for a
status
simulator
label
game.
that tells
But
us
like
the
it's
status of the
all the
current
grind
game.
and AFK grinding.
And
People
it
just sit there like
notifies
my cousin
and it
really
updates
does
for
that, bro.
every
He has like a
single
fucking
player.
auto clicker. He just
So
sits
that's
there.
similar to what we're gonna do with Fire
I'm like,
Alt
wow.
clients.
Oh,
We're
this guy's a
going
macro,
to
he's just
make
sitting
a
on it. He
global
just leaves his PC
announcement
there.
that'll show up for every single player up here. And we will do that first
My sister
by
does the
creating
same
another
thing where
text
she
label.
just sits,
So
she leaves an
let's
auto clicker on it and goes
duplicate our
somewhere.
greetings text label by hitting
And she gets free
Control
auto
D,
clickers too.
and we will move this
it's not
up
too hard.
here
It's just like macro.
all the way at the top, and let's rename this to
But all free stuff is
announcement.
viruses.
And let's change
Produce
the
a
text
macro.
label to global
Ain't that hard.
announcement.
You never know, dude. Even the macros could have
And
viruses.
what we'll do
Maybe
is
that's
we're
once.
going to hide this for now by clicking on unchecking visible. So whenever the server fires to all the
I
clients,
don't know
we're
why this
going to
Rivals
make
games is so popular.
this
It just
announcement
feels like the
label
3v3
visible.
COD.
Now let's create
Or
another
like,
remote event
obviously
over
like
here
I
in
feel like
replicated
BO6
storage.
movement.
So let's just create
So
a
weird.
remote event.
This is AI
Let's
generated
rename
image
this
of fucking
to
Jenny. What the hell?
announcement. That's what we're gonna call it. Or no,
Can't
actually,
believe it.
let's make it more specific. Let's say give
Fuck is
announcement.
Sprunky?
So now
Where
what
are
we'll
these
do
games?
is
Sprunky?
we're
Oh my
going to
God.
go to our leader
No, there's
stats,
Sprunky,
and
stupid
let's
cat.
make reference to our give
Sprunky
announcements
quiz.
remote event.
Don't
So
call
we'll
at
say
3 a.m.
Local give announcement.
It looks like one of
equals
those,
game dot replicated storage
what was the
dot
word?
give an give announcement.
I don't know. There was like this.
We're going to
this
wait
stupid
about
game where,
20
like, you gotta make
seconds
beats.
before a global
And they kinda
announcement
look, like,
will be
stylized
sent
like that.
to all the players that are inside of the game.
beats.
So
This
we're
is
going
like-
to
it's like-
put
it's
in
like
a
mobile game.
task.wait function here with about 20 seconds.
It looks
And
pretty
then
cool.
what we'll do is we're
Oh
going
my
to
god, it's
fire the
sex.
give announcements remote event to every single client.
Freaky
And
Simulator.
It's
It's trying to
structured
fuck him up.
like this. We'll say
Oh, is that
give
what that is?
announcement
And
colon fire all
Meeting Michael's
Okay,
Revenge.
bad news,
and
Chris,
you might have
as I
noticed
mentioned
that
before,
we don't
yeah,
need
looks like
a player
the
argument
game is
here
not here.
because we know that for this,
Oh, no.
we're going to pass
Told
it
you,
to
man.
every single player in the game.
it
So we
doesn't
don't need to
require
specify
anything crazy.
which player. But we can still add in more arguments
Try
into
something.
here
Will it ever get ported?
like usual. So now what we'll do
Don't ask
is
me.
we're going to catch this
That's
down here
fair.
into our local
Look at my
script.
special.
And what's really
special
interesting here
100% yes,
is that the syntax is exactly
dealmaker.
the same
Okay, I can't
for
say.
if we're just communicating from the server to one player, because this works the same way if it's being
I'll play that.
sent to each individual player. So it's
game
essentially
there,
the same
once
thing.
Kevin's
Let's
on. Kevin's
first
just
go back to
cleaning
our
his room right
script.
now, though.
Let's copy our
Why would I care?
announcement
Damn.
and
And
let's
then
paste
we
it
can all
down
play
here.
together, though.
I am
And then
Bean?
we'll
What is
say
this?
Death penalty?
give announcement dot
No,
on
I mean,
client
I like
event,
I like Death
colon,
Penalty.
connect
I played that
function,
for my
and then we
my
have
side
no
Roblox channel that I
arguments
gave
here,
up
so
immediately
we'll
on
just-
because it was so
we'll just
stupid.
drop to the next line. And then what we'll do
No,
is
I
we're going
actually
to
did not like playing
make
that
our announcements
because I did
text
not
label
like I did
visible
not
so
like
that
not cursing.
all the players can see this. So what we'll do is
Oh,
we're going to say
meant
GUI
the game.
No,
dot
I mean just not like not
announcements
cursing. I like what's it
visible
called?
equals
I-
true.
Fuck, I already
So
forgot what it's
this
called.
one line will
Death Penalty, yeah,
make
I like Death
this
Penalty. When I played it,
announcement
it was pretty
text
fun.
label visible to every single player inside of the game.
Yes.
So now you might
Very
ask,
fun. I like
how do
it,
we know if
but
this works
that's not
inside of
Xbox, so
Studio if we're
I've
trying
now
to test
completely
out
lost interest and will forget about it
Fire
in
all
2
clients?
days.
Because we need to know if this works for at least 2 players. Roblox has actually provided us a great way to test our
Oh wait, there's this
Roblox
game called
game
Adventure Time
with
Land of
multiple
Ooh.
players if we need more than one player to test the game. Because what
Piggy
we've been,
Bell's Crazy
been
Party.
doing is we've just been
be
simulating
Ice King and
playing
Tech
solo
Princesses.
inside of a Roblox
Oh,
game.
I just
What if we
watched
wanted to
maybe.
create our own server, our own local server to test multiple players at once? We can
let me
actually
just
do
see this
that with a
shit.
feature Roblox has provided
Might
for
as
us
well.
by going over here to test, and there should be a little
Escape
section
the
here inside of
freaking-
clients and servers
Alright, how do we
where
do
we can
this?
create a local server with
Row
however
63,
many players we want. But but in this case, we're going to use 2 players, and essentially what we'll do is we'll press the start
Hey,
button,
Junior.
and what will happen
But
is that Roblox
Don't go on
will
you.
give us 3
Oh!
windows. One is the server, and the other 2 are each of the
I don't
players.
need a boost.
So let's hit
No,
start
I
and
am
see what
really
happens.
Stupid kid.
So what we should see is
Oh,
one
shit.
window
Wait,
that,
Halloween Part
that
2?
represents
Okay,
the
this
server.
game is stupid.
And there's 2 more windows that are showing up. So one of them is player 1, and the other one is player 2, because we made a local server to playtest as 2
Inkfell?
players.
No way.
So now that we're in the game,
Inkfell
we can
Sand?
see that
No,
we have
Inkfell's in
player
the
2
game.
over here, and we have
Inkfell
player
Hot
1
Diggity
over
Demon?
here. So
No,
this is
yeah,
how
he's
we're
from-
able to
from Bendy.
playtest a game with multiple
do love
players
Bendy.
by creating our own server to be able to do that.
Flying to
And
heaven.
as you
will I
saw,
make it?
I don't know if you actually did see it, but around the 20-second mark,
Never load in.
the global announcement
What
was
is
sent
angelic
to
ass music?
all
Why
the
am I in
players,
line
so
to
both
heaven?
of our players at the exact same time. I don't know
And
if you
why
did
is
catch
this
that.
guy,
You can,
like,
rewind it
flying
for
in
like
front
about
of
10
me?
seconds, but
Hello?
it is what happened. The server, after
Wait a
about 20
minute.
seconds, has
This is
sent
exactly
the
like that
global
fucking
announcement
gambling game I
message
saw.
to every single player that was inside of the
And
game.
why
to
is
tell them
Snake just like
to
floating
make
in the
this
air?
text label visible.
I said, yeah, it's
And
Snake. What the fuck?
we were able to successfully do it at the exact same time. So that's just another very useful function to use whenever you want to send a message to
Can
all the
someone
players
say
inside of the
that
game.
guy just cut me in
And
line.
so if you want to stop this playtest session,
Oh,
with
is that
all
not,
these
like, against,
different
like,
windows,
the
you
God
could just
law?
go to test and then hit cleanup
Okay.
to get rid of
This game
all
is just
of the-
gambling, except
the
you're
windows
gambling
that are
for
on
your
screen.
life.
And sometimes it doesn't get
Dude,
rid of all of
awesome.
them, so you just have to
Might
manually
be
exit
actually the
out of them,
stupidest game I've ever seen in
which
my life.
I don't think should be a problem. Now you might ask, can't we
I feel
just
like
get
that's- Oh,
a
nothing.
table full of
Some of
all the
that dumb
players
shit.
and just manually use Fire Client for every single player? Yes, you can do it that way,
Fuck it.
but why would you want to put up
Let me
with the
just try
struggle
this
of
out.
having to do all
I can't
that
hear
when
in the
you can
game if I
just
don't
do
try
all
it
in one
out.
line? I think Roblox has realized that this is a very common use case, which is why
Oh,
they made
what the
this
fuck
into a
happened?
separate event rather than having you constantly
All right.
fetch a table full
Oh
of
my
all the
God.
players
What's
inside
going
of the
on,
game and then just
What?
manually
What's up?
and just
Your
microphone was, like,
manually
really,
using
like,
Fire
bugging
Client
out.
for every single player.
Oh, okay.
So that's
This
why
is
we
the
could just do
controller.
it all inside
Yeah,
of
I guess it's,
one line with
it's
Fire
just,
all clients
sort of,
rather
like,
than having
fucked
to
up
do
cases,
it
right? It's
individually.
really fucking
To
up,
finish
the
off,
aux
let's
port.
review what we just learned with remote
no.
events. So, and again, this can be found inside of the Roblox Dev Hub, so I'll leave a link to that in the description if you want to take a closer deep dive into it. There's three ways of communicating from the server and client with remote events.
Oops.
The first one is from the client to the
What?
server. And basically how it works is that we have a local script that uses the Fire server function, and you can pass in whatever
Oh, I didn't
arguments
press
you
continue.
want
No
inside of
wonder.
this. And then the server will catch this call by
Alright.
using the remote event on server event. And the first
those
argument
stupid-ass
has to be
intros,
the
bro.
player that calls this
I know how to
function.
play some
No
stupid
matter what,
tennis.
it implicitly calls it. And then afterwards, it's whatever arguments you put inside of this Fire server function call. The second way of communication
I even
is
got the
opposite.
short shorts
So
on.
it's from the server to the client.
Oh shit.
And this is basically
Golly.
completely
That's bad.
flipped. So from the
Golly.
server,
That was also
it
bad.
calls Fire Client, and the first argument
get
has
the
to
fuck out-
be
Oops.
the player that we're specifically trying to send this call to. And then anything after that is going to be the
shit.
arguments after the player. And then
Ah.
now it's the client's job
Oh,
to
fuck.
use on client event to take this function call
fuck
and
do I
do whatever
serve?
it wants to do with the arguments
Yay.
that we provided into here. And like I mentioned, you don't need to have arguments.
Just
Arguments
shut
are
up, I know how
optional,
to serve.
but where it says that we need to pass in players, that is required. And so server to client is basically the opposite of client to server.
What
as
the
expected.
fuck? How was that
Ah,
And
out?
then finally,
why?
we
This
have
kinda
a
looks a bit
special
better.
use case, which
Well,
is
how was that out?
server
I'm so confused.
to all the clients. And this is basically
Oops.
the same thing as server to client.
God, everyone's
except
red.
This is
There
for
he is,
every
Inkfell.
single client
How
or
the fuck?
player inside of the game.
Okay.
So the only thing
Damn,
different
he's
here,
real.
as you
Okay,
noticed,
okay. I know what I'm
client
doing right now, I know what I'm
here
doing right
is
now.
the same thing as the client here for
Okay.
server and client. The only thing different is the server.
So-
Instead of using Fire
That's it?
Client and specifying the
How is
player
that out?
parameter,
Fuck.
all we need to do is just say fire all clients, and we can pass
How
in
is that
whatever optional
out?
parameters we
Okay,
need. So
now
that's the
you're getting
basic
me mad.
rundown of all three functions that you can use to communicate
Mhm.
from the server to the client with one-way communication. This
Finally,
episode is a
fuck
bit too
me.
long, so that's why I'm going to continue this in the next episode when we talk about remote functions and how we can further expand upon our communication with the server and the client. Because remote events
Alright, I'm done
essentially
with this
act as a
stupid-ass
one-way
thing.
communication from either client to server, server to client, or server to all clients. But in the next episode, we're going to do two-way communication. So it's going to take the extra step to further our knowledge on the server and client field. So that's pretty much going to be it for this episode. Join my Discord, the link is in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.
Okay.
Wow, my team is good? Question mark, exclamation point.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. We're going to be adding more security to our Roblox scripts using a feature that further expands what we learned upon in the last episode about remote events. This one is going to be about remote functions, which have its own use cases that make it different from remote events. And in this episode, I'm going to be showing you what these are and how to use them. And this example that I have here uses remote functions. So I have a leader stat with 50 coins, and I have a prompt here that says, would you like to buy this button for 50 coins? If I click on
I need 25 wins?
Then the server should have deducted 50 coins from my leader stats, and that message should have been sent back to the client to then update this GUI to say purchase has been successful. So this had a two-way communication system that was happening rather than one-way communication, and that is essentially the difference between the two. And that's what we're going to be discussing about inside of this episode. But before we start implementing, let me go back to our diagram that I've showed you in previous episodes. Alright, let's think about this for a minute. So we're back on this diagram that shows us the server and client model yet again. I think you've seen this before. That's located in the Roblox developer code. Link is in the description for that. In the last episode, we covered remote events, which act as one-way communication between the server and the client. And like I mentioned, remote events act as one-way communication.
Oh, that's a fucking machine.
Three ways of communicating with remote events. So the first one is from one client to the server.
Just a machine.
The other way is from the server to one of the clients, and then there was the server to all of the clients.
Oh shit.
But what if we wanted to do a communication that sends information to one party, and then with that, it will send results back to the caller?
God damn, it just doubles.
What if we had this player communicate to the server, and then with that communication to the server then communicates back to the player with results?
But why do I need 25 wins to do this
or to let us know that the call was successful? This is essentially what remote functions do.
Oh, here it is.
Remote events can't do. The very important thing to know here is that what we're going to be talking about in this episode will act as two-way communication rather than one-way communication. So hopefully you were able to understand this from my explanation.
We actually
now that we
were
understand it,
on a
let's
three-man
implement these remote functions.
And
So
conveniently, they were all fighting each other.
stats script inside of server script service with our player added event, and
this guy's getting
stomped.
Oh my god!
I forgot how lobbies have to team up on me.
And then for the setup,
is that you?
Is
that you, Kira Yushikage?
Prompt purchase with the coins that we have when we load it.
I used the hands.
So in starter GUI, we're going to create a screen GUI.
Oh no, it's that guy from that new anime.
We're going to create a text label, and we're going to rename this
something like that.
And let's move this over here. Let's drag it a little bit.
Alright, it's me versus you.
Ban?
Let's go down here.
Yeah, it's like it's like Garden of Ban or something like that.
Let's change the text to.
Oh! Alright,
would you like to buy this button? Next, what we'll do is we're going to add a text button to the screen GUI. So
okay, I get one more try. Go try.
And then we're going to rename this to buy button. Let's
move
this down here. Let's scale it up just a little bit. Center it. Go down here.
Come on, bitch.
Oh my god. Okay. Wait, I can do that.
Richard, you can't be playing the game
too much fast. In parentheses, we're going to say.
No, I'm just playing tennis on Roblox.
The player know that this is going to cost
I can't even.
Coins. Let's just scale this a little bit here so that it looks nicer, and then center it back again. Okay, and now what we'll do.
You think you're what? That's why am I serving? I don't want to fucking serve.
Go back into our game. And now that we have our setup, let's create our remote function.
Okay.
And so because
dude, they keep forcing me to serve. I don't want to serve.
We want to be able to access this remote function.
Oh my god, because I can't serve for my life. Can you serve?
Like remote events. And one of the best places that the server and client can access is replicated storage. So we're going to add this remote function.
Okay, so that's how we're playing this. Go ahead, do it again. Do it again. It's just gonna happen.
Plus sign. And let's add a remote
That was its fault.
It's fault. Remember, it's remote function.
My point.
Let's rename this to buy button.
What?
So we're gonna
No.
call this remote function.
Come on, do it. Do it
And
this time. Do
now
this
what
time.
we'll do is we're going to open up our local script.
Yeah, bitch,
And
fall.
let's delete this and first make reference to our
Didn't say that in
remote
my phone
function.
yet.
So we'll say local buy
How could you?
button, and just to make
That's
this
mine.
easier, we're
Yes,
going to call
sir.
this
That's
buy button
mine.
remote,
I'll be
so that
taking
we
to
know that
last
this
right
is
for this
a
one.
remote
Come
function.
on, do it.
Equals.
Oh, you got me. You got
game.replicated
me. Unless that was
storage
actually a stupid
dot
pump
buy
fake because you wasted
button.
your chance.
And then what we'll do is make reference to our GUI,
bitch.
make reference to our prompt, and also make
bitch.
reference to our buy button.
Yeah,
so first we're going
Schnitzel.
to make reference to the
Ooh,
GUI,
come on,
which
bitch.
is
Come on,
located
bitch.
in the script's parent.
I'm the god
And
at
then we
tennis.
will locate
I almost be the
prompt,
final boss at my
which will be
school.
in the GUI itself.
Chris, what for Spurs, bro?
So GUI.prompt.
But I was talking about
and then
my story.
Finally,
I'm in a game
the
right
buy
now.
button.
Oh,
So
fuck.
buy button.
Just don't
It's
mash.
late, man.
GUI.buy
God, tell me ahead
button.
of time, man.
And now what we'll do is
Man, you gotta
we
tell me
will
3
make
days in
this
advance,
button
man. I
active
can't
fuck
when
with
we
you
today.
Come on,
press
bro.
it so that we can send the message to the
Don't edge
server
me here.
using our remote function. So in here, let's create a
Wait.
mouse
Whoa.
click event. So we'll say
That went through my. That
buy
went through my
button
shoulder.
dot
That went like under my
mouse
armpit.
button, One
No
click.
fucking way.
Colon connect.
Go. Okay.
Function.
God damn it.
Open
You
parentheses, close
stop my.
parentheses, enter. So here's the really interesting thing about remote functions that makes them unique
bitch.
compared to
Yeah,
remote
I get it, yeah, I get
events. So in order to fire the remote
Okay,
function,
so we
much
got
like
fucking
remote
Magneto
events,
over here,
all we
bro.
need
He
to
really
do
threw his
is
fucking.
use the
He really
function
threw his
provided
fucking
to
magnet.
call
magnet.
whatever
His
side of the
fucking,
game you want to.
I can't believe
Rack
people
out
actually
on the
took it
other
this
side.
So in this
far.
case, since we're in the
It's really
client,
not that hard.
we want to fire to the server. So you might say buy button
Oh my
remote
god, I hate
colon
Siri
fire
so
server.
much.
But fire server is surprisingly not a function you can use for
How was that
remote
fault, bro? I
functions
saw that shit hit the
because
line.
Fire server is very specifically a function for
Oh
remote
my
events.
god. What's
So
the
in this
fucking
case,
point?
what we're going to say instead of fire server is we're actually going to replace fire with invoke.
Okay, so why
So
why
this
are you
is the
lighting up
function
green
you
if
need
I
to
can't
use
fucking hit
in
it
order
there?
to make a call to the server. And
Okay.
in terms of parameters, it's
Some
basically
things
the
that
same
matter.
thing with invoke server, and in this case, the other one is invoke client, where
There we go, there we
don't
go,
need to pass
finally.
in
I'm
a
getting back-
player
I'm getting
if
in this
we're
shit.
calling from the client to the server.
All right,
but
now I
if we're going
understand.
to pass in arguments, then we're going to need to do that for here. So it's basically structured the same way as a remote event. And the way we're going to catch this function call
Yeah,
is
okay,
by
I
doing
understand.
it
Don't
from the
listen to these
server.
fucking
So
indicators
let's
they give
copy
me. That shit's
this
fake.
reference up here with control
Now I'm
C,
understanding this
and then we're
shit.
going to go to our leader stats script.
Yeah, I
Let's
got
drop
it
2
now. I
lines
got
down
it
here.
now. I'm
Paste
like
that.
Jotaro. I just needed a couple of
And then down
rounds. Now
here-
I know what to do.
The syntax here is going to be a little
Oh my
weird.
God.
Like with invoke
That was a
server
fluke.
not being fire server, there's a special syntax for
This
catching
Ah.
this invoke server call, and it's not on server event, but instead it's going to be on server.
Oh my god,
invoke.
that's not
So
fair.
this
That's
is
not
what it's
fair.
gonna
How do I
look
flick
like.
it
It's
up?
going to be buy button
If I lose this, I lose.
remote dot on
That's
server
such bullshit.
invoke.
But when he does
Now,
that,
you
it
might
doesn't
be
fucking
tempted
matter.
to say colon connect.
Now you see why
function,
tennis is so
open parentheses,
stupid.
close parentheses, and
Only
enter.
girls play it.
This is actually incorrect. This is not
What
the
the
right way
fuck?
to
I'm sorry,
write
dude.
the syntax for
kinda
on-server invoke,
sexist.
even
How
though
is that
this pretty
sexist?
much
That's
is what it
stupid.
is
Is
like
it true,
for
though?
on-server event. So you might
My
ask,
girlfriends will be hearing
why
about
is
this.
it not
You like
like
secrets?
on-server event? Why is the syntax incorrect here? It's important to
bitch.
understand the
Come on.
difference
My 7
between
evil
a
Yeah.
will be hearing
and
about this.
That's
an
what I'm talking about.
You're
I will
7,
explain what
you
the
fucking-
difference is once
Yeah,
we finish
7-0.
writing our code.
I think-
As
I
of
think
right
this
now,
this guy thinks
what
he's
we need
Chris
to know
Pilgrim.
is that
Yeah,
this
this guy
is
thinks
not
he's
the
Charlie
right way
Murray.
to
Ooh,
write
come
the
on, dude.
on-server
Charlie Murray.
invoke syntax.
Oh,
because
this
is
is
a little
not
bitch
correct.
left.
This is a callback.
That's
Then,
not
The
what
way
it's about.
you structure a
And
callback
Scott
is
Pilgrim's
that it's
about like I
basically a
think like a
function
band or something.
that
All
is
full of band,
structured
and they gotta
like
go to like
this.
hell or something.
So after
Oh,
on-server
okay, yeah, no,
invoke,
now that makes
we
sense.
say
Yeah, see,
equals
you almost forgot the story,
function
but I
because
brought
we
you
create a
back.
new function when we
Welcome back.
call this on-server invoke with the
Holy
open
shit,
parentheses,
the
close
fucking ink
parentheses.
fell.
And the parameters are basically the same way
Oh, I
as
missed. I'm so
a
trash.
on-server event call.
Oh,
So
well,
you know how
no,
over
I don't
here
anymore.
we have an on-server event call
Okay,
for
fuck
remote
it.
events.
Let's try and play
where
it.
the first
We're playing
parameter
telepathy.
implicitly
Oh,
gives
yeah.
you the player, and then you have whatever
Right.
other arguments you have over here. It basically works the same way here, where we are given the player when we call on server invoke.
Come on,
and then
let me
let's
get 4
hit
people
enter.
in here.
Now you might notice is that
Except
this
Big
end
Bob.
has no end parenthesis, while on server event
Shit, I don't even know how
does have an
info
end
works.
parenthesis.
Get in
so
here,
this is
brother.
something you have to keep aware of, is that there are tiny syntax
Brothers, please.
differences when it comes to using
God.
remote events and remote functions. And when you're calling
Smokes
on server
opium? Oh my
invoke,
God.
you have to set this equal to a new function that implicitly passes in the player, much like on
SpongeBob
server
and
event.
Oh my God.
Then
little
it returns, and then it stops
Little
this
Rizzler?
block
I don't
of
know, Little
code using
Rizzler,
an
what is
end
this, like, tiny
statement
skeleton?
without the end
These guys are
parentheses. So that's
mad
something
small.
important to
Oh
know
my
about here.
god. I don't
So
even
now
know
what
you can
we'll
get
do
that
is
small.
we will
in
make
Roblox.
reference
It's crazy.
to the player's coins and check if the player has enough coins to be able to
Oops.
buy
My
this button, and then we will subtract
that?
50
Is that
currency
a portal?
from the player's inventory.
My
So we're
bad,
going to
volley.
first make reference to their leader stats by saying local leader stats equals player dot leader stats,
Why is Roblox
and then
actually
we will
stupid?
make reference to the
Except for, like,
coins by
Gojo.
saying
Ah!
leader stats
I'm
dot
Inkfeld.
coins, and then we will check if
No.
coins dot value
Gojo, you
is
made
greater
it.
than or equal to 50.
All right, telepathy.
Then
Wait,
we're
why is there
going
only two
to
of us?
subtract
Gojo?
the coin's value by
Fucking
50.
bitch
We've
left.
now provided one-way communication from the
Hello.
client to the server
It's me,
to
the guy.
then tell the server whether
Okay.
the player can buy
Welcome to
this
telepathy.
button, and if they can,
Child, you can
then
type
we will
one
subtract the
word.
currency.
Can I actually type?
So right
The
now,
goal
this
is
is
to all
functioning
type the
pretty
same
much the
word.
same as
You will
a
get
remote
20 rounds.
event.
God
But
damn.
now let's get to the interesting
Try to focus
part
on what the others
that
are
makes
saying.
this stand out from remote
Everyone
events,
go.
and that is the two-way communication part. So I mentioned that we're able
I
to
could type.
invoke the server by calling invoke server and then telling the server to do what it needs to do here. But now let's actually send information
Undertale.
back to the client to let us know that the purchase has been
Yes.
successful,
Don't forget to put
so
on this
that we
yellow
can let
for
the
extra
client
points.
do something
That's a stupid
special
game.
when we know that the player
guy
was
said
able
Sigma.
to buy the button.
Okay.
So let's go over here and let's make a boolean by dropping two
stupid?
lines
Why would you say
at the very
Sigma?
beginning. So we'll say
Okay,
local
what do you mean by
purchase
Sigma?
successful
Okay.
equals
So you
And
know, you
then
never heard of
let's
Sigmund
drop
Freud?
a
I'm
line
gonna say
down
brain
here
rot.
after subtracting 50 coins
Never heard of Sigmund
by
Freud?
saying purchase successful equals true.
Ah,
So this basically lets
You're
us
saying
know
key? Are
that
you
if the
stupid?
player was able to successfully buy the button, then we set
Wait,
this
what's my
purchase
word
successful
though? Well,
boolean
we
to
don't know the
true.
words.
And now
Looks
what
like
we'll
you're
do
only.
is we're going to
this
go down
motherfucker
here
left.
and use the return keyword to return the purchase
Ah.
successful boolean. So not only are we invoking the server to buy this button and make computations to be able to get rid of 50 coins from the coin's value, we're also
Roblox.
passing back information
Everybody
to the
welcome to
client
Roblox.
to let us know that the purchase has been successful. And the way we will
Of
get
course.
the information
This is
back
switch
is by
everywhere on
declaring a
Roblox.
boolean and setting it equal to this function call right here. So behind our call, let's
No,
create
wait,
a variable.
the second
we will
Hawk's
call
coming to
this
help.
one
Thank God he's
local
here.
purchase
You can see he's like a
successful
Hux too.
equals buy button remote invoke server. So what's
Hey,
going to
Ron.
happen is that this
Ow!
is going to be
was that?
essentially a boolean that is set to whatever
Is it invisible?
this function call returns. So when we call invoke server to buy button remote, it's going to go to the server
I don't know
and
the
it's
stuff.
going to first
Bro, we
create a
just killed
boolean
them. These
called
fucking
purchase
leeches.
successful, and then it'll check whether the player
Oh,
can
hell
buy
no,
the
I know this
button.
bitch is gonna
If they
leave.
can,
I'm not
then
gonna
we're going to
bother.
set
Oh, my
purchase
goodness.
successful equal to true, and then we're going to return
gonna be Among Us
whatever
more.
the value of purchase successful is back to the client, which is going to
they
be
don't wanna
set
be here
here.
anymore.
What's
So
a
now
skibidi
this will
toilet?
tell the client whether we know that the purchase has been successful. And let's do that check down here by dropping two
No,
lines.
I'm not gonna
and
play with
saying,
you. You just
if
fucking leave.
purchase
I already know you do
successful,
this shit.
then, and when we just put in the boolean variable here, this is implicitly saying if
Oh,
this is
that's
true or
the
not.
ink.
If this
What
is
the
true,
fuck? That's
then what we
stupid.
will do is we're going to change the
This guy's
prompt
stupid.
text label. So this text label right here, we're going to change
Sorry,
the
man.
prompt's
I'm
text
not really a big fan of info
to
scenes.
purchase successful, so that we can really let the client know that the purchase has been
There's no
successful.
point in playing this game because
And let's
someone's
even
always
change
gonna
the
leave. There's no
background color
point
of
of
it
it.
too by saying
let's see what else I got.
prompt.background color 3 equals color 3 dot
Two-player
from
obby.
Oh, those
RGB.
are portals.
Let's
Oh,
click this
fucking
color
wonder.
wheel
Throw me,
and
dude.
let's pick light green. And so this will let us know whether the purchase has been successful or not.
Oh, why?
But we can
Who
also make a
is
check to
that?
see if it
Ninjutsu?
wasn't successful.
No, Dobby, do
And
not
we will do this
come.
by dropping
No,
a line down
run.
here and saying
Can't
else.
play like
And now
a
down
honest
here,
friend.
let's just copy this code over here and paste it down here. So then we will say purchase
No, I'm not playing
failed
any
instead
simulator
of
ever.
success, instead of it being successful. And let's
Especially in
also
a
change
fucking
this color
RNG
to red.
thing.
So now we've successfully made
Fuck
a remote
that.
function that basically allows the player to press a button
All right,
to
fuck
buy
it.
that button
Chicken.
by calling the server and telling us whether the
My
player
name
can
is
buy this
Joel
button or
Gritty.
not. And if they can,
Oh my God.
then we will send information back
Hello,
to
daily
the client
reward.
to tell us
Oh, there's a bunch of
that
chickens
the
here.
purchase was successful so that we can do whatever we
What's up,
want
chickens?
to do after we get this information.
Okay, whoa.
So let's go into the
Okay.
game
What do I-
and
what's the goal of
see
this
our
game?
results. All right, so I've loaded into the game. Let's see if we can
What
buy
do I
this
do?
button. So I have 50 coins up here, and this says, would you like to buy this button?
Chicken boss
Let's
in 3
click it,
minutes? Oh,
and
shit.
as you can see, the server has
Oh, you're on a place where they're like-
successfully decorated
yeah.
50 coins from my leader stats.
Whoa, what are
and
you saying on my
the
shit, dude?
text
Come
label
on.
has updated to say purchase has been successful.
How do I take
Now
your
let's see what
eggs?
happens if I press it again. It'll then tell the server
I'm sorry,
to check
I'm sorry.
whether the player can buy the button.
Okay,
or
okay,
not,
okay, wait,
which
wait,
In this
wait.
case,
They're all
we
mad, they're all
can't
mad.
because we have 0
Okay,
points,
what do we do,
not
what do we do?
50. So then we told the server that this is not
Chill
possible,
out, man.
and we sent the information back to the client
Chill
by
out, man.
saying
What
it
I
was
put the
not
eggs?
possible.
What I put the eggs,
So then
son?
we could update this text label to say the purchase has
God.
failed. And so we have successfully
God, he
used
wants
a
me.
remote function to
Ah!
make two-way communication with
What
the server
the
and client
fuck?
so that we can pass
That cheating
information
bitch
around
spawned on top
and
of
do
me.
what it is we need to do with
Damn, they just
that
murdered him.
two-way communication from the server and client. Now there
What
is
if I
another
just take all your
method
eggs right now?
for this two-way communication because what we did was go from the client to the server and then back to
How
the
about I
client.
stack them?
The second method we can do is from the server to
Ooh,
the client
shit, I'm
and
sorry.
then back to the server. However, what I can say to that
You're in my way,
is
bitch, you're in my way,
I actually
bitch.
advise not to do this from communicating from the server to the client and then back to the server because
Oh, like,
the server
name the song.
basically has
Damn, we
access
just kicked my
to
ass.
That's
all
not
the
it.
information that a client already has.
Give me that
So
shit.
there's no need for a server to communicate to the client to get information.
What?
Our
Our membership ran out?
To send it back to the server. There's just no need for
Sparking
that.
Zero.
What you could
Oh,
do
man.
instead is
You
just
get it
use
now.
a remote
My
event
Kakai to the
that
game flip and go
communicates
buy one
from
now.
the
No, you
server
gotta do this,
and then
this
to
shit.
the client
Well,
so that
I
the
just
server
bought-
can tell the
it
client
was
what
on
to
me.
do
The membership,
rather than
yeah.
having
Okay, my
to
bad. Alright, we'll get it.
fetch
Kakai, go.
information from the client. Because we don't
This
need
guy, I'm
information
not
from
gay,
the
what?
client because the server already knows
What? I
everything
can't take
that
more
a
than
client
one?
does. So the only use
I'm
case
like
I can
gonna
say
stare at
to
a screen.
remote functions is by communicating from the
But what do I
client
do
to
with
the
these?
server and then back to the client. That's the only
That's
use
not
case
fair.
I can see with remote.
How does this have
Well, I
94%?
think-
At least in my opinion,
What the
from
fuck is
my
this some
time
stupid chicken
developing
game?
Roblox games. That's the only use
I
I've
see
seen
it's
with remote
alright, but
functions.
like,
Now
I
you might
hate that
ask,
guy.
why does the syntax for
Mm,
on-server invoke look like this, where we need to create a new function and
presentation
not have
experience.
an end parentheses
Either
by
get
the
a
end
boner
here, rather than
or
doing it like
get a
this
boner.
with remote events with the colon connect function and end.
Isn't that what
It's
happens to
important
you,
to
dude?
understand the
When you get a
difference
presentation,
between
you always
events
gotta
and
get me
callbacks.
out.
So
You get a boner?
events are
Yep.
basically a signal
no.
that gets fired
Come on,
when
like, I know
something
you know what I'm talking
happens
about.
when we call the function of the
Then you
remote
do the
event
penguin
to
walk
then
when you get
catch
up
that
there.
event using
You gotta stick it in your
colon
pants. And you're
connect.
like,
This is
okay.
specifically for events
Like,
when they
alright,
have to catch
everybody.
the,
Like,
okay,
the
this
event.
feels good.
But
And
in
then
the way
that shit just boings out like that shit just boings out
Server
like your speed. Like,
is that
boing.
a callback is
Oh my
basically a
God.
function that is passed as an
Chicken,
argument to
I can't
another
even
function,
fucking click
and then
it.
it is called to
Whoa.
execute code
Crazy
after a
POV.
task is complete. Because the whole point
some dumb
of a two-way communication is that
The impact
when
of
we
social media.
communicate from one side, which is the client, to the server, and
Yeah, it
we
weighs heavy on
rely
my
on
nuts.
information from the server to be sent
Might-
back to the client,
this might be
the
this-
code does not continue until we get the results
That's
from
pretty good.
this callback
It's that
to then
stupid
continue
fucking,
executing whatever
news
else
guy,
it is
you know,
we
he's
need
like,
to execute
"Nah,
down
nah,
here.
nah, nah."
But an event call can
Yeah,
happen
yeah, yeah,
multiple
yeah.
times and execute without having to wait for results.
Get
to
out, I
happen.
can't click
I hope that makes
anything.
sense. Imagine if you had two parts here that have a touch event.
I just like
where
sped
if
up.
a player constantly stepped on this part, then it'll keep on firing events
what's
to
up?
then to
do
execute whatever
that?
it is that we need to execute
Nah,
here.
nah, nah,
But
nah.
a callback relies on the information to be received back to whatever party called that function. In this case, we cannot have so many of these invoke calls
Well,
at the
any
same
points?
time as we do with events. I don't
Oh,
know
what
if
was the
that
points?
made sense to you. I really hope you kind of get the feel of what I'm trying to say here. But that is essentially why the syntax difference matters between a callback versus an event. Other than that, everything else is still pretty much the same.
Let's go.
It's just the little syntax
Dog,
difference that you
my
need to be able to
dick. Damn
understand
you.
why
Damn
it
you
is
to
the
the
way
J's
it
too.
is.
All
So
right.
for
That
this
might be
last
one of the
part
stupidest
video,
games I've
I'm
played in
actually
a
going to
minute.
make this into a challenge. And I'm
What's
not
up,
going to lie to
Diggs?
you, this challenge is
Oh, I
actually
knew
going to be
something
very
like
fun.
Diggs.
At least I think so anyways. Because essentially what we're
That's what
going
my
to
friend
do
did.
is
That's what
we're
my
going
friend
to
used to
create
say.
a
That was like
tools
his
shop
motto.
system using
What's up,
everything
Diggs?
we learned
So
up until
he's
this
just-
point.
are these just
And
like
there's
real
3
Diggs?
requirements I
Real
have for you
Diggs?
to do while you try doing
he's
this
gone
challenge on your
forever.
own first, and then coming back to see what I do once we go
he's
through this
not.
challenge together.
He's just
So the
watching
first
Max and
requirement
chill.
I have for you is to use a remote function.
All this is watch Max and
Obviously,
Goonies.
because
He's watching-
that's the title of this episode.
he's just watching
The next
Professor
requirement
Max's
is
and
to
chill.
make at least 3 buttons or tools
Maybe you're
for
right.
this shop system. You can either go
Come on,
to
Fat, you don't know?
the
Fuck it.
toolbox to
McDonald's
look at some
restaurant, let's try
tools
this
for you
out.
to use inside of your game, or you can try creating your own tools for your shop. But either way works for you. The third
we're gonna
requirement
work
is
at
I want you to
McDonald's.
Go to a
use
food
We're gonna work at
the clone
McDonald's.
function to
Of
take
course.
the
We are
bought
currently
tool
offering limited time
inside of
kitchen
the player's
manager
backpack
rank.
after
You,
the player
oh,
has
shut the
bought
hell up. I'm not paying
whichever
that much
tool
money.
that they purchased in the shop. And if you don't remember how to
Alright,
do
let's
this,
see this
I
shit.
highly encourage you to refer back to my
How are these
tools
people
episode
dying?
where I went through a bunch of properties that will definitely help you with this challenge. So just putting that out there before you start this challenge. So with that being said, pause the video,
Man,
try this
son.
challenge out on your own first, and then come back and we'll go through this together.
Hold on, I might
Alright,
get
so
covered
first
for this
thing we're gonna
music, but
do,
Loki
for
goes
the
hard.
sake of time, we're
There's
just
a
going
cop
to
here.
find 3 random tools in
Ooh,
the
I'm
toolbox
putting online. Oops.
and just use
What the
that
fuck?
and just use those.
Is that
as your
Marge
tools.
Simpson?
So I think first thing down here, I can actually
Ew.
see that there's the linked sword uploaded by Roblox.
It's like
So
gross
let's
Marge
add that
Simpson.
in. Let's hit OK. Put tool in the starter
Let's
pack.
see.
Yes, let's do
What do I
that.
want for my order?
Okay,
Can
and
I
let's
get
look for 2 more.
10,000
So I'm
water
just gonna
cups?
search up tool, and let's look for 2 more things. So there's a flashlight tool. Let's just take this.
Hey, hey, stop!
And
Hey,
it looks like
stop
there's
picking
also a
shit!
knife, so we
Hey,
might as well
get
take
the
that
fuck
as
out.
well. All right, and they all should now
But do you
be
think this
inside of our
tumor
starter
thing will
pack.
work?
Let's also
Tumor?
rename these tools to make it more
The
simple.
two one.
So we'll call classic.
Sometimes
sword
you gotta make sure
sword.
that
we will call flashlight
Whoa!
flashlight.
I
and
will
then
take
keep knife as it is.
double
Now, we need a place to
cheeseburger.
store these tools so that we can fetch them by the server. And probably one of the most
You know what?
ideal
I don't know why
places
people
is
say
server
the
storage. So
the
let's
fish fillet
actually
is
take
bad. It's really
all
not
of
that bad.
these tools and
People
let's
hate on
put
that
them
shit, but it's
inside
not
of
even that
server
bad.
storage. Now what we'll do is create
get
a
the fish
shop.
burger.
So let's create another screen GUI here.
No, it's not
Let's
that it's
rename
bad.
this
Because
to
almost
shop.
nobody orders
Let's
it.
just
They
open up
like
our
they
previous
probably
screen
just put it in like a
GUI,
microwave
and let's
or something
copy
and just
everything that's into
do it
here
there.
by
Come
hitting
on,
Control
dude.
C.
That's why you always have
and
to ask
just
for it for free to be
pasting
fresh.
it all.
They won't
into
make it
here
fresh,
so
they
that
just
we
put it
don't-
in the-
so that
the
we can
thing
just
again,
reuse
just
what
say,
we already
"Hey."
have. So for our prompt,
Yo,
let's
man.
change the
It's
text
true, bro.
to
Yeah, they'll just put it for 2 more
Welcome
minutes.
to
and then,
my-
alright,
Yeah,
good.
2 more
shop.
minutes. It's steaming hot, so
And
don't look
let's
at it
just
until you go
censor
home.
This a little bit, and let's also make this buy button
how they
one
get you,
of
dude.
the tools. So let's say sword.
Focus
For
where you did.
instance.
Show you
Let's
the
rename
tool.
this
Whoa,
to
what the
sword.
fuck? Where
And
let's
let's
8
change
pounds.
this text to
Why are these all
buy
in pounds?
sword. And ideally, we should make all these tools
Alright, I'll get
different
a
prices.
vanilla milkshake.
So let's make this sword.
And I might as well
10
get a
coins.
chocolate one while
Let's
I'm
just
here, you
move
know?
this
For the
over
road.
here to the
$9
left, and
for
then
6.
let's duplicate it and move this to the center.
I'll get, I know, I'll
And
get a
let's call
big
this
deluxe.
one
And then I'll get
and let's change the
chicken
text to
mayo sandwich.
flash
And then I could just put the
and let's
chicken
even
patties
change
instead of the beef ones, and I
amount
can be like
to, let's
Kais and
say,
Gat.
15. All right.
What the fuck
And
happened to my
let's
machine?
duplicate
It's
that again,
broken.
Put it over here. This one is going to be the knife, and we will make this knife 20 coins.
So did I order too much
Knife.
stuff? There's no way.
20 coins. So this
Huh.
is now what our shop should look
Okay,
like
let's reach my
on the
limit.
GUI side.
Whatever.
But now let's
do
open up
chores.
our
Oh no, I can do more.
script inside of our shop.
Okay.
And
I can't.
first thing
The
we will
fuck?
do is
Fine, I'll
instead of
check
make
out.
reference to one buy button, we need
Insert
to make
card.
references to all 3 buttons so that we can make all of them functional. So what we're going to do is rename buy button to
Debit card.
sword button and
Authorized,
change
let's
the
fucking
reference
go.
to sword. And let's copy and
Good
paste
thing I stole this off the
2
counter.
more times so that we can get references to the other buttons.
Oh
So
my
this
god,
one
it's blue.
will be
What the fuck?
Flashlight. So this one's going to
That
say
shit looks like it
flashlight.
bluey and like the.
This is going to say
It looks like Bluey and
This
the
is
other
going to be
the other
And
like dog,
so
like
let's
future.
just change
Yeah,
this
whatever the
variable
fuck,
here
I forgot their name.
to
It looks like
I think it's called
And
Bandit.
It
in
looks
order
like
to
a
make
Bluey,
all
yeah,
these
this looks like
buttons
Bluey and
functional, we
Bandit,
need
like,
to
did like a
copy
fusion
what
dance.
we have with our code and just paste it in.
Because he has like the brown
Now,
dog's
this
head and
already
then like
does
the
look
blue
pretty
dog's like
messy.
middle,
I
and
would
then the
not
brown dog's
recommend
legs.
doing it like this. What I would recommend
yeah,
is
wait,
putting
what the
all of
fuck
these
just
buttons
happened?
inside of a table
Ah!
and looping through that table
What
so
the
that
fuck?
you can just
I
write
guess I'm
this
sorry, dude. I
code
splurged.
section only one time.
I
You don't need
splurged
to
on
write
the
it, like,
I
three
splurged on the
different
floor
times
and then I
like
slipped on that
And
shit.
so now we need to figure out how we can pass in this
It's like,
information to the
so
server
good, dude.
to know which button is being pressed.
Okay, well there's a
What we
shrimp
can
in
do
here.
inside of the server
Remember in
is
training.
create additional parameters to
Can I
let
be like
us
that guy who
know
like goes in the
which
back of the
tool we're
McDonald's and
trying
just
to
like
look
puts a
for
broom in like the air
when
in
we
the
are,
fryer?
making this purchase. So let's
I've
actually
seen that
create
video.
two
That video is
parameters here.
amazing.
So the first one is going to be
Is this the bathroom?
tool name.
Where's the bathroom
And then
at?
the second parameter is going to
I
be
gotta destroy
the
your
tool
toilet.
price. When we implicitly call player, we want to pass in these two parameters as well so that
Come
we
on,
know
dude, let me
which
in.
tool we're trying to look at. So let's go back into our local
Come on, dude,
script
just stupid. Let me
and
in.
let's add in our additional arguments.
Come
Now
on,
remember,
bro, just like break through
player
that shit.
is
It's kind of your whole
already
thing.
implicitly being thrown into here, so we can
This
skip
dumbass is trying to use like
throwing
key
in
card
player.
on a fucking
What we do
lock,
need to
a
put
door
in
lock.
is the tool name and the tool price. So
Oh, these
in
McDonald's workers are
quotations, we're going to
stupider than I
say
thought.
sword, and then we'll space it out with a
Bro,
comma,
how are these people
and
dying
we'll put
out
in the
here?
price, which is going to be 10 coins. And then we will do the same thing down here
getting hit
with
by
the
cars?
flashlight.
Welcome to Game Pass.
I meant to
Oh!
change these
Nice.
to
Huh. What
have you
flashlight button,
So I
and
guess
then
we got
down
fucking
here
invisible
to
No,
cars.
it's fuck.
knife button, so
hottest
that we're not
games.
doing this like
Fucking hate
Like Diablo
McDonald's.
4.
and so now inside of our invoke function, inside of our invoke server function here, let's call this one flashlight, and this one
is there
is
so
going
shadow
to be
boxing here?
15 coins. So now down
Alright,
here,
fuck
we're
it.
going
We're
to
doing
say
more security
knife,
simulator. That's how bored I am.
and this one's going to be 20 coins. So now we are
don't even
effectively
care
passing
anymore.
in arguments
Join my
into
event. Shut the fuck
this into this callback so that we
All
know
right, time to put some
which tool
criminals
we're talking
in my
about.
jail cell.
And so first thing we can do is replace our coins value
Where's my taser
condition.
at?
Instead of it
No,
being 50
don't tell me I don't
all
get
the
a
time,
taser, bro.
let's replace this with the tool price, and we will do the same thing down here
Wait,
when
wait,
we remove values from the coins.
AK?
So now we have
Oh,
that done.
fuck,
But
I only have
now
zero-
what
I
we
only
will
have
do
$0.
is we're going to
How do I
get the
get
tool
more money?
from server storage,
Suck
use
my
the
dick for 500.
tool clone function, and then put it inside of the player's backpack. The way we're going to do that is by
Been like
dropping
over
two lines
suckers.
down
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
or actually 3
I don't
lines.
give a fuck.
After we
I know-
after
I know
we
who to-
know
I know
that
who
the
to put
player
in
has
jail.
enough to be able to buy this tool, we're going to first
Don't worry,
check
man.
in
I have like
server
I have like a
storage to
sixth sense for
see
this shit.
if we're able to find the tool that we're looking for. So what we're going to
Hey,
say is local
hold on.
tool equals
I think you might have something I
game.server
want,
storage,
little lady.
and we need to check if it's here. So we're going to say
I can't even check you.
find
Hello?
first child, open parentheses, close parentheses.
Okay,
and
mall's
inside of
closing.
Here,
Let's
we're
look
going
for
to
some
pass
suspicious
in
people.
Our tool name.
I'm not
Tool
following you because
name.
of something.
Because our tool
I just
name
have like a feeling
could be
about you.
Sword or flashlight
I'm-
or knife. So we're trying to look
No,
for
what's
this
she trying to
inside of
find?
our,
Google
inside of
20
our server
decillion
storage. And now let's check to
dollars
see
over
if it actually
Holy
does
shit!
exist.
Oh,
So we'll
there's
say
a fucking
if
there's a guy
tool
shooting people.
then we're going to create a clone of that tool
Yeah, it was like
and put it
what,
inside of
2
the player's
decillion
backpack.
or
So we'll
something like
say
that. Russia's
local
No, 20 decillion.
clone
I'm gonna print.
not 20 decillion.
I'm gonna print it and
tool,
see that guy just shooting
colon,
civilians.
clone.
It says Google so
open
far
parentheses,
has ignored their
and
demands.
then
Hey,
we're going to
hey, wait.
set the parent of
think
this
you're
clone
evil.
tool. So cloned tool dot parent equals the player's backpack.
I'll let you go
which is
for
going to
now.
be
I
player
mean, honestly, what's Russia gonna do,
backpack.
dude? Google has goo guns.
So
Oh, hell no,
now
no.
we have
You're definitely
successfully allowed
Who guns at
the
the
server
headquarters?
to check whether
Yep.
this tool exists.
So I guess we have
inside of server
Diavolo in
storage.
this game now.
And if it does,
They just
like, let's
stretch
say
their
it's a
they
sword,
stretch their G into
then
an
we're
assault
going to
rifle and
clone this tool, and
destroy
we're going to
everyone.
place
hell?
this inside of the player backpack.
I really changed like I'm
while
That's what they
Goku.
also
do.
No, not even
decrementing
that. I changed
the
like I'm
coins
Goku.
value,
I just put like
while
my
also
security clothes on.
telling the client that this
Hey,
purchase has
what
been
are you still doing in
successful,
here? Stop.
and we're going to send this information
You look
back to the
suspicious for
client.
some reason. I just
So
can't put my finger
we're
on
pretty
it.
much done here. this was basically our whole
Let you go
script.
for now.
Now again,
I'm
there
following
are
you.
definitely better ways
Oh my
of
god, they finally have
handling
Snoop
this
Dogg in
code, especially
Fortnite.
this right here, when we're
No.
duplicating a lot of stuff by using a table and then looping through all those buttons inside of a
Oh,
loop, rather
okay, I
than
was getting
creating
my ass
3
kicked
different
bad.
mouse button one-click events.
Is that a new?
But
I didn't know.
Hey,
other than that, I'd
trying to
say
fucking hit
our
me.
system would be pretty good, so let's test it out.
Is there
inside
new
of our
M&M in
game.
there?
Oh my
Alright,
God,
so we've
awful
loaded into the
version.
game.
I could swallow.
have 50 coins,
Wow.
and let's see what
Alcohol.
So
happens
you're
if I
like,
try buying the sword. So
it sounded like
as
you
you
were
can see,
underwater.
the first thing that happened was that it checked if
That
we
was
had
funny.
enough
What
is
coins
that?
for 10,
That
and
Ice
it
Spice?
did. So we decremented 10
Ice
coins.
Spice?
Do they have
After
M&M in
buying
there?
the sword. The second thing that happened was
M&M's
that
there.
the server
M&M,
checked
Ice Spice,
server
and
storage
Snoop Dogg.
to
I
see
can swallow.
if it had the sword we were looking for. And it did. So the server created a clone of this tool
My
and
whole
put
squad's
it
in here.
inside
What are
of
you
our
What?
doing,
backpack. So
bro?
if we
You're just
open
beating
up
up that
players,
random
Meowscles,
dude.
player, and then go to
Midas.
backpack, we can see
Well, you're gonna
that
kill
our
him.
sword has successfully been
Come
placed.
on, just put him in
No,
jail.
we get
Put
the
him in
Snoop
jail.
Dogg bomb. It's like a
Hey,
bomb.
put him in
That
jail.
makes him,
So that
it makes it do
Alright.
successful.
That makes him
and the last
smoke
thing that
weed.
happened was that the
Yeah,
server
that too.
sent
Chris
the
Ray doesn't
message
do that
back
anymore.
to the client to tell us that the
Alright,
purchase has
you
been
criminal.
successful.
We're going
Therefore,
to
we updated this text
I
label to
believe
say
it.
the
the
purchase
jail
has been
cell.
successful.
What?
And
The
we
jail
did all
cell.
of those things using remote functions.
These are
Now let's see
criminals
what
like you
happens if we
belong.
try buying a flashlight. We can see that
Stay
we
in there.
now
Think
have
about
the
what you did.
flashlight inside of our backpack,
Snoop
and we also
Dogg.
decremented 15
Did you
coins
join or no?
from
They
buying
just
this
still
one.
say you got
Now let's
the-
try
Yeah, just
buying the
join-
knife,
Get the Xbox
and
Ultimate.
we have also successfully bought the knife, so it works as intended.
Right now.
Now let's try buying something else.
Hey,
we
you
can't
criminal.
afford anything now, so let's try buying something. And as
beating
you
your
can
ass
see, the
right
purchase
now.
has failed because now we only have 5 coins and not at
right,
least
a
10
head kick.
to buy any of these. So
now talk.
we're basically done here. And what we got out of this was a pretty nice shop
fuck?
system that allows us to be able to buy these
that guy
tools.
just murdered
So
an innocent.
I hope you found this
from
challenge
my
to be very
face.
interesting. I definitely had fun explaining how
think
this
we're the bad
shop
guys.
system worked, and I think we're starting to be able
I
to
thought
apply
security
our
guards were the
skills
good ones.
to be able to create actual systems
kill
inside
me.
of our games. So I think this was
I
definitely a
gotta
fun
pause the
challenge to do. So that's going to be it for this episode on remote functions. I hope you
You know, I
learned a
might as
lot
well
from
try
this
it on
episode.
Xbox,
We were
you
able
know.
to create a
Even though
shop
it's kinda
system
stupid 'cause you
using
kinda need
everything
voice
we've
chat
learned
for this
up until
game.
this point. And I think we're
Might
starting
as
to
well
make
just
more and
play
more
the fish
progress
game.
into
Might as well play
creating
the
bigger
fish
and better
game.
systems for our Roblox games. And I hope
Is that
you'll
guy
be
talking?
sticking around for more episodes to come in the future. But other than that,
They
that's
just-
pretty
they
much
just
it
look
for
just
this
like the
episode.
therapy
Be sure to join my
game.
Discord server. The link is in the description. And I will see
It
you in
is.
the next
It just.
episode.
It has like the same
Take
layout
care.
as a therapy game, except it's like with the interviews instead. I can only imagine the crazy
Thanks for
stuff people
stopping
are saying in
by.
this game.
We're going to be introduced to a new data type that Roblox
Fucking
has
say
Why the
provided
fuck
for
does
us
this bot
called
know such
Vector
good
3.
combos?
So pretty much a Vector 3
They should learn from
is a value that
Damn.
allows us to manipulate
I really
specific
should have it this
properties
way.
inside of our 3D world.
I need to learn how to
Usually
stop
with
back
things that
shots.
have to do with positioning
super
of
counter.
parts
Super
inside of our
counter, dude.
world. So it's definitely a very
You have to
powerful
super
data
counter
type, which
do
is
that?
why we're going to be
Yeah, that's the only way you can
introduced
get
to
out.
how to
Yeah, you can
use
super counter
Vector 3
anything.
inside of our 3D world through scripting. And so I
Is it
basically
keyboards?
whipped up
I
like
don't
a
use
little
counter
example here
keyboards.
with this part. So
Five Nights
basically
at
what should happen is
Zacharias.
something magical when I click this part. What happens is when I click it, then bro, this part is just
Oops, I did not mean
flying
to put
by.
that.
It's just like
Alright,
sliding
well, I
all
guess
the
fuck it,
way
we're playing
out to
fucking,
somewhere that's not close to
gas
me,
station
because this part
simulator,
does not love
whatever
me.
the fuck this is.
But yeah, I basically
Oh,
just
just shut it, bro.
constantly changed the value of one of its positional values to go in this direction
Loading in
forever and ever
chunks.
after I clicked on it. So this is with the use of Vector 3. And
What the fuck
I'm going
is
to be
that?
showing you how to do this. But
Sounds like
before
fucking
we
8-bit
start
character
implementing
chomping
Vector
on someone's
3s,
head.
I want you to really understand how this all works, and I'm going to do that by showing you an example. Alright,
I've been
let's think
watching
about
too
this
much
for a minute.
pasta.
So, I'm in a game of Minecraft, and I know it's kind of weird, but
Come on,
trust
dude,
me,
enough
it'll make
creeps
sense.
with pasta.
Minecraft is
Come
a
on, dude, he's
3D
my
game,
guy.
and it has
You need
a
more
3D
Fortnite horse
world
He's my
that
OG
has
though.
3 directional values that correlate
Love
to
that
the
dude.
location of where the player is.
Now I can
inside of
pretend like
the
I'm the-
game,
I can pretend like
called
I'm the
the
7-Eleven
X, Y, and
guys
Z
with the
coordinates.
corners right
And
here.
if you want to see these coordinates,
I don't need to know how
you
to
have
play,
to
just
press
give me in this
F3
shit.
on your keyboard like this. That shows a bunch of statistics of the world that you're currently playing, but we're mostly interested
Didn't
in
I
the
just say
X,
just
Y,
give me in
and
this
Z
shit?
values on the left side. So as you can
Alright,
see,
what's
our
up,
X, Y,
everybody?
and
I'm
Z
the
value,
worker
our
here.
X
Am
being
I the
negative
manager?
16, our Y being
Am I the manager?
63, and then our Z being 239. If we move around
Wait,
inside
am I
of the
playing with other
workspace,
people? I am playing with
these
other people.
values
What the
are
fuck?
changing accordingly to where we are inside side of the
Alright.
world. So if I
Well, I
move
guess
in
I gotta
this
do this
direction,
shit.
then it's increasing the x value every time we move in this direction. So this
the fuck
is
do you have to
called
do?
the x direction. And if we move backwards, then we're decreasing our
Ah,
number
fuck,
in
I
the x
lost.
axis or coordinate. And now let's say we go this way.
Come on, why am I not
this
the manager?
is increasing our z value every time we move forward inside
I
of
still have
this
to choose a
direction.
plan?
But if we move backwards, then it's going
That's
to
it, restart?
continuously decrease our z value the further we go backwards. And the y, which is the
I have no
which is the second
funds.
value,
Mother
like how
fucker.
high we are in the workspace right now. So if I just fly up,
Oh,
then
okay,
you can
maybe I
see
should look at this
that
tutorial.
our y value is constantly increasing. And if I just drop back down, then
wait,
it goes all the way
give me a
back down
second.
to
I'll
where
figure it
we
out,
are
figure it out.
inside of the world. So these are the 3 positional values that represents a vector 3 if
Hold
you
on,
were
I'll
to
be in the
compare
action
this to
cones. Give me a
Roblox.
second.
But it's essentially the same idea. So this was
Wait,
just
we don't
something I
even
wanted
have
to
action
show
cones.
you
What am I doing?
before
No,
we
we do,
start
we do.
implementing this stuff, just so that you can get a better understanding of what the heck a vector 3 value is. It's pretty much a vector that
Make 'em
comprises of
slower,
3 values
slower,
called
like
the
higher.
x value,
I
the
like
y
it.
value, and the z value that can be used to change values of parts that are inside of our Roblox world. Not just with positions, but with sizes and rotation and all
Shit's
of
in
that
the
sort
way.
of stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing in this episode. Now that we understand it, let me show you what a
You're already
vector
putting
looks
shit
like
there.
inside of Roblox Studio.
My bad, dude.
So on the top right of the screen, I don't know if you have this, but this essentially shows us our
I do not know what
directional
the fuck I'm
values
doing.
with X, Y, and Z to tell us where inside of Roblox Studio our 3 axes are located. So if we go this way,
Not
then
bad,
it's
not
going
bad,
to
not
increase our
bad.
X value. If we go backwards, it's going to decrease our X value. And if
Okay,
we turn around,
you know what? This game
way,
actually doesn't look bad,
then
but the
we
problem is I don't know what the
increase
fuck
our
I'm
Z value by
doing.
going
I'll
this
come
way.
back to that later.
And of course, the Y value, it's basically determined by how high you are versus how low you are.
It
So
feels
now
like a
let's
game you play
translate
with
that to
friends.
a part when we insert it inside of Studio. So
You know,
let's go
fuck it,
here
I'll just
to
try this
model,
game. Whatever,
and
dude. I like
pick
card
part.
games.
So with this part, we can come down here to C frame.
Anime card
and
battle.
You can see that there's a property called position.
Like, bam,
Ignore
beep,
this
box
position
battle.
that's inside of the origin category. We're mainly focused
Shit, this
on
one
the
turned
C
heat on,
frame
it's so
position.
hot in this
So
fucking
this one
restaurant.
basically shows us our X, Y, and Z coordinates, just like in Minecraft. So if we select this part, select move, and move it in this direction, it increases
fucking
our
sound.
Z value. If we make it go back this
Come
way,
on here, it's
it
paid for a
decreases our
Fortnite
Z
ad.
value. And if we make the part
Let's
go
see this
this
shit.
way, it decreases our X value, and if we make it go this way, then it increases our X value. And of course, the same thing for the Y
fuck
value.
it.
Increase it goes up here, and then just goes back
Bring
down
it.
here. So that's pretty self-explanatory. We can even change individual values of our
These
X,
Luffy
Y, and Z
AI
position.
images.
So we can make this 5, for example.
What the fuck? Why is it
this
just one
makes it
card?
5.
Just
and then
lying
for
there.
Z, we can make it 10. It goes
Good.
this way. So you get the basic idea. Our position consists of 3 values, X, Y, and Z, that's basically contained inside of one data type
This guy.
called a vector 3.
This guy's in
And
green
now
Hills
I'll
on
show
it.
you what it looks like in a script.
Came back a
So what we're
signal.
gonna do is on the right side, let's click on the
Hey,
plus
man,
sign and
look at
add part, and let's insert a script. And we're first going to make reference to
Oh,
our
what the
part,
fuck did
which
we
is
do?
going to be local part equals script.parent. And then what we'll do is we're going to change the position
Hey,
of
you
the
stupid
part when we
card, stop
run
following
this
me and do
script
something.
inside of our game. So currently
ghost.
right now, our position
Holy
is
shit, that scared me.
-12, 0.5, and -11.
Hey, it's
Let's
Mrbeast,
change
huh?
it to something different. Let's change the position when
Luffy,
we run
show
the
'em what's
script by
up.
saying part dot
Oh
position
my god, my Luffy got one
equals.
tap. Oh, I
Now
have a
to
7-man. Let's
understand
go.
how
Oh my
to actually
god.
create this new vector value,
Just
and we will
kicked my
do that by
7-man's
using a new constructor. And the way it's going to look is something like this. We're going to say
That's a
vector
big universe for the
3
cat.
dot new, because we're
I
constructing
love
a
that video.
new vector3 value full of 3
dog.
different numbers
Oh,
put
another
inside of
tiny
here.
cat.
So we're going to say
Isn't
open
it-
and
Oh,
close
sorry.
parentheses.
Let's
Now
do-
inside of
it's like
here,
it's like a
we're first going to
like a
put in our
bite-sized dog.
new x value, which we're going to say
Bite-sized dog.
10,
I don't
and
really
then
know how to explain
our
him. He's
new
really small,
y
but he's
value,
kinda
which we'll just
chunky.
say 3, and then our
Like a
new
pug?
z value, which is going
I wouldn't
to be
say a
let's
pug
say
either.
10
It
again.
doesn't look like
So
one for sure.
effectively, this is going
So
to
pugs have a
replace
very
the
distinct
part's
pug?
position, which is currently
No,
this
I don't
value
think I've
right
ever
here,
even seen a
-12,
baby
0.5,
pug. That's
negative
an
11,
evil pug?
to this
Maybe.
new value,
Those are
which is going to be
pretty
10,
evil,
3, and 10. So let's go to the game,
Richard, you had a
hit
pug, right?
test. We're going to
Yeah,
hit
that's
run because we don't need to play the game
You-
in order
you
to
do-
see
no,
this.
they do the
And as you
pug
can
chant.
see,
Pug
the
chant.
script ran and it automatically
I
changed
remember when
the
I
position
came
of
over to your
this
house and
part
told him to
when
roll
we
over and he just
ran
stood there and
this
looked at you.
script to change
Yeah, he's
its
some stupid
position
chud.
to this new value
Ooh,
right
I
here.
got candy.
So To reiterate,
I guess you
a
just didn't
vector
feel like
3
doing any
is a
tricks
data
there.
Oh, I
type
could roll.
that
Okay,
holds
let's see.
three
Stop
numbers:
following me, stupid
the x
card.
value, the y value, and the z value.
what I got.
To change the position of this part. But vector 3s can
stupid
be used
AI
for
slime.
other than functions. So if we look more into this part, let's look at some properties that also have three values. So for
I got
instance,
these slime
I
words.
got 0.
has an x, y, and z.
Zero.
Our orientation, also known as our rotational value, has an x,
got
y,
zero
and z, so we
again?
can use vector 3s for that. And then
Okay.
some other
I got some
stuff
stupid
like assembly
Cybermen?
linear velocity and assembly
Thanks
angular
for
velocity
nothing,
that also
Skullgirls
has
team.
x, y, and
Stupid
z
slime?
values.
Our
So
new
anything
Skullgirls
that has
team.
3 values
But they
that
made the final
are
DLC,
comprised of
and
x,
the
y, and z
Skullgirls
values
DLC.
is deemed a vector
Yeah, they made it
3
like.
data
I'm
type.
pretty sure they made the
Now
DLC
let's
more
do
than the
some
game.
vector
Prince of
operations.
Saiyans.
And what I mean is,
Wait a
adding,
minute,
subtracting,
wait.
multiplying, and dividing,
Oh, they're not getting any.
I'm being
all
exploited
those
right
basic
now.
operations with multiple
I'll kill you.
vectors.
I mean, are
And
you
I'll show you a
bitches?
really
For my
easy example
playtime,
for this
I
one.
knew it.
So if we select our
I'm getting
parts, I don't know if you
exploited.
noticed, but
I haven't
and we
played
have
in
it
a
selected
while,
to our
so-
move tool, then it automatically shows our X, Y, and Z axes
Here I
to
thought
be
I
able
was
to
having
change
fun.
the location of the
The
part.
AI
But
image
now
just
what we're
get
gonna
it
do
away.
is basically take the position of this current part and add a new vector to it so that it'll just move in a certain direction rather than
I
having
can
a
read
whole
that.
new location. And we're gonna do that first by changing the position of this to something very easy to
Broly
grasp.
boost.
So let's just
What?
highlight this and make the position at the origin
Just as
of
pose?
0, 0, 0.
That's
So
not
we're
good.
going to select position and we're going to put in a 0, comma 0, comma 0. And so that's going to be located at the very origin. Let's take our spawn location and just move it a little bit so we can see
Let's go.
this
Wow.
part. And now our
Why is
part
lobby
is
so
in
small?
the origin
The
of the
fuck?
world. But let's also move
Six-
the base
six-
plate down a little bit so
630K
that
people playing
so that
even
the
this
part
small
has
lobby.
room to
What?
be able
I
to
can't
move
percent
freely
that.
without
That
being
sucks.
clipped through any parts. So let's change the Y value of the base plate to
Bro, why are you giving me the smallest lobbies?
8.5.
Or how much people can be
So
on
now-
lobby at once?
We should be able to see the part freely
Oh,
over
nice.
here with no issues. Let's also move this spawn location a bit over here. Okay, now essentially what we want to do is take this part, have its current location, which is 0, 0,
I'm angry
0,
now.
and add a number that
Bro.
goes in the Z direction. Like,
Alright,
let's say
Broly, we get it!
5 in this direction. So first what we're going to do is go to our script and let's delete this new vector 3 value that we created. And how we're going to change this position is by
go.
obviously
Oh,
getting
yeah.
the part's position first. So we're gonna say part dot position plus
Oh no.
vector 3
I don't know if you're
dot
dodging this. You
new,
look really close.
and we want to just
Damn it.
change the Z value to wherever it currently is plus 5. So what we're going to do is first put in our X value, which is going to be 0, comma,
shit.
our Y, which is also going to be 0, and then finally our Z
Fuck is up with
value,
this
which is
dude?
going to be 5. So
man
basically,
told
you.
we're
Oh, yeah.
going to take the parts position, which is just 0, 0, 0,
Up.
and then add that to a new vector with
Starting
0,
run.
0, 5. So in the
Broly.
end, this will end up resulting in
This guy's
a
been
new
cleaning his
vector
bed
3
for
position that
10
is
hours.
0, 0, 5. So
What the
let's see
fuck?
what happens
No,
if we
Kevin,
hit
let's
test
play the
and
game
hit
right now.
run. You should see that when the script fired, it moved
Oh!
the
My God,
position
I'm in a
of
fucking
this
game lag.
part to what it was at the beginning, which was 0, 0, 0, and then to 0, 0, 5.
Stupid
And the reason it
droid.
looks like this is because we have the part anchored, so it was
Ooh,
impacted
the
by
strong
gravity a little
droid.
bit. Let me
That
just
fucking
anchor this
hurt.
part so that we can really see the new
Oh, man,
vector
I
did it.
change. So if we select the part again, then as you can see, our
Oh, shit.
position is now 0, 0, 5 because its
Oh, but-
original position before the script ran was 0, 0, 0,
Ooh.
and then we added a 5 to the Z value to make it 0, 0, 5. I hope this basic example made sense a
Good
little bit
droid.
because when we use vectors, we are going to be using computations
Oh.
to get a new result from different vector values,
Oh.
like adding vectors, for instance. And there's also
I'm
another way of
number
writing
one.
this too. Instead of just reiterating
Shit. Oh.
part.position equals part.position plus
Backshot.
vector3.new, what we could do instead is
Oh.
delete this first part and
Check
we
it
could just put in a
away.
plus equals. This basically means the same thing as the one
himself
we
now.
had
Stupid
before,
Dolby
where
droid.
we basically take
Going
the
for that.
current part's position and add a new vector to that
Hey,
position,
stupid.
and we should just get the same exact result. It really comes down to preference which one you like to do more. I'm just letting you know this is also
Oh my
another way of
God.
just
Get the
taking the
shit out of
current
me.
part's position and adding a new vector.
What?
We can even do this
Wow,
with subtraction,
what
and
was
there's
that?
2 ways of doing subtraction. So the first way is just taking part.position and then subtract equals vector3
That's
dot new
crazy.
0,
Went
0,
under
5.
me and then
so
just
to make this
went
easier,
behind me. It really was
let's
like a 50-50.
change the syntax to part.position
Oh, thank goodness.
minus
Oh,
instead of what we had before.
Oh, I logged
So
off.
the parts position is going to be whatever the position it
I
currently
logged
is,
off, but
and then
that's funny.
subtract that by our new vector here. Now you have to be
Just
careful
kidding.
that
She says you win.
this is supposed to be a
I would have
5
won
and
too.
not
Just
a
show
negative
Michael.
5
Stupid thing.
because we are subtracting
Is that one that
this
was
vector.
lost?
So
Wait, you-
if
you-
we have
did
a
you have one
5
more
here,
character?
this essentially means
No, that was the
take
last
the
one.
z value and subtract it by
Wow.
5. So if we go
All
into the
because
game,
I
we should
couldn't
see that the
see
z
you right in
value will
front of
go in
me.
the other
I love
direction,
this game.
so it goes back here.
Maybe people
So
are right.
our
Maybe
z
they don't
value
follow
is
it.
now
Oh, dude, I just made like a
-5
short on that.
and not 5. There's another way of
About
writing
like how
this.
ass it was
We can
because like I
actually
said,
do
Michael was like bouncing me like a ball.
part.position plus
Oh, you
vector3
get
dot
the
new.
clip?
Yeah, I posted. I put.
-5.
It was.
No
now that I
way.
think about it, it's
Basically
crazy
give
like
us
that.
the
All those 3
result
bugs happened in the
as
same match.
subtracting a vector3.
Yeah, I
of
posted like a
5.
clip of that.
So as you can see,
This
it
was
basically
on the
did
YouTube, check it out
exact
there.
same
Oh
thing
my
as we did with
God.
subtraction.
Chris, do you hear that or is
except
it
we kinda
just me?
flipped the signs.
Yeah, no,
around
I hear it
because
from
as
Michael.
you
I don't
know
know what it is, though.
how math works. If you flip signs,
tell me, this
you
guy's
can
in the
basically
center
get the
round.
same result
Yeah.
in this way
See?
if you prefer to do it. So I just wanted to let you know that there's 2 ways of making
I'm
this
sorry,
calculation. And then of course
I
you
think I
have
did put you
multiplication and
down,
subtraction,
volume.
which I
That's,
hope
like,
you
way too
know
loud.
how those 2 operations work. So the way multiplication works is we're going to replace this plus sign with
I'm gonna
an asterisk.
put him
So this
at-
represents multiplication. And we're
I'm
going to
gonna put it at 50
multiply
because
the
that's way
current
too
part's
loud. That
position
shit hurt my ears.
to whatever new value we
Okay, I'll
have
put it
here
on
for
50.
vector 3.
Wow.
Let's get rid of this z value by putting in a 0, and let's change the x value to
I can't initiate.
2.
Brush change.
Oops, I
So
just
what's
wasted
going
my
to do
fucking
is
helmet
it's going to
kit.
take
I mean, not
the
really
x
wasted. I had-
value of this
Sweet.
part, which is 0, and it's
Lose
going to
all luck,
multiply
heal
it by
23
2.
trees.
Now, what
I
should
don't have any
happen
luck,
is
though.
that it's still
that?
going to be in
Unless
the
that's
same
close.
place as it usually is, because 0 times 2 is 0. So let's actually change this position to
cup?
1 so that
They
we
call
can
me the cup.
effectively see the multiplication that we do with this part. So it's a very small difference, but as you can see,
Ray gun.
our x value changed to 2 because 1 times 2 is 2. So we effectively made that calculation. And you can pretty much do the same thing with division. It's
shit.
basically a forward slash to represent division. And you basically get the
Get
idea.
lost.
I hope so far this is making sense to you because there is a bunch of math required when it comes to vector 3 values. In
What
due
would you-
time, the more you practice, the more you'll definitely get better at it. So I believe in you. But anyways,
Wow.
we dealt with
Yeah.
changing the position of this part, but there are other values we can change that uses vector 3 values
Let's go.
like
I
size
need, like,
and
like,
rotation
one
or
song.
orientation in this
I don't
case.
know, but I
So
can-
let's
I
change
swear I
those
can get
values.
this
And so the way we change the size
go.
of a part inside of
Holy
Studio
shit,
is
what
by
was
going
that?
to Model and going to our Scale tool.
Ah, that's
And
how we're
it's
doing
basically the
this.
same way with moving, except we can scale this part in whatever axes we
You are
want
Wendy's.
to scale the part to.
Holy shit.
Whether that be the X value, the Y value, or the Z value, we can pretty much do the same thing. And this also takes in a vector 3 value. So if we want to change this through a script,
oh.
we essentially do it the same way we do with the position.
Oh,
So let's go to our script and let's change the part's size. So we're going to say part dot size equals
Oh my god, that
vector
hurt.
3 dot new, and we can put in some value like 4, 4, and 4.
Oh,
So it's
oh my
going to change
God.
the size of this part to 4 when we test the game. So
Oh,
if
it's
we
gone,
test
it's gone. Oh my
then
God,
we should
that was
see
crazy.
that the part's size has been successfully changed
So,
to be
order
4 by 4
juice.
by 4. And we can
Great.
even do the same thing with rotation as well. What we can do here is drop a line and say part dot orientation
Whoa, why am I bouncing?
equals
You're
vector
bouncing, Jay.
3
Yeah,
dot
I'm
new.
bouncing.
And
What
we
the
can
fuck?
say
is he a bouncy ball? Michael?
25,
I bounced on a piece
0.
of rubble.
This is why
25.
we call it
Let's
bouncy
see
boy.
what that results in when we hit run. So as you can see, the orientation or the rotation of
Alright,
the part
fuck you,
has
I'm gonna
changed
kill you now.
accordingly to what we set it to do inside of our script. So it's basically the equivalence of our rotation tool.
No!
So the red is our X value, the blue
Finish
is our
you.
Z value, and
Oh,
the
my thing's
green
sold.
is our Y value. So it's a bit more confusing and less intuitive for X, Y, and Z values for rotation. So you're gonna have to be familiar with how rotational
just in
axes
case.
in
Time for me.
orientation
Oh, friendly
works
droid.
with
What's up,
parts
dude? You're
or
my friendly
models inside
droid.
the game. Another thing we can do is multiply and divide a
Why'd you help
vector
me, son?
with just a number. So in this case, what we can do is we can take the position of our part and just multiply that vector value by a number to then change every value that's in the vector 3 value. And I'll explain to you what I'm talking about.
Hey,
but
chump, did
first,
you
let's
kill you then?
change the base position of
Sorry, bro,
our
you might be
part.
good at
So
XP.
we're going to go down here and let's change this position
Ooh,
to
ow!
1, 0,
What
and
up?
1.
Oh, what?
And
Alright,
let's go to
note
our
to
script.
self, don't kill the
So
friendly
let's
droid.
delete these two
I'm
lines
about
of
to
code
cut
right
my
here.
HP.
And the first thing we're going to do is say part.position
Ooh, you're strong,
equals
dude.
part.position, and we're going to multiply this by numbers. So we'll say
I see her, I
times
see her, I see her.
5. You
What else
can
do you
take
want
a
me to
guess
do?
what's going to happen here, but essentially, it's going to take every value that's in this vector 3, which is 1, 0, and
Finally,
1,
my
and
God.
multiply all the numbers
What's up,
by
dudes?
5.
Oh, no.
What?
So our X
I
value is
saw 'em in
1,
the ground.
so 1 times 5
I saw
is
my
5.
balls in the ground.
0 times
Balls?
5 is 0, and then
Let's go.
1 times 5 is 5. From that, we're going to get a result of 505 when we
Yeah,
run
my
the game,
my
like so.
trap shooter
So
went
if we
into the
select
ground.
this part,
I
we
saw
can
them
see
go all the way
that
down
the
into
new
the
position
middle
is
of nowhere. I actually don't know where they
505
went.
Activating
because
library,
we took
teach-
the original position of the part, which was 0, 1, 0, and then we multiplied all those values by 5. And so that's how
What?
we got the result of
What?
this position.
Who
We
is
can
he
even do the
hitting?
same thing with division. 1 divided by 5 is going to give us a pretty small number,
so much for that.
so it's going to have a very small difference. But let's see this very small difference in play. So our
I lost
parts
again.
should have a
to some
position
bullshit.
of
What the fuck was
0.2
that?
because
My
1 divided by
trap
5
shooter went
is
into
1/5,
the ground.
and in decimal that's 0.2.
the floor's
So I hope
elevated,
that part
that's
made
why it
sense
hit
to
the
you.
ground.
We're gonna create a practical
No,
use
it didn't
case
hit
of
the
vector
ground. It
3
went
values
into the
by
ground. I saw my
creating
balls
a
go all the way
teleport
down.
script whenever
Like
the
into,
player
like, what,
joins the
nowhere?
game.
I don't
Let me
even know
show
where
you
they were
how this
going.
is going to look.
I
So
don't know,
first
put
thing
that,
we're
I
going to
guess.
do is
At least if
create
they
a
hit
new
the ground, they would
part.
have
So let's go to
exploded and
model,
hit you.
part,
Xbox recorded
and
this.
let's rename this part to
Good.
teleport part. Let's
Ooh,
even
I like
change the
this.
color of this to blue, and let's move this.
Ooh, you really are a tank.
Now what we're gonna
though.
do is create a script inside of server script service,
Oh,
like so.
shit.
And then what we're gonna do is create a
Oh.
player added event. So game.players.
Oh, that shit hurt a lot.
player
Now I realize.
added connect
I didn't heal
function,
anything.
open parentheses, close parentheses, enter.
There you go.
The parameter here is going to be player. One thing we have to do
Or
is
did you
know
just be just
how we
like,
can
cool?
actually teleport
Ooh.
our character to another position inside of the game. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that right now. If we open up workspace and go to our character and open this
Why?
up,
You're like right there.
we can see that there's a part here
Boom, bitch.
called humanoid root part. It's kind of hard to see the humanoid root part, but essentially it's like an invisible box
Get him.
that's surrounding
Oh,
Got
our
him.
torso area,
No, we're behind
much
you.
like our upper
I got
torso,
you.
so we can actually see
Oh,
our
it's a
upper
good
torso
plug,
here. But our humanoid root
Please.
part is like
Oh my
this
God, I almost
invisible
died.
part that
That's his
basically
phone.
connects
Oh,
all of the
shit, fell in the
attachments
water.
to our character together into one. And so we're going to be changing the position of this humanoid root part to the position
Oh.
of our teleport
Oh my
part
God.
in order to move our character from where we currently are to that part over there. So that's what we're going to be doing. So now that we understand that, let's locate the humanoid root part by first making reference to the humanoid
Goddamn,
root
too
part. So
low
we're going
now.
to say local humanoid
What?
root part equals player.character,
What was that?
and we're going to wait until the player's character
what?
completely loads into the game. So we're first going to say
Oh!
so we're going to say colon wait for
Fucking hell.
child. So we're going to have the script wait until a humanoid root part exists inside of the character. So in quotations, we're going to say humanoid root part, and then down here we're going to say
Alright.
humanoid root part dot position. So we're going to modify the position of the current humanoid root part equal to game dot
You were
workspace
backwards.
dot teleport
Fuck, I'm out.
part
Oh.
dot position. So in these two lines of code,
fuck?
we're basically getting the humanoid root part from the player's character, and then we're going to change that position to the position of this teleport part over here. After the player has joined the game. So if we hit play, okay, so there's a little error here. There isn't enough time for the script to wait until the player joins into the game. So we can either do this in two ways. One is by adding a task.wait function, or we can add in another event that calls the character every time their character loads into the game or resets. So for the sake of simplicity, let's just add a task.wait to this event. So we're going to say task.wait, and then we're going to wait 5 seconds before the script runs. So let's go into the game and hit play. And after we wait about 5 seconds, it's going to locate the character's
that's just basically a
trampoline. We should be able to teleport just fine. So as you can see, our character did indeed teleport to the part's position, but then we kind of slid off a little bit, because if we're teleporting our player to the direct position of this part, it's going to literally be inside of this part. So what we can do, we can add a Y value of 5 so that the player spawns like a fucking basketball on the floor, not in the part. So we're going to go over here, and let me just zoom out a little bit, and we're going to add in a new vector by saying
yeah, and I'm trying to do that back counter thing, you know, where you're back. But doesn't that waste like, you know, like bar?
5,
in order to do that?
0. So it's going to take the teleport part's position and add 5 to the height, or the Y value, so that the player spawns right on top of it, not inside of the part. So let's go into the game and see our change. After about 5 seconds, it should spawn our character on top of the part.
Is X guard for you?
So there you go. Our teleport script should be working just fine.
I
hope this introduction to Vector 3s served you well. I'm not going to go over every single thing that Vector 3s have to offer, because this just serves as an introduction to get your foot in the door to be able to understand Vector 3s for your future Roblox projects, because Vector 3s, it's a complicated data type, and it'll only get more complicated from here. So I highly encourage you to read the documentations for Vector 3s, and you look up more tutorial guides from other YouTubers who've talked about Vector 3s as well, so that you can really understand how you can use these Vector 3 data types in your Roblox games. Again, I hope this introduction to Vector 3 served you well. Continue to improve your Roblox developer skills, because sitting down and struggling through things that are tough for you will make you a more competent Roblox developer in the long run, and I believe you got this. So that's going to be it for this episode. Join my Discord server, the link is in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.
Oh no.
I didn't know there was a disco going on here. Oh well, I'm not going to question it. I just find it to be pretty crazy that these two parts are essentially changing colors just simultaneously at the same time, especially when it's moving through so many different parts at once. You wouldn't really be able to do this inside of a standard script unless there were multiple tasks running at the same time. I think what I just explained pretty much sums up what I'm going to be talking about in this episode, which is kind of a part 2 to my task functions video that I made a while ago. Having the ability to do multiple tasks in the same script is something very powerful. That's pretty much what the use of coroutines.
My god, I'm so bad at that.
It's important to understand that there is a difference between coroutines and task functions, and why I made them in 2 separate videos. So this will pretty much be a continuation from my task functions video into another multitasking system that is honestly better than task functions, depending on how you use it. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do inside of this episode. Alright, let's think about this for a minute. You seem to really like my example previously with task functions when I created all these tasks represented as parts. So I pretty much brought it back, but this time with coroutines. So what's the whole idea of coroutines? Well, pretty much, it's kind of similar to task functions in a way how we want to create multiple threads to be able to run multiple tasks at the same time using the same script, so that we can basically do a whole bunch of stuff simultaneously without having to wait for whatever is previously in the script to then run whatever else is underneath it. So we basically have these tasks here, and we have coroutine functions that relate to what we're going to be discussing about inside of this episode. So let's say we have task 1 and task 2. We want to be able to run these 2 tasks at the same time, but how do we do that? Well, what we would do is, instead of writing all of this inside of one thread, we can create a new thread and make it wrapped around inside of this second task we want to do. And this is a concept called multi-threading. So we would basically do that by creating a new coroutine thread and just slap this inside of task 2 so that we can run both of these at the same time. But just creating the task is not going to be enough. We have to actually execute the task as well by using resume to then actually execute the coroutine task that we created inside of our script so we can run task 1 and task 2 at the same time. Now, so far, this looks pretty similar to task functions, but there is one key difference between task functions and coroutines is that we have the power to pause these multi-threading tasks using a function called yield, which basically says during execution of our coroutine, we can literally pause the task in order to do other things outside of this multi-thread first before going back into this task to do whatever we want the task to do. So basically, if we yield this task, then we're not resuming this task anymore.
I don't understand
and
how
in
you can
order
see me,
to
but I can't
make this
see
task
you.
run again, we would just simply use resume, get rid of the yield, and then the task would be running just like normal. And so if at any point we don't need to run the complete version of this task anymore, or just things in the script have changed, then we can just simply close the coroutine task and create a new one. So it basically just gets rid of our coroutine task that we had.
I see him. Yes, I see him.
And so this is just a couple methods used for coroutines. Yielding is probably the biggest game changer for these multi-threaded tasks inside of your scripts. And that's what we're going to be doing inside of this episode. It serves as task functions with more control over your multi-threading processes. So I hope that made sense to you. And now let's get to implementing. Now that we understand it, let's use coroutines to create multiple threads so that they can all run at the same time.
I know there's
using the
quicksand
same
here.
script. So on the right side next to server script service, we're going to hit the plus sign and we're going to create a new script. Before we start writing, here's what I want you to understand about coroutines is that when you create a new coroutine, it should be placed inside of a variable. And when we check to see what this coroutine actually is, it's basically a thread object that has different functions that we're going to be using inside of this episode. So let's create a variable. And this one is going to represent our second task. So in double dashes, we're going to make a comment by saying task 2. And then down here, we're going to create a coroutine for the second task. So we're going to make a variable by saying local, and we're going to call this task 2 equals coroutine dot create. So this is pretty much the method we're going to use in order to create a new coroutine and set it equal to our second task. So in this coroutine, we're going to make a function by creating one inside of these parentheses. So we're going to say function, open parentheses, close parentheses, hit enter. So this is pretty much the general structure of creating a new coroutine and saying it equal to a variable. If we try and print the new coroutine that we just created, so let's drop 2 lines and then say print task 2. If we go into the game, hit test and hit run, and we look at the output, we can see what kind of variable our task 2 is. So it pretty much printed out a thread object, and all these numbers basically mean the location in memory that this new object was created in. This part does not really matter too much, but what does matter is that our coroutine that we created is basically a thread object that has functions that can be used to manipulate when we run these coroutine tasks. So let's hit stop and let's go back to our script. So now that we know that when using coroutine create, we basically create a new thread object and we set that equal to our task 2 variable. So let's delete this print statement here, and now we can write stuff inside of this new coroutine that we created, this new coroutine task that we created. So we can just make a print statement here by saying print coroutine task, and then we can drop 2 lines down here. So there we go, we've basically created our first coroutine, but if we try and run the game, this task isn't actually going to run because we tied it into a variable. So now we have to execute task 2. And the way we're going to do that is by using a function from coroutine called resume. Because by default, when we create a coroutine, it's not going to run on its own. We basically have to do that manually. So what we're going to do down here is basically write coroutine.resume, and then in parentheses, we're going to put in our coroutine that we created, which is task 2. So now if we hit run, we should see our coroutine executing. So down here it says coroutine task because we created our coroutine and then we used the coroutine.resume function and we passed in our task2 coroutine to actually run it. There's different states to these coroutines, which I will explain later on in this episode, but that's just something for you to know about for now. Now, it might seem kind of unusual that we're creating a task wrapped inside of a variable and then we're just calling coroutine resume on that coroutine that we created. It seems like a weird structure. However, there is an easier way to write this. And this is going to use wrapper functions. So the way it's going to look is we're going to first create a task and then we're just going to call that task after we've created it. Let's make a blocked comment statement by selecting up here. And we're going to put the 2 dashes, but also put in 2 open hard brackets. And then at the end here, we're going to put in the closed end brackets by putting 2 of them here. So now let's drop 2 lines. And what we'll do is we'll create a variable, and then we will wrap this around inside of a coroutine wrap function. So the way it's going to look is we're going to first create a variable, which is local task2 equals coroutine.wrap. And then inside of here, we're going to create another function, open parentheses, close parentheses, hit enter. And let's make our same print statement. So we're going to say coroutine task.
Look at all these weak sayings.
And so right now, this looks pretty similar to our first coroutine task. But what we can just say down here is
Looks
task
like you're stuck, Jelly
2,
Belly.
and then put in the open and close parentheses. And this is basically all you need to do. So it's a little more simplified than what we had up here, but both of them generally do the same exact thing. So if we hit run, then we should see the exact same result, just like in the first example. So it just printed coroutine task after we created a wrapper function, called that function just by its name with the open and close parentheses. So that's another way of writing it. And if you want to further simplify this even more, what you can do is not even have a variable here, just like get rid of the task2 variable and get rid of this down here as well. And we can simply just put in 2 parentheses right at the end. Really? So this is all you need to say. It's just basically 3 lines. I don't know where they are. Creates the coroutine wrap function, and then it prints whatever's down here, and then we end it with the open and close parentheses. So this is also another really simple way of writing these coroutine threads. However, the issue with writing it like this is that we're not able to retrieve this coroutine once we're done executing it because we didn't wrap this inside of a variable. So I do want you to be cautious if you do write it this way. There's also one more way I can think of when writing these wrapper functions inside of these coroutines, and that's by wrapping a function inside of a local variable and then just using coroutine.wrap surrounded by that variable and just call that within one line. So we're going to make a function that's wrapped inside of a variable. So we'll say local my function equals function, open parentheses, close parentheses, enter. And we can just put in some random stuff in here, print function. And then down here, what we're going to do is say coroutine.wrap. And then inside of here, we're going to put in our function. We're going to say my function. And then open parentheses, close parentheses. Just like this. This is another really easy way to write a coroutine. And of course, this isn't the only way
crazy how
you
quick
can
it gets out of that
write
shit.
a function signature. You can also just say local function, my function, open parentheses, close parentheses. And this is also another way of doing it too. So I just wanted to throw these 2 examples out there as well. There's multiple ways to do this stuff, and it's just a matter of understanding these different structures of creating these coroutines. Alright, and since we are writing functions inside of these coroutines, it actually is possible to pass in function arguments. And I'm going to show you this by using our last example. So let's uncomment our previous example, and let's comment our new example because we will hopefully come back to this as reference. What we can do here inside of our function, declaration, is add extra parameters in here. We can put whatever arguments we want in here. Let's make a system where we pass in 2 numbers and we're going to print the sum of those 2 numbers. So let's make the first argument num1 for number 1, and then comma num2 for number 2. And then down here, what we're going to do is print num1 plus num2. And so now, the way we pass in arguments into this coroutine function is by going to where we call this coroutine thread, and we just simply put in the thread itself, and then we space it with a comma with whatever other arguments we have after that. So this one is going to be our number 1. And then we put another comma here, and this one's going to be number 2.
Super counter.
Once again, when we call coroutine resume, we're first going to pass in our quarantine thread,
stop.
and then everything
stop.
after
That's how
that
it
is
works.
going
Oh
to
my
be the
God.
function arguments. Our result, so
The
when we
fucker
load into
almost
the
killed
game,
me.
it should say
It's really hard though.
4
It's
because
super tight
2
time.
plus 2 is 4, and then it's going to say quarantine
Is that wrong?
task. So let's run the script and
Bitch.
see our output. So yeah, it printed out 4, and it also printed out quarantine
Oh,
task like expected. Now let's try running multiple tasks at the same time. So you know how 2 loops go, right? If it's 2 while loops, for instance, let me just write some comments here so I can get you to understand
Nice.
this
Got
analogy.
it.
So if we have 2 while loops, while, true, do, and then it's going to end with an end here, and then we have another while, true, do statement, and ending right here. Basically, what this is saying is that we're going to constantly go through this loop over and over again repeatedly, and it's never going to run this while loop because
Oh, I'm
it
just gonna
needs
die
to
if I do
finish
that
this
again.
while loop before going into this one. But what if this while loop consistently runs throughout the entire game without ever going to whatever's underneath here? If we want to be able to run 2 loops at the same time, or multiple tasks in this case, we would
Oh, I
use
can't wait that.
quarantines.
Okay.
So let's delete everything that's inside of the script as of right now. So let's delete all this. And what we're going to do is
Oops.
create
Did I
2
just kill you?
loops that'll run simultaneously at the same time while the game is running in order for this to work. So what we can do
we chill?
is create 1 quarantine for one of our loops and then
Oops.
just call the other one normally.
Should
For our
switch
first one, we're
that.
going to
Oh, I
say
wasted already.
local loop 1 equals quarantine dot create open parentheses close
Oh, I thought you
parentheses
said- I thought you were
function
seeing red.
open parentheses close parentheses enter. Let's create a while loop. Let's say while true do. Let's print task 1. And then we're going to put in a task.wait statement down here so that it doesn't just repeatedly call this print statement. Let's put in a wait statement of 0.01. And what we'll do is execute this coroutine by saying coroutine.resume, open parentheses, close parentheses, and put in loop 1. So this is our first loop. When we run the game, then what we should see is
Oh,
task
that hurt.
1
Oh, that
that's
fucking
constantly
hurt.
being printed into the output, as you can see right here. But what we want to do is run two while loops at the same time. So after our coroutine
Game,
resume,
please.
we're basically going to do the exact same thing we did here, but instead it's going to be within the
Bandages.
main
I forgot I had
script,
these.
not inside of a thread. So we're going to say while true do, enter. Then we're going to make a print statement by
hell
saying
no.
task 2, and then down here we're going to write another task.wait
Holy
statement
shit.
with
I'm gonna do this now.
0.01 as
Oh,
our wait counter. So now if we go into the game, we should see both of these while true do statements running at the exact same time, back to back. So inside of the output,
Jesus.
we can sometimes see
Why'd I curve down like
task
that?
1 printing before task 2, and then task 2 printing before task 1. But generally
knock you up.
speaking, they are running at the exact same time during execution. So that's one of the benefits of using
I see her. What else
coroutines,
do you want me to do?
is by being able to run multiple tasks
Nah, what do I
at the
wanna
same
do?
time. Now you
Fucking
remember
Where am
how
I
I
going?
mentioned that when we create the coroutine, that doesn't automatically mean that it's executing.
Why
Because
did-
what's happening is that when we create
Why
a
didn't I
thread
move
object
instead of
using
just standing
coroutine
in
create,
place?
we have
Holy
to
shit.
manually execute it ourselves because
So
these
my character
coroutines
dashes
have
into
different
nothing?
states of operation,
so, yeah,
if that makes sense.
Come
So
on,
when
fish.
we create our coroutine, the state of the coroutine is basically one that's not executing, so it hasn't started yet. And these are called
What is
coroutine
that?
states. So there are 3 coroutine states we should know about. If I drop a couple lines down here and just write this down inside of my script right here, well, there's actually technically 4, but there's only 3 that we really need to know about for this
Why?
episode. The 4th one you can do more research if you decide
What just
to
happened?
go more deeper into these coroutines. But these are the 3 that we need to know about. The first one is suspended. The second
did I really get
is
sent into a new
running,
run?
and then the third
gotta
one
be
is
shitting me.
dead. And basically what's happening is that when we
I'm in a
first create a
pumpkin patch.
coroutine, it's automatically going to be in the suspended
That wasn't
state,
enough
meaning
knockback
that
to
it's
do
not
that.
currently running,
Hey,
but that
wow,
also
and it's
doesn't
just
mean
so
it's
crazy
dead.
to me
It just
that you can
means it's at a
actually move after
pause.
that.
Running means that obviously the coroutine is currently running or currently executing as we speak when we check the status. And then dead pretty much just means that the coroutine is either over or it got canceled, and this coroutine can no longer be used afterwards. And we can check these statuses by using a function simply called coroutine.status. So we can do that by dropping a line here right before calling coroutine resume. We can write a print statement over here and just simply call our coroutine's status by saying coroutine.status, and then inside of these parentheses we're going to pass in our coroutine loop 1, and let's do the same thing after our coroutine resume as well, so we can check to see the status of our coroutine in real time. What we're going to do is actually we're going to comment out these while true do statements so that we can see the effect of these print statements that we're trying to look for.
I'll play one more time.
That we're trying to look for. So now let's hit run and see what happens. So as you can see, before our coroutine executed, our status of our loop 1 coroutine is suspended because nothing ran yet, or it's currently paused. And then after our coroutine executed, we check the status and it's now dead, meaning that we can no longer run it, and we're just gonna have to create a new coroutine again afterwards. So that's a pretty neat thing to know about when we want to check the status of our coroutine to see whether we can either continue with our coroutine or we reach a certain point where we just don't want to use it anymore. This is a great way of checking whether that can be done or not. And finally, we are at the last part that makes coroutines very useful, and that is with the use of their yield function. So to explain what a yield is, this function basically stops the coroutine with whatever it's doing in order to do anything else that the script needs to do, and if we needed to, we will resume the script again to then continue off whatever it was trying to do with this thread without completely getting rid of it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's delete all of this code that we have here, and let's create a new thread. So we're going to call this one local loop thread equals coroutine.create function, open parentheses, close parentheses, enter. What we're going to do is make a while true do statement. So let's say while true do. Let's create a for loop. Let's say for I equals 1, 10 do. So this is going to execute 10 times whatever's inside of here.
Wait, what?
We're going to write a print statement by saying print I. Just simply, it's just going to print whatever the current number is here. And let's also execute this coroutine. So we're going to say coroutine.resume, open parentheses, close parentheses, loop thread. So what this should do is if we run it, then we should see all 10 numbers being printed onto the output all at the same time. But what if we wanted to stop execution of this coroutine to do other things afterwards and then resume this coroutine again to continue what it was trying to do before in the state that it was when we told it to pause? This is where yielding comes in, and let me show you what it looks like. So we're going to drop a line after the print statement, and we're going to say coroutine yield, open parentheses, close parentheses. This is pretty much what it's going to look like right here. So what happens is that when we call resume to execute this loop thread coroutine, it's going to start at the first position of the loop. It's going to print 1, and it's going to pause execution of this coroutine wherever it is. And let me show you what that looks like. If we hit run, we should only see 1 being printed because we told it to print 1 and then we told the execution to stop. Now let's see what happens if we add more onto this. Let's drop 2 lines down here and let's write a print statement here saying execution has stopped, and let's drop another line. Here's how we can resume the thread. And you guessed it, we're basically going to write another coroutine.resume, and we're going to throw in the loop thread coroutine. Now what should surprise you is that when we call for the first coroutine and it's going to print the first number here, you might think it's going to do the same thing again for the print statement by just saying print 1. But here's what's actually going to happen. Let's hit run. And what should happen is that it's first going to print 1 because we called execution, so it's going to start at 1 and it's going to print 1 and it's going to pause the coroutine. And then once this is done, it's going to go down here to print execution stopped. And then we come down here to resume or continue the coroutine of loop thread. It's going to pick right back up where it left off after this coroutine yield was over. It's going to go back to the top and increment 1 to 2, and then it's going to print 2, and then it's going to yield again. So we can just continuously do this by
I was
saying
staring at your
execution
aura
is
for the
stopped,
longest
and
time,
then
and
it's
nothing
going to
happened.
resume the thread again to
Aura.
print 3, and it's just pretty much going to keep doing this. So this is
Stupid.
going to happen exactly 4 times.
This is why I don't
so
buy
it's going
games day
to
one.
print 1, execution is stopped, print
Aura.
2, execution is stopped,
That's
print
a
3,
fat
execution is stopped, and then finally it printed out 4. I will go into more detail with yields, but just for a quick minute, I'm going to introduce one more coroutine function, and that's
Do it,
just
bitch.
and that
Oh,
is
yeah.
coroutine close, which just simply ends the coroutine, and we just won't be able to use it anytime afterwards unless we
That's what I
create
thought,
another
too.
coroutine. So what we can do is that after,
Oh, these guys
let's
are brain
say,
audible.
the second execution, let's drop a line down here.
Oh, how did
We're
I
going
know
to say
already?
Does XQC.
coroutine.close, and
I
then
already knew.
inside
Sorry,
the
Treat
parameters,
Droid, I
we're
gotta
going
kill
to
you.
throw in our loop thread that we created. So pretty much what's going to happen here is that when we
Damn, he
close the
died already?
coroutine, we're not even going to be
Ugh.
able to resume these threads because
What does this even do?
because we already closed this loop thread, so it can no
Ah, it
longer
does not help my
continue
health.
what it was trying to do.
coming.
So if we hit run, what
I
should
see
happen
you. I
is
see
that
you're literally running
after
right at
our
me.
second execution, then it pretty much printed out execution has
Oops, I paused
stopped,
by accident.
but then it
Okay.
tried to resume the thread, nothing happened, and then it printed out
Down.
execution has stopped once again, but also it tried to resume the thread once again, but it did not work because our coroutine is already dead, because we called close on the coroutine. So that's another coroutine function I want you to know about when you're handling these coroutines.
Now it's time
Another
to
thing we can do is return values when we call coroutine yield. So we can actually put in
I don't believe in
parameters.
that
So we can
bullshit.
actually put in arguments here for when we decide to return something after we pause our coroutine thread. So what this will look like is this is pretty much going to be returned when we call coroutine resume, because when we
Moments
call
at the
coroutine
end.
resume, that's when we start the thread of whatever's inside of
Whoa.
here. And then when we call coroutine yield, it's going to return whatever arguments we
Holy
put inside
shit!
of here back to
You
coroutine
scared
resume.
me.
So we can actually wrap this coroutine resume inside of a variable. So before coroutine resume, we can
And
say
he still grabbed.
local success
Oh.
equals coroutine.resume loop thread. And what we can decide to put in here is just put in a boolean here,
Ow.
just say true,
Oh my god, I'm about to die.
basically indicating that this yield has been
What is all
successful.
that?
Now, obviously, this is kind of an arbitrary example,
No.
but what I'm trying to get at here is that you can pretty
Please,
much
I only have
put in
7
any
HP.
arguments here
Sitting above
and
your head.
pass it back to coroutine resume once execution's over into our new variable. So we can drop a line here
Oh
and
my
then print
god, I
our,
almost fucking died
our
again.
variable true. If we hit run, it's first going
Shiny, you
to
see?
print the 1, and then it's going to print our return value, which is true, back into our variable success after we call coroutine.resume, and then we can print that here in the output, which is going to be true. So that's
Should've
another
looked above your
interesting
head.
thing you
did look
can
above my
do
head.
with coroutine yield is return arguments in case we want
No,
to
I guess
pass
that gives
in
my
any
fight light.
information from
Damn.
yielding to
Should've
then
looked
do all
above your
the
head.
things with it. We can pass in as many arguments as we want. We can say true, we can say, I don't know, the number 5, we can say a string that's just false.
I
or anything
fucking
like
found
that.
you,
And we can
ghost.
do that as long as we fulfill the number of variables that tie into the amount of arguments that we pass back. So this is success. We can separate this with a comma by saying
Let's go.
number,
Teddy,
and then this is going to be result, or just anything. It can be whatever you want it to be. And we can print all of these out here in the output too, with number and result. Okay, there was a little mistake here. So when we return a yield, it's
Wait, that's
automatically
it?
going to
I thought- oh,
it's
yeah, I
going
did
to
that before,
implicitly
Curtis.
return
Come on,
true.
Damn.
So what this would
Alright,
look
fuck
like
this
is
stupid
it would actually
unfinished
return
game.
true, true, 5 false, because the
Blue
first
candy.
true
I'd rather play
is
Shadow,
already passed
Shadow X
back into
Generations
this
than
variable
shit.
success. So what it's actually going to look like is it's going to be success, and then it's going to be whatever
Trick
results we
dude.
have after that. So it's pretty much going to look like this. We have our first result here, which is
Dude,
true, so we're just going to call this result 1.
Kevin's on
And then
fire.
we have our second result, which is 5.
think
We'll
he just
call
doesn't
this
want to
result
been on
3.
power.
And then finally, results 3, which is false.
Oh,
we
really?
can
I didn't
re-
know. I wasn't
we
looking.
can print all these variables out. So result 1, comma result 2, comma
Wait,
That's
result
fine.
Washington, right?
so this is
He's
pretty much
washing
how
his
it's
ass
going
or
to look
something,
like.
yeah.
Success
So-
is going to
That's how big
implicitly
it
be
is.
returned to let us know that yielding was
I mean, he
successful.
watches close for
And then
everyone?
we
The fuck?
have result 1, which
I
is
would
tied to
assume
true,
so. I mean,
result 2, which is tied to 5, and then result 3, which is tied to false. So if we run the
Except for
script now,
Animal Well.
we should see all of our arguments being
Wait, Animal Well is
printed inside of the console.
$25?
So we first have our 1, and then we have
What the
result 1,
fuck?
result
what
2,
the fuck?
and then
That's
result
a
3,
good-
which is
yeah.
true, 5, false.
I mean,
so
yeah, but
it basically
I
works
guess
as
it's
intended.
pretty funny.
All right, now you might be sort of confused
want
when
hyper-realistic
we would
graphics?
use coroutines inside of our Roblox games when we're creating them,
Even
because
Unreal
so
Engine
far what
5?
we just did with our scripts just looks like a whole
Yeah,
bunch of
dude.
concepts just scrambled on together inside of our script without really doing much. So let me just lay down a couple
holy
of ideas
shit.
of when you would
Why
potentially
can I kill you? Why can I kill you?
use coroutines.
Why can I
during
kill
your
you?
development.
Why can I kill you?
There's a few
Oh my
ideas I can
God.
think of off the top of my
We?
head. One of them that sticks out to me
Not
is a
outside.
countdown timer.
Okay.
So if you're playing a round-based game, for instance,
Stop it,
you
dude,
want the
stop.
timer to constantly be decrementing the timer every 1 second, while other things are happening in the round other than
Here we
just
go,
waiting for the
stupid.
timer to be
Come
over,
on.
like giving the player weapons, making changes to the map, having events
shit.
happen. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with a round-based system, and you want the
expect
timer
from
and
a
you want the
freak?
countdown
Ah.
timer to be one of them, not the only thing happening. So that's one
Fucking,
example. Another one could
uh,
be a wave-based enemy spawning system, where like let's say
Check out
you're
Fortnite.
playing a tower defense game.
Yeah,
You
I've
want the
seen it in
waves
X-Ray,
to
right?
be
Yeah, Fortnite.
split up into different chunks throughout the entire match, and you
Fuck,
don't
let's check out
want
Fortnite.
all the zombies to be spawning in continuously
It's
at
new to
once
Fortnite.
during the whole game. You want to break them down
Mm-hmm.
into waves, and within these waves, you want to
Well, they're
wait
Fortnite,
for
everybody.
all of the enemies
said
to
we're
be
getting
killed
you on
first
Fortnite.
before moving on to the next wave. That's another example I can think of using coroutines, but the imagination is definitely left to the creator's mind, so there's definitely use cases for them. You just have to know what feels right to you, and I believe in your ability to do that. You might also ask, what's the difference between task.spawn and using coroutines? So if you remember from my task functions video, I basically stated that task.spawn is used to simultaneously run a task alongside a different
Reorder
task.
now.
But here's the thing about coroutines.
Deodorant.
One of the things that makes coroutines special is its
Okay.
use of
See,
being able
marshmallows
to
in the store,
yield or
okay.
pause the
No,
current thread and
Okay,
do
cover
something
it.
else in the meantime and resume the thread whenever we need to
Wait,
continue.
Wait, what the fuck
we
is up
left
with the
off
shop?
that
Why is
thread.
why is
in
there
a way
nothing in the
where
shop right
we
now?
have more control over what gets executed
What the
before.
fuck? I mean, at
we
least
want.
Carol G's
So let's
in
go
the
back
shop
to our
right now.
script
Fuck
and
that
let's
skin.
delete everything that's over here. If we wanted to,
come on.
let's
The
say,
fish stick is
make
here.
a coroutine that does stuff, but we also
That's his
want
ass.
our first task to do a little bit of stuff before moving on to the second one, and then
Okay,
back to
for
the
some
first
reason
one.
there's nothing in
We can do
Fortnite.
that with coroutines,
Weird.
but we cannot do that with task.spawn. Let me show you what this looks like with
bizarre.
task.spawn first. So we're going to say task.spawn.
I really would be
and
playing
then we're going
Black
to
Ops
create
6
a
right
new
now
function.
if I didn't have to download 300
Let's write a while
gigabytes
true
of
do
a
statement here.
fucking launcher.
Come on,
And
dude. I know
let's
you
just
have games
print
in your
some
thing that you don't
random
play
stuff here
ever.
with task.spawn,
Yeah, but I'd rather
task.wait,
have those games there than
0.01,
something
and
stupid.
then down here we're going to write another while true do
Why even
with
talk about
print
Come on, dude.
outside
It's just so
spawn.
crazy.
then
It's just so
task
crazy
dot
just thinking
wait.
about how
That's how
Black
you
Ops
do
was
it.
back then.
0.01.
All you need is the launcher.
Let's see what this looks like. If we hit run,
It's
then we should
300
constantly see
gigabytes.
task.spawn
Michael, the launcher
and
alone.
outside spawn running
Yeah.
at the same
The
time.
launcher alone.
But we're not going to be able to
Call of Duty
control
See?
doing
It's
specific
262
things within
gigabytes
one
up there.
task and then doing specific things within
He doesn't
another
believe
task
it.
and then switching
Damn.
back to the first one in a more strict
I don't
order.
believe it.
We
Check it
cannot
out.
do that
That
with
does not
task.spawn,
include Black
but we
Ops
can
6.
do that with coroutines.
Like I said,
Let
you
me
don't
show you
believe
what
it,
this
check it
looks
out.
like with
That's
coroutines.
the launcher,
Let's
bro.
delete our task.spawn
That's
and let's do this by saying
Michael.
local loop 1 equals coroutine.create
game's
open parentheses, close
crazy.
parentheses, function.
It's just
open
crazy to
parentheses,
think
close parentheses,
how
enter.
far
And down here, let's call
this
the
game
loop.
has fallen.
Let's say coroutine.resume
Yeah.
loop 1. And then we're going to have some tasks
I used
going
to
on
love
here as
these
well.
games.
Let's say for I equals
Yeah?
1, 10,
Fuck them.
do, print,
Hmm.
I. So let's
Nah,
let's
say
put another for
shit.
loop here by
Fuck
saying
that.
for I equals 1, 10, do, and let's print I. And now down here, let's also make a check. Let's say if I equals 4 in this case, then what we're going to do is pause our coroutine by saying coroutine.yield open parentheses, close parentheses, and then down here, let's resume
alone,
our
Hops.
coroutine again by just copying
your
this and
second
putting
one?
this down here.
So,
Now let's run the game and see what happens. The order in which I printed this stuff out is very interesting. Basically, what happened here
Put the
is that
phone
I
down.
resumed I
Where's
started
your teammate?
execution of
Wait,
my
we're not
coroutine,
gonna start
which
two-man.
I basically started at 1,
fucking
and then
dog.
it kept printing
You're the host, what the
number,
fuck did you
and
do?
it's constantly checking whether the number reaches 4. So once it reached 4 down here, it basically stopped, and then it went to our outside for loop to print 10 numbers. And then it continued our quarantine
Fuck,
after it was
that
over,
at?
That's
where
flight,
it stopped
dude.
at 4,
You
and
know
then
flight.
it just kept on repeatedly continuing
that's
until
flight?
it
You know
reached
flight's
the
laugh.
10th number. And
That's
that's
about
where
that.
the quarantine ended after we resumed. It ended at 10. So what I'm trying to get at here is
Alright,
you
you must
can't
have the
have
first
this
one.
level of
5 gigabytes.
control over what
My
gets
God, you fucking
executed
liar.
when you're using
you talking about?
task.spawn
We're
over
on Black Ops.
quarantines.
Well,
I really
the
hope this
launcher
makes
and Call of
sense.
Duty. The
In
launcher
essence,
is 11
quarantines
gigabytes.
let you
So
have
like
more
this.
control over
And
what gets
BO6
executed
multiplayer.
when you're running
Not the
multiple
campaign,
tasks.
with
It
just the
doesn't
multiplayer is
work the
44
same way
gigabytes.
with
Like
Opponent's obviously gonna
task.spawn
be separate than
because
if
it's
multiplayer
basically like
separate.
2 different threads running individually, while with quarantines you have
Wait,
two
how are you
different
just lying,
tasks,
Wait, how are you-
but they sort of run
So you hate fat
interchangeably
liars. So you hate
depending on
fat
how
liars.
you
I mean,
handle these
the number's
quarantines.
right there.
Like,
So
I
that's
just say
pretty much
hate
going to
fat
wrap up
liars.
quarantines.
That's
It is a
everything
pretty
in total,
complicated
yes.
concept, so
See?
if there was something you didn't really
Install,
understand
right?
about
You get to
quarantines,
choose
I
what you
would
want to
advise you
install.
to rewatch this video and also
And Michael hates people who spread
maybe try and
misinformation.
watch other YouTubers who
I'm pretty
also
sure
cover
you
the same
can't
topic
just
of
launch
quarantines.
Call of
Maybe
Duty,
their
the
explanation
launcher
will
with
help
just
you into
With just a launcher?
fully understanding how
Yes,
quarantines
you don't
work.
have to have
And
it.
also just try to apply these inside of your Roblox
Hey, come on,
games.
dude. It's not like
With
the,
more
like the
practice and
$3
more
from Gravity
familiarity
Falls. You don't need
and
them
just
all.
pretty
You
much
just need one of them.
understanding how quarantines and
launcher.
multi-thread processing and all of these other concepts put together work,
Yes,
then
there's
I think
one.
you'll
Let's see.
generally have an easier
Oh my
time
God.
Say,
implementing
Michael,
these
say you hate
in
people
the
who spread
future if you decide to
misinformation.
use them. Because
Yeah,
quarantines
people
are
like Chris who
basically an
just don't do it.
indispensable
Wait, but what
concepts that
about these add-ons?
are
though?
used
You don't need those
quite a lot
add-ons.
add-ons.
for
They're
script
like literally
multitasking
like, I think
and
like a
general
couple
stuff like that.
megabytes.
It's
They
very
don't even
tough,
kill you.
but part of the
Gigabyte.
journey that's fun is just figuring this stuff out,
uninstalling
and then once you have figured this stuff
Like
out,
half a gigabyte.
it feels so rewarding to
Yeah,
you
too much
that you
Michael.
now know a complicated concept that you didn't previously know about, and that's just what's really
See,
fun
Chris,
about it. So I
you're
hope
just
your
being a
journey
fat
serves
liar
well for you,
yourself.
and I hope you found this video to be helpful. Join my Discord server, the link is in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.
I didn't trust. I literally just looked at it. Like I was literally looking at the
It's
numbers.
even worse, Michael.
Ooh,
I was looking at the store numbers. I didn't
tacos.
install it.
Yeah,
I am
but there's
quite
a reason
hungry.
It's called a launcher for a reason.
Oh no.
You should have to have a launcher for this stupid ass game.
Yes.
Okay,
Like I
okay.
said,
You might ask
you
what
don't
the heck
have-
that
you
was
don't have
about.
every single
That was
game
pretty much
style.
my introduction to what we're going to be talking about in this episode, which is going to be sounds and sound effects. And so, in
This
any
is-
video
Rock has
game
got the
you
suck
can think
emote,
of,
and I'm
not
like-
even
and
just
I'm
Roblox,
curious, you
but
want, like,
any
I'm getting
video game,
harder.
sound design is one of the most important aspects to a video game because it enhances
Oh,
the
I love
gameplay
that.
experience for
You said
everybody
50
that's playing the
gigabytes?
game.
50
Like, imagine
gigabytes
the
for everything,
example that I
everything.
just showed you like
Bro,
30
it's like
seconds ago
67.
without any
Come on,
sound.
Michael, you
It would
lied to
probably
me.
sound less cringe, sure, but those sounds are able to amplify the gameplay
What I said.
experience
So you lied
for
to me,
everybody that's
Michael.
playing the game. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do inside of this episode. So with that being said, let's jump straight
all
into
those
the
add-ons
episode.
necessary?
Alright, let's think about this for a minute. Now that we know sounds exist, where do we find these
Like, are all
sounds,
those
or in
add-ons
this
necessary?
case, audio? Well, there's two places of finding these sounds,
Well, I
and
guess some
the
of them
first
are-
one
you
is
can get
from
some,
the
like,
Roblox
exclusive
website
stuff, like,
itself
beta
in the
stuff.
Creators
Secrets.
tab. But I'm going to be showing you the second way of finding these audio, and that is from the toolbox.
So you lied
If
to
you
me.
don't remember where the toolbox is, there's
Just
two
200
ways of finding it.
gigabytes.
So the first one
I don't like
is
telling
if you
the
go
truth
to
to
home,
fat people.
there should be this
Never trust
toolbox
fat
button
cunts
under
on
the insert
line.
category.
They always
If we
say some
click that,
bullshit.
then we should
Oh, God,
see
President
a
Mike.
toolbox pop-up that shows
This
us a
must
whole
not gonna
bunch
go well.
of community created
Wait, Timothy,
resources
that's
that we
not
can
map.
implement straight into our Roblox game. The second place to find this is by
The
going
fact
to
that there are
View
three
and
of
then
you
clicking on
makes
the
me
toolbox
assume that you guys are on the
button
squad
that shows
together.
right here. I mentioned this previously when I introduced the
bait
toolbox.
this?
You should generally not use this toolbox because there's a lot of backdoor scripts in a lot of
Hey,
these
what's up,
community-created
chumps?
assets. So I would be very cautious implementing these inside of your
Oh, he knocked
Roblox
me out of
game.
that
But for the
shit.
sake of this tutorial, we'll be using it. So to find these audio, we have to click on this drop down that says models, and
Fuck.
we should see a
Oh,
tab called
shit,
audio.
get
If
out of
we
my
click
way.
that, then we should see two different
yeah, I
tabs
also did get
that
a
show
message
sound
about
effects
Spectrum.
and music.
Spectrum and
That
Grand.
So
500
in this
gigabyte
case, what we're
plan
gonna do
went up
is
to
just
600
go
gigabytes
through
at no
these
charge.
entries and
Wow.
pick out which one seems the best to us.
What
so by
the
each of these, we can click
This
this play
this stream
button
is
to test
sponsored
out
by
the audio
Spectrum. No,
before
I'm joking.
inserting it
That's-
into
I think
our
it's actually
Roblox. So
illegal to
let's hit
say.
this.
I think
Okay,
That's
so
right, I
this
think
is
you're
a
right.
simple rain sound effect.
So by the way,
Let's
I am
try
not
the second one.
It's all a lie. I just own it. And
Okay,
it's
so
very
this
nice and
one
spectacular
sounds
for me.
like a
An extra
this
100
one sounds like
gigabytes
pretty
to
good
my
music.
plan without charging
Well,
me.
this is in the
Thank you,
sound
sir.
effects category, so it doesn't really make sense.
This,
But yeah,
stream is not
this sound
sponsored.
effect
As a matter of fact,
or
I don't think there's
music
any
in this
ads
case
on this fucking
sounds
stream.
pretty good.
No
so how
ads
do we
because
insert
they're
it?
gonna take my
Well,
stream
you
from
just simply hit
copyright.
this insert button, and this will
bad.
insert it straight
so
into
you play-
our
you play fucking
workspace, and
2
it
seconds of
comes in
a
an
song and you get
instance
copyright
called a
strike.
sound. So this is pretty much what
Yeah,
it
Richard,
looks
that's what you get for being
and
a
down here in the
fucking-
properties, we
an
can see that
XQC.
we can
Whatever,
preview
dude.
this sound
Why
effect
can't
just by
XQC do
clicking
it? I
on this
can't.
play button. And
You're fat.
this is to let us know that the sound is actually working properly. So now it just comes down to implementing it through our servers. So there's an important property I want you to
Yeah, get the
understand
fuck outta
first,
here.
and
Scram.
that is this property called Sound ID.
my
And
God,
it's
this
pretty
shit
much a
will rock,
string
right?
that
Crazy.
basically has a URL of RBX asset ID : 2 forward dashes, and then you have this big number right here at the end of it. This is essentially a unique ID to this specific audio that we just pulled out, which is this song that we pulled from the audio library. So if we change this number to a different number that's also an ID for another sound, then it'll change our sound object to that new sound. So for instance, let's take another sound.
Where'd you go?
Something completely random.
Ruby
Let's
stream
insert
Black
this.
Ops 6.
This one is called Nightmare Yellow Bursts of Distorted.
No!
Richard,
As
you
you
have
can
it,
see
right?
with
Come on,
this
what's
sound
up?
ID, the URL is
some
the
fat
same,
cunt that
but
said it
what's
was
different is the number.
$300.
So this one is like 912
What?
something.
So you don't have
This one is
300
912
gigabytes of
something
space?
017. So these have
Oh no,
a
I
different
missed.
ID from each other,
Oh,
letting you know
fuck! Hit
that
him!
this is the
Oh
sound.
my god.
you could have bought like
Whatever
50
this
Seagate
sound is.
Playing with
over
regard
and
to
over.
guys.
So that's something I wanted you to know about. There's a bunch of other properties here, like
hit a
this
single
playback
fucking present
category
mic.
that shows looped, playback speed,
Come on, Pega.
time position, and volume.
Let's see.
So let me give you a quick rundown of each of these. So looped basically means that when the sound finishes, when it reaches the end of its
This
time
body
length,
guy.
then it's just simply going to play the sound again from the beginning. So if I have this selected and I just play this, then by the end, it should automatically restart. Playback speed
You
is
looped up and beta
basically
crashes the
how
game.
fast the audio is playing. So if I set this to 2,
There it is.
then it should double the speed of the playback speed. And by default, the number
Now
is
hub
1.
2.
Time
Wow.
position is where in the audio you want to start. And finally, we have volume, which obviously it's how loud or how soft the audio is when you play it. So 0.5 is the default, but a lot of sound effects I know developers use is usually at
Wow, you're
volume
fighting with
1,
only
but
100
that really
HP?
depends on your preference.
You deserve to
So that was
die.
just a quick rundown of some of the sound
trying to take my
properties
kills,
we might
chump.
use inside of our Roblox games.
So wait,
Now let's
you're
get to
telling me
playing these sound
Black
effects
Ops 6
inside
didn't-
of our game.
didn't,
So on the right side,
come out
let's
with zombies?
rename our sound to
It did.
test music. And then let's add in a script inside of workspace. So let's insert a script.
Because I've
with
been watching
bugs.
Dev
Let's first make
videos,
reference to
and
our
every
sound.
time
So
I
say
watch his
local
videos, he said, I can't wait to
music
play zombies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I
dot
reimagine.
parent dot test music.
Oh,
And there's
my
basically 4
ears.
methods or
Well, they need
functions
more
that I
time
want
to
to
put it
teach
out.
you with sounds.
Stop.
And
That would
first
be
one's
nice.
going
They
to
said
actually
they did.
play the sound.
Maybe
So
they
we're
saw the
going to
feedback,
simply
right?
just say music colon play open parentheses close parentheses, and that's literally it. It's just one simple line. So if
No,
I
I'm not
go
reviving
and
trash
hit
like you.
test,
That's kinda
as
gets a
soon
little
as we
code of
join into the
conduct.
game, then the sound should be playing. So there you go. As soon as we joined in the game, the script made the sound
Hey,
play,
what the
and it's
fuck?
going to keep on playing until it reaches the end of the sound, and then it's going to stop. Unless we have loop turned on, which in this case we don't.
What do you expect?
So if at any
From a
certain point we
freak.
want to pause the music, we would just drop
Okay.
a line down here, and we would simply just say music colon pause.
Now
open
that
parentheses,
was
close parentheses.
close.
And we can add in a task.wait here for like
Actually, I was
about
a Hawk
3
doing that
seconds
one.
for it to just pause. And when we pause it, we can also resume it too. So let's add in another task.wait.
Sorry,
for
dude.
2
In my lobby,
seconds,
you only get
and
one
put in
chance. If you
music,
die, I don't
colon,
revive you.
Resume to
Just like real life.
continue where it left off. And then finally, at the end, we could just stop it completely by saying task.wait about maybe 5 seconds, and then we'll say music, stop.
Wait, why'd you even
So
come
this
hit
will
me?
just completely stop the music,
Spiteful
and it'll make
bitch.
the time position go back to the beginning, so that we'll wait for the next
Little
time
bitch.
that we call
God damn.
music, play.
So you
now
use the
let's test the
fucking
game. So what should
concrete
happen is
4K.
in about 3 seconds, it'll pause the sound, and then it'll resume it, and then stop it.
Hold this for me.
Yeah, so it paused and then it resumed. So now after a little bit, it should completely stop. Alright, and there we go. So now we've successfully been able to play our sound. We've been able to pause it, resume it, and even stop
Just like
it.
that,
So those
I
are
am
all
out
the
of there.
methods provided to us. With
Okay, hey,
sounds
hey
on
guy.
Roblox.
I hate to
Now
be
you might have questions about
I hate to
the
be
audio
that
just
dude, but I'm
played.
getting
What
fucking
is it being played
chased.
to? How far can you
Okay,
hear this sound?
okay. Actually,
This is a concept
though.
with Roblox sounds that I'm going to be calling global and local sounds. So pretty much what you just heard was a global sound.
Not gonna make
because
it.
We had a script inside of Workspace play the sound as soon as the game started up.
Seems that I've leveled up.
Everybody inside of the game, so every player, no matter when they join the game, they will hear the same part of the sound wherever they are. And
What do you expect?
with whatever property the sound has.
Can you hit him?
So if we were in the first 30 seconds of the sound,
Only on my
then
team are the W's really ass.
all players are going to be hearing that specific part of the sound. If it's at volume 2, they're going to hear it at volume 2. And if it's
Bitch.
at playback speed 2, then they're also going to hear that. So that's pretty much what global sound is. But now you might wonder, how do we play a sound for a specific player? This is actually relatively
Hey, you're stuck in here with me.
What you do is put in a sound inside of any property that's only local to the player, like starter GUI, starter pack, starter player. Just insert sounds in there and have a local
make
script
sure
to
you die.
play that sound. So let's take starter GUI
come
for
Jeff isn't
example.
playing it?
So I'm going to take
See,
this music and put it
because he's
inside of
trash.
starter GUI. And I'm also going to disable this script since we're not going to use it anymore.
No, but
Let's
how
create
is
a
he
new
making
local
too many
script
videos
inside
while
of
also
starter
playing
GUI.
multiplayer?
And let's make reference to our test music.
No,
So we're gonna say
that's
local
gameplay.
music
He literally, he's
script
like on like
parent
the
dot
second to last
test
ammo
music.
for all guns.
Now what we'll do
Oh, really?
is we'll just simply say
That's my
music
Jeff.
play just like before. Now let's go into the game, hit test, and hit play. See what happens.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's kind of hard to tell the difference, but trust me when I say that this is being played.
God
Yeah,
damn.
he
player
was saying
whenever
that
the
some
player
people
has
are
joined the game
playing
for the first time.
zombies early.
So
I'm
meaning,
like, how does that
in
work?
about 30 seconds,
Shouldn't be
if another
possible,
player joins the
'cause
game, they're
servers
going to
shouldn't
be
even be
hearing
open
the
for zombies.
sound from the beginning and not where
Maybe
I
Jeff,
currently
maybe,
am with
maybe
the
Jeff
sound.
isn't popular now.
So
Well, they
the
can't
sound is
live stream
going to be
beta
located
tests.
inside of our player GUI, and this is where it's going to be played. So this
Well,
is
I
the
mean,
most
by
common
beta
place
you can't
would
beta
see
test
local
zombies.
sounds. It would
I'm
usually
assuming by
be
beta
inside of
test
your
you mean
player
like, you
GUI,
know,
because if you had like
like the
GUI
play
shop
testers.
or any sort of UI interface that plays a sound whenever you open it up or interact with it, then it's usually going to be played inside of starter GUI. Or just any local sound period, it's going to be played inside of player GUI. We now understand global sounds. We also now understand local sounds. But there's also
hear
another
that?
type of
Your
sound
mic is
that
messing
I
up,
would like to call
really bad.
proximity sounds. And these are basically sounds that can be heard from a specific
you need a
part
new
of the game.
controller.
Where
I
the
guess
closer
it-
you are to that part, the
Oh.
louder the sound is. But the farther you wait,
Okay,
the farther
stop, you
away
freaks.
you are from that part.
Why are you
the
reviving
quieter it gets.
mid-battle?
So,
Oh my
I
God.
think you've seen many examples
knew
of
it.
this in Roblox games before, so I think
They
you know
were
what
in
I'm
the
talking
sped
about.
class.
But if I just insert a part, and let's say there was a sound that was coming out of this part specifically.
Wait, you're his
the closer
teammate?
I walk up to it, the louder
bunch
it
of
gets.
freaks.
But then the farther away the
Stop.
character goes, the quieter the sound is going to get until it's
What
barely
do you expect?
audible. So this is what I like to call proximity sounds, and that's what we're going to do for this.
You're just some fat
So let's
liar.
find a new sound. Let's go to View and Toolbox. Let's just search up bubbles and see what comes up. Okay, yeah. It's a little bit quiet, but I think it works. So let's hit Insert. Oh yeah, and by the way,
Chill out,
whatever
bro.
instance you're selecting inside of the Explorer, whether that would be Workspace, replicated storage, or just a specific part,
Don't hit me,
if you
dude. Don't hit me,
have it
dude. Don't hit me, dude.
selected and you insert something from the toolbox, it'll automatically set its parent
that is
to
amazing.
whatever you selected.
that is
So I
amazing.
think that's something very useful to know. Okay, but let's
maybe Kevin is
rename
not
this
alive.
sound to something that's
Maybe he
easier
actually went
to
somewhere
reference.
else.
So let's just call this bubbles.
I think you might be
And
right.
Let's insert another script. So let's make reference to our sound by saying local.
Why would he? But the thing is,
I thought,
bitch. When he told me that, he was like, he was on like his home first.
And let's just
on
simply
the YouTube.
Bubbles,
He was on YouTube,
colon,
and then
we might also make the volume a little bit higher too,
but
so
then
we
he's
can
on
hear
power.
better. So let's say bubbles dot volume equals 2. And let's also make it a looped sound effect as well. So we're gonna say bubbles dot looped equals true. All right, so now let's go into the game and see our result.
Oh, I'm so
Alright, and as
faded.
you can see, we can hear the sound coming specifically from this part. And if we walk farther away from it, we're gonna hear the part less and less. And so yeah, the farther away we're walking from this part, the less audible this sound is going to be. But the further we walk up close to it, then we're gonna be hearing the sound yet again. So we're gonna be walking up just a little bit closer.
Excuse me.
And now we hear
This
the sound
game
again.
might be
So
really
this
bad.
basically works as intended. Our proximity sound effect is
No.
perfectly capable. We were able to successfully
I
create
really
the
couldn't go
sounds
to this
we
tiny
wanted
asshole.
inside of our Roblox games and implement them. But what if
Should I
let's say we
revive?
had multiple different sounds that we wanted
That's
to
my- that's
play
my right, that's my
back-to-back,
rule.
and they
Rules
also
are
had
rules.
a whole bunch of different properties that we wish we could just change
right, I'll get
within one sort of
harder.
instance. Like let's say volume. What if we wanted the volume to consistently be 1 throughout the entire thing?
Come on, you
And
freaks.
we want to, and whatever sound we're playing through this group or category, we'll just stop the whole thing entirely, and then play it again once we want it to play again. So one big example I can think of is
Holy shit!
music in general. So if you have a whole bunch of sounds that are inside of a music category, and let's say during specific parts of the game you want to play the music, then you can play music, and if you want to just completely cut off all the music, then you would do that using a group. Or if you have like a toggle
I knew it, I
inside of
fucking knew it.
sounds where you want the music to be completely off, then no music is going
Oh
to be
my
on.
god. Send me likes
All
to
of
my
this can
YouTube
pretty much
channel
be done
instead of sending me likes
using
on this
an
stupid ass
instance called
game.
a sound group. And let me show you what that looks like.
No, I don't know
So,
what. I think
where
I
would
think
we
I had like a
usually-
bot
so where would
Dobby.
we
I
put
think
the sound
my
group?
twice
We would
bots
usually
are
put it
smarter than that
inside of
Dobby.
a new service called
Yeah, he usually
Sound
no, he was a
Service.
red Dobby
And this
too.
pretty much handles
Usually fighting mid battle, he decided
all
just
the
to start
sounds
reviving
that
and then got
are
killed.
generally being played inside of a Roblox game, but I've seen successful games that don't use Sound
Get the
Service, so
fuck
you
out
don't
of my
have to use
lobby.
this, but it is quite helpful because it shows a bunch of properties that have to do with manipulating general sounds inside of your
Yay.
game. But for the purpose of this
What's my
episode, we're going to
notifications?
make a new
Buddy
sound
invite,
group.
get
So
the fuck
let's hit
out.
the plus sign,
Get the fuck out,
and
dude.
let's
I should block
insert
you
a
just
sound
kind of give me a buddy invite.
So this is what the sound group looks like, and we can pretty much just call this music.
didn't
And
mean to say
this
that,
only
my
has
bad.
one property, which is volume. I will get to this version of volume in a little bit, but as of right now, let's add some music inside of Sound Service. I'm not gonna grab actual music for copyright
How
reasons,
is
but
Dodger
let's
still
just
receiving
insert a
donations
bunch
from
of
people?
sounds inside of here.
All
Alright, I just inserted a bunch of sounds into my music.
Dude,
And like I said,
pedophile.
sound groups aren't really
I thought that
that
was- Are we allowed to
special.
say that?
It's basically just
why would
it's
we
basically
not
just
be
a
allowed to say
collection
that?
of sounds you can put inside of your game
Was that proven in
to
court?
which you can have
basically
easier
proven by
access
now.
to specific sounds that you're looking for.
I mean,
and you can modify
no,
it.
but he admitted it. He's
This will
like,
come
yes,
more
I
in
am
handy
a
when
freak.
we talk
No,
about sound
but he
effects.
changed
But
his
as of
mind,
right now,
remember? Now he
these
can
are all
see
basically
you.
placed
What do you
inside
mean?
of the same sound group for
Changed
easy
his
access.
mind on Twitter.
So let's create a local
Oh yeah, I
script
didn't put
inside
minor.
of
You just
Stardew
put
UI.
person.
And let's look
Yeah.
for our
But
music
we all
sound
saw
group.
we also saw the
we're
Wayback
first
Machine.
going
This
to
guy's in the
access
Slenderman
our
world.
sound
Yep.
service. So we're going to say
The
local
main
sound
Mac
service
machine doesn't exist anymore.
equals game
Oh, I'm meeting this guy.
get
Talking about
service
it
sound
Broken.
service. Now let's look
This
for our
guy's-
music
Michael.
sound group.
This
which
guy's-
is
Your
local
microphone.
Tell me when he
music
fixes it. I'm
equals
just muted
sound
for now.
service.
That thing's
Wait
destroying my
for
stream.
child. Open parentheses, close parentheses. Music.
Oh my god, it's so
Here's what we're gonna
fucking
do.
loud.
We're going to play a random
That's
sound
literally how your
or
fan
music
sounds,
from
too.
the sound group. So let's pick a random number
Is it like,
from 1 to however many sounds that are
That
inside of the
thing's
sound
loud.
group. So let's say
No, I mean,
local
I'm talking about
random
Richard. Like,
num
that's literally what it
equals
sounds like when we're
math.random.
sitting in a party with him.
That's-
His fan goes
one.
That's
on.
all.
comma
Good thing I knew
hashtag
myself.
symbol music colon
What
get
the
children
fuck?
because we're trying to fetch a table, not an instance. So now let's go down here and let's actually get
Hey,
that sound.
fuck you,
So
why
we're
you
gonna
doing
say
that?
local random sound
I mean, I'm pretty
sound
sure you could
equals
say
music.
pedo
in hard brackets
on
we're going to put in
YouTube.
random num. And
I
now
don't think
let's
that's
play that
banned. Why
random
would it be
sound.
banned? It's like
Random
that's like
sound.
Be a banned word.
I think it'd be banned on
Wait,
TikTok. I know it'd be done on
you can't,
TikTok.
even, you can't even say that on video.
Okay, I made a little typo here.
What? No
I'm
way.
trying to retrieve the music
Yeah,
table,
have you seen, like,
not
No,
the
don't
actual
say those,
instance
like,
when I'm
I
trying
feel
to
like they
fetch
don't
the
they don't say
Uh,
that because they don't
this
want to get
can be more readable
demonetized.
just
But
by
I don't
taking
care about
get
getting
children
demonetized.
and
I'm not
putting it
demonetized.
up
But
here
like
when we're
That's a
declaring
fat
it.
lie.
That
no,
way
no,
we
no,
don't have to
demonetized. I mean like they don't get like
So I think
ad
this makes it
revenue
a
on
little
their
bit more
video
readable.
because
Now
it
let's
gets
play
like
the game and see what happens.
I forgot that term it is,
Okay?
but they just don't
So
like show
when we
ads
joined in
on
the
it
game,
because you
it
said
played
some weird
the
words.
original song.
But I don't
Now
care
let's try playing
because
it again
I'm not,
and see,
you know,
and see if it changes.
I don't have
something
ads
different.
anyway,
Okay, and now it's playing something
so
different.
I can
which
say it
is
and I don't care.
basically alarm sound effects.
But yeah, no, but he is
Okay,
though.
and now it's
So
playing
like,
a bunch of static
what's up?
sounds.
What's up?
So this seems to work as intended. Whenever we join the game
no,
is
like,
going to
and the
automatically
worst part is he didn't
pick
deny it either.
the
Like
sound
he literally
from
said
the
it. Yeah,
music
I did it.
and just
And
play
I
it.
forgot what he said
I think
else.
we
I
pretty
don't know
much
if he
got it
was
to do what we
mad, sad
wanted
about
to
it, but he just
Now
said
there's
yeah, I
something
did it.
interesting I want you to look at. So
I
if we
think
go
he
back
just
to our
thinks he
sound group, our music
Yeah.
group,
Yeah, remember,
I
that's why
mentioned
he's
that
playing
there's
chess.
only
Yeah, he's
one
fucking
property
chess. He's
that's
like, "Are you
called
playing with
volume."
minors?
Now you might ask, what's the difference between this volume
Where'd the box
and
go?
the volume that's inside of an individual
That
sound?
shit's up here.
So if we remember back to what volume
Wait,
is
what?
for an individual sound,
No!
it's basically how loud or how quiet the sound
Did you
is when
purposely
it gets
spell
played.
Christmas
So
wrong?
if it's a volume
Yeah.
of
Put
0,
my name and
obviously
then
you're not
less?
going to be able to hear it. So the default is
I might have.
0.5, but you can also make it higher
What this?
to, let's say,
Are you red,
1
Dobby?
to even
I knew
as
it.
big as 10. So that's pretty
Bitch.
much self-explanatory. But what's sort of confusing about sound group sounds is that this volume changes the volume of every single
Wow, that's gonna hit
sound
me.
that's
That's crazy.
inside of the sound group. That part makes sense, but there is something else that trips people up about this volume property. This volume does not act as a setter for all of these sounds to just be whatever this volume is. This acts as a multiplier to set the volume of whatever each audio is to amplify it to whatever this sound is. So let's say we had this sound right here.
Can I fucking move?
0.5. If our multiplier is 0.5,
For
this is
fuck's
effectively
sake.
saying we should take this volume and make the volume by half. So 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25 because a half of 0.5 is 0.25. And let's say we change this volume to 1. 0.5,
Someone
also
here
known
with
as the
me?
half of 1, is 0.5. So that's what this new volume is going to be when you play it. And for other sounds, it could be different. If this volume is 2,
I knew it.
then the volume of this is going to be 1 because half of 2 is 1 since we have this volume multiplier set to 0.5.
Watch
now,
out.
if we set this volume to 2, it's going to double the volume of each individual sound. So if this is volume 1, then the volume of this is going to be 2 when we play it. If this is 2, then the volume is going to be 4. And this one is going to be 1 because 0.5 times 2 is 1. So that's a very distinct
What's good, man?
feature about sound group volume that I want
Oh, are you and
to
his teammate? I just wanna
understand,
fuck with
because
him.
people do get tripped up by it. So I want to say this one more time. The sound group volume is a multiplier of all of these different sounds. It's not a setter for all of these sounds to have the same
Why are you
volume
acting retarded?
as whatever this sound group volume
What?
property
You heard
set.
me, dude. Remember? I could say it.
And for the last part of this
Ah,
episode,
no!
I'm going to do a brief introduction to sound
Wait,
effects.
is his
I'm not gonna
teammate?
go too
My
much into
teammate
detail
is on the
about
side of the other side of the map.
Maybe I'll do that in the future.
This guy's hitting me.
Basically, a sound effect is a sound
Oh my
modifier
God.
to current
Am I playing
sounds
solo
or
queue?
music that you already have inside of your game. So
I'm just torturing
this
myself, but
can
it
be
feels
found inside of our
amazing.
sound groups, and it's convenient to
I'm
have
like,
these in
I'm
a
like
sound
those
group
masochist
because we
people.
want to we want to add a
This hurts
sound
so much,
effect
but
to
it
every
feels
single
amazing,
sound
dude.
that's inside of a sound group. So this is pretty much what it's going to look like. Let's hit the plus sign next to our sound group music,
I love how
and
ass these
we can
people are.
see that Roblox is suggesting us to add in a whole bunch of different sound effects. So we have chorus, we have distortion,
Who
pitch
the
shift,
fuck?
reverb.
That looks
reverb,
so
echo,
gross,
and
bro.
equalizer.
Who dips
But
their
let's say
chicken
we want
nuggets
to add
in like a
chorus
McFlurry?
sound effect. Let's add that in, and it's
What
going to be
the
dropped
fuck?
into our sound group
That shit
alongside
looks
our other
nasty.
sounds.
And
So
what
if we click on this,
McFlurry
we
is
can see
that?
that there's a bunch of stats here.
That looks like someone
like
just shit
dev,
in like a
min,
McFlurry
priority
cup
rate.
and just
I'm
like
not
said
gonna go
like,
over
here
these,
we are,
but
our machine
I'm
bro.
sure the
It's like,
default
what is
settings
this?
are good enough as of right now. So it's pretty much as simple as that.
Shit.
All we did
Cause
was
like,
basically
what?
add in a
That thing
sound
looked
effect into our
gross. Oh
sound
my
group
god.
alongside our sounds, and it'll automatically put that sound
But
effect
yeah, no,
inside
I
of
don't
these
know.
sounds when we
People
play them.
fucking dip
So
their
let's
shit in
hit
that.
play.
I
and
can
listen to our
go
new
with
sounds.
dipping your fries in Frosty, and only Frosty because it tastes
So
weird
it
if
is
you
kind
do
of
it in
hard
like,
to
I
notice,
tried it
but
once. That
there
tastes
is
nasty.
a sort of chorus.
I don't know
or
if it's the
echoey
fries or I don't know if it's the
sound
McFlurry.
effect to the sound that's being played right now. Let's
But
try
for
a different
Frosties,
sound
it
to see
actually
what
works
we
because Frosties are just the goat, and I think they're better than McFlurries.
So
So that might be
it's
hot
hardly
topic.
noticeable, but there is a
do you
very
think, Michael?
slightly echoey sound effect by the end of the sound that's being
Are
played.
you a
That's
McFlurry guy
basically
or
a small
Frosty
introduction
guy?
to sound effects that
McDonald's
Roblox has
Minecraft.
provided for us to
McDonald's
manipulate
Minecraft.
our sounds a little
Yeah,
bit.
sorry.
So I just think it's something pretty useful to have when you're using this
McDonald's
alongside
ice cream
sound
is
groups.
just
So that's pretty much going to
ice
sum up
cream, I
sounds,
swear.
sound groups, and even sound effects
That
as well.
shit is not
I hope you
ice
found this
cream at
episode to be
all.
helpful. This is definitely
Yeah,
going
I've
to
had
be
it
used
not
very
recently.
often.
I
I
would
don't think I really
say-
need to say
Yeah,
anymore.
like, I think
sounds. It's kind of just one of those
6-7
things.
months
You
ago, I
need
had
to
a
have them in a
McFlurry.
Roblox game.
And
So I
bro,
hope that
did
when you
not
watch this
taste
video
like ice cream.
and use this when you're making your Roblox
Even
games,
with the
you will
fudge,
find
even with the
this- you'll find
M&Ms,
this
it
tutorial
did
to be
not
helpful to
taste
you.
like ice cream
And
at
overall,
all.
I just think that this is a really
That
nice
shit.
feature.
Oh,
Because it gives us easy access to audio using
No,
their
it just
entire
it happens
audio
at random.
libraries.
This guy's someone to
Add
house
these
really
sounds and
random.
music
Oh my God.
and just play them whenever we want to. And I just think
But
it's a
yeah,
neat feature.
I don't know.
All right, well, that's gonna be it for this episode.
When's the
Join my
last time?
Discord
I
server.
haven't
The
had
link
in a
is in the
minute
description.
either.
And I will see
I
you
always
in the
get
next
M&Ms.
episode.
I don't like the Oreo
Take care.
ones.
I want to make an
No,
obstacle
yeah, my
course,
dad loves
but
the Oreo
let's imagine
ones, or
this for a
used to.
minute.
So he
If we
started going to
had
McDonald's
multiple
altogether.
kill bricks,
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of no point of going to
we
McDonald's
plan
anymore
to use
because
inside
one,
of
they're
our
too
obby
expensive
that
to
we're
be
trying to
noted as a
create.
fast
We
food
would probably
joint,
want more than
and
one of these kill bricks.
their food just
Since
ass
these
with
kill
it.
bricks are
No,
basically run through.
I
The
don't know.
pricing isn't the
By
only
each
thing that
space
makes a
and
fast
by
food
part.
joint.
That's like
I
a
made
big
script
fact.
here
You have
where it's like,
good pricing or
if a
good
player that
food?
has a humanoid touches it, then their health.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, everything makes it
That's
quick,
pretty much
you
how
know?
you make a kill brick.
Fast food.
So if we had one
No,
of these,
the fuck,
then
if I
it
go to
pretty
an
much
Applebee's,
works
my
just
food
as
ain't coming
expected.
That's not fast
What if we
food.
wanted to add more kill bricks
That's
to
what I
our
mean.
obstacle course, which is what we're most likely going to do. This is
Oh,
probably
my
God.
so let's take our part.
I'll just say muted,
It happens
bro.
at random, man.
Here, diagonally over here, and then let's take another one. Just
Oh, but that shit does hurt a
over
lot.
here. Let's take all these three, duplicate it,
No, but
and
McDonald's-
drag it.
McDonald's is
over
bad in
this
general.
way.
It's
Okay, so now it looks like
What
we have
the
a
fuck? Who's throwing that at me?
stage.
Yeah, no.
Can you hit him?
It's just
So this
it's
should
just dropped
pretty
in
much work as
quality.
expected. But
Well, I mean, it
here
did
is
increase in
quality
price.
everything.
now
Like,
that we
judging
duplicated
quality,
our
No.
parts
price,
that had
the
our
increase.
Kubrick script, it also
Okay, yeah, it's
duplicated
crazy how they're
the same
increasing the
script
price, yet
for
the quality
all
has
these
gone
other
down.
parts that are
thought people just
contained
used to
here
add
with our one
Well, yeah,
save.
but, like,
Now, why is
still.
this a problem?
Even the
It's a
discounts
problem
don't
mainly
matter.
because if we have the
I
same
still
script
wouldn't buy
being
that shit
copied
with
and
discount.
pasted over and over again,
It's like how
to
like
all
I
these
think they were
different parts,
advertising like
it's
I
going
think
to
like
be
for like
very
1 or 2 or
disorganized
3
and
micro
very confusing
yeah.
to just
For
go
1,
back
2
to
or
each
3
of these
days
scripts
they're
and
gonna be
modify it if I
selling
need to.
10-piece
And it's also
nuggets
just
for like
bad for
$1.
optimization in general. Because through our obstacle,
Rest
if
in
we
peace to all
touch
those
any one of them,
McDonald's
it should
workers
basically
those
fire
2 days.
that
The Krabby
individual
Patties?
script for that individual part. But what I'm trying to get at
Yeah, like
here
the
is
Krabby
that
Patty,
what
I
if all
guess.
of these were run in the same script and
Wait, who's
not
this freak?
with 6 individual scripts?
So the
I
Krabby
think
Patty
that
was an
approach would
interesting
definitely be a
I
lot
think
better
Wendy's really
than
slacked.
what we're trying to do.
Oh
They
my
just-
god.
So that's what
Okay,
I'm
you guys
Krabby
win. You
Patty
guys
thing.
win. You guys win.
using a feature called collection service. So with that being said, let's get
I
straight
know it's just a
Alright, let's think about
sandwich.
this for a minute. So in my example with
Something
these kill
else
bricks
they
that
coulda
we want
had.
to be able to
Kid.
kill the player whenever they touch it,
Wait, one of them used
we don't
crab meat?
want
Yeah, crab meat, dude. That would've been
That would've
amazing.
like
That
this
would've
code
been
right
funny.
here to be
That
inside
tasted
of
amazing.
6
I was like,
different scripts when we're trying
Alright,
to
you can
make
have the
each of
box.
these parts
Fuck.
functional. Our goal
Oh
is
my
to try
god,
and
my
take all
don't
these
don't
parts
even
to be
fucking.
executed by the same script.
You're still
So they just
chasing
run
me?
inside of one script and
Even though
not
you're
6 of
low?
them. So how do we achieve this?
Yeah,
We
and I think
achieve
like
this
I
through
said,
a
someone
feature
leaked
called
the
collection service.
like
And a
what
good
the
way to
special
understand
sauce
this
is made
let's
of
say we have
for the Krabby
collection
Patty,
of
and it's I think
parts.
they literally
We
just said
take
it's
all the
special.
parts that are
Die
inside
faster,
that
die
collection
faster,
as
die
if
faster.
This was its own table, and we
What
run
time is
the
it?
code
It's
that
only
we need to
11:30.
Negative, yeah.
for each of
Yeah,
these
both of you get the fuck out.
But-
Both of you get the
but
fuck out and
instead,
suck my
it could
cock
just be
already.
done
I thought there was,
Dude.
I thought there was
one
a
script when
ketchup
we
mustard
walk
and
through
like
talking to
each
secret
of
sauce.
the
Oh,
objects
they're
in
not
the
children.
collection.
If they're
That's
children,
cool,
they.
but now you might ask, how do we make this collection of color?
Go ahead.
So the way we do that is by putting
These
a
guys are
tag
ass.
for each of these kill bricks to
Come on,
represent the collection that it's a part of. So here's how we're gonna do it. We first need to
They're
figure
not
out how
underage.
to create
I
these
can smell their
tags,
neck beards from
and
here.
we can do that using Roblox's
Yeah, what is this? A
built-in
Thunder
tag
Disrespect
editor,
stream?
which can be
What I'm
found
saying.
up here inside of View. we can hit this little button here that says Tag Editor. And
Wait,
this
I
will
know this
pull up
guy.
a window on the right
No,
side.
get me out. I
showing
can't
us an
cancel
empty
it
list
out.
of tags because we haven't created any tags yet. And so in order to create a tag, we just need to press this button that says New Tag, and it's going to highlight this text box in which we're just going to insert a
Everyone
tag
eat fast food,
name.
which I
In
don't
other words, this is
anymore.
pretty
I
much
think I would just go
the
to
name
Wendy's
we're
because
going
that's
to
like
give
one
our
super
Kilbricks
accessible and
collection.
two it's
So
actually
we're
like
just going to
decent
call
food.
this
Yeah,
Kilbricks,
their
and we're gonna
quality
hit
is
enter.
not diminished.
So now we have our
like,
Kilbricks
almost
tag,
at all.
and now we need
I
to
don't
Then
know
the
how
price got a
fine
little
all
bit.
of our parts that we want
Prime
to
Wendy was
the
4
price
for
of
4.
it.
that we want
I
to
don't care
add
about
to the
price.
Kilbricks
I've always cared about
So let's just
like,
select
the
all of our
quality of the
Kilbricks,
food.
and
Prime
let's
Wendy's
press
was
this
4
check mark here that says apply this tag
Wendy's
to all
4 for 4.
selected
Yeah, oh,
instances.
you get
So
so
let's
much
press
value
that,
out of that thing. It's
and
kind of
now
That was
all
Prime
of these
Wendy's.
parts should have
What?
a
No, I
Kilbricks
mean, they still have the
tag
$5
attached to
biggie
it.
bag, and that's
And
still good.
we
You get two
can
$5
see
biggie
this
bags. You're
by
definitely
just
nice.
simply selecting one of them, and if
My
this check mark is checked, then
guy's
that
the
means
fucking
it
Italian
has the tag Kilbricks. You can also check it down here in properties.
Hey, you
inside
get
of
two
our
biggie
tags
bags? Yeah, fuck the
category,
Krabby Patty
and we can
meals. Just
see
get two
that
biggie
it's
bags
inside
if
of
you
the
don't know
Kilbricks
You eat
category.
2 biggie
And we can
bags?
see that it has the Kilbricks
used
tag.
to.
So this is how we use the tag editor
Oh,
to
good.
how we add tags to our instances. So now let's go and create a script to take all of these items and
Dude, does this
make
thing
it
have
function.
Burger King, dude?
We're going
They
to
have
do
a
that by
$5.
creating a script
You can get
inside of
2
server
Whopper
script
Juniors.
service. So we're going to hit the plus sign, create a new script. Let's just
Wasn't
rename
that
Yeah,
always
we
a
went to
thing?
collection service.
We went to
Oh,
Burger
is
King.
it?
Okay,
wouldn't know.
and so the
I would
first thing
assume it
we're
would be
going
always
to
a
do
thing. I mean, like I
is
said, Burger
make
King's known for
reference
cheap
to
shit.
our collection service, you know? So we're going to say local
Yeah, well, not
collection
either. I don't know if it was
service
just because I was hungry, but those chicken
equals
wraps are pretty
game
good. I
called
didn't know we had
get
them actually.
service.
Yeah, I like the chicken
Florida.
wraps.
Parentheses, close parentheses, in quotations, we're going to say
I'm surprised.
Snack wraps
collection
rule over everything
service.
else. Snack wraps are just
So
something
remember
different.
how I
Probably not.
mentioned that
Probably
when
not
we
now.
tag
Like I
all
said,
of these
McDonald's is
parts
just falling
inside
off.
of a collection, this collection is essentially a table full of these instances.
The worst part is they were
where
at
we can
Wendy's
iterate
too, and they were even
through
better.
all
But
of
then they
these
fucking got rid of it
parts to
because
then
they
make
thought like
the
I guess
Kilbrick
reverse FOMO.
active.
They were like,
And
oh
so
no,
the
if
way we're
McDonald's
going
gets
to
rid of it, we might as well get rid of
retrieve
it too.
this
You know?
table of items
was
from
like,
the
these
collection
fucking
is by
guys.
using a function called
They brought like a bag,
So
but it's
this
like a
is pretty
really
much what it's
shitty
going to
version. It's
look
like the cool.
So we're first going to
cool
create a
West, I don't know
variable
what the fuck it
to
is.
store our
Cool
table
Ranch,
full
something. I don't know,
of
something like
Kilbricks.
that.
So we're going to say
And it's like
local
$7 and it's
kill
super ass. I'm like, what the
bricks
fuck?
equals collection service
Hey, wake up,
colon,
stupid.
get tagged. And you have to remember that it is get tagged specifically. I will go over the
Wow,
other
the
methods
audacity
that
that comes still
a
go
little
for
bit,
me is
but
crazy.
just remember that get tagged is the method of collection
Yeah,
service
Wendy's
that
is
we're
the
going
only
to use
place. I don't know
to
why
retrieve
here,
a table
But
full
like
of
every single
the
Burger
items
King
that we're
here
looking
has
for
like the
inside
worst
collection.
serving quality,
So
or they just
inside
suck.
these open close parentheses,
It's like really bad
we're
here.
you're
at the Burger
trash.
King.
our collection
And granted,
name,
the
which
Burger King
over
I
here
went to
we
in
set
New
it to
Jersey
be
wasn't that
Kilbricks.
good either.
So
It
we're
actually
going to say
sucked
kill
in terms of
And I do
service.
want to note that this is case sensitive, so you
I
have
know
to
they
make
still
sure
output
the
the
name
food.
is exactly
Boom,
what
bitch.
you made the tag name to be. This is pretty
Here
much
comes
our
a
tag name that
boom,
we
you know?
create,
Like, that's what the Big
and
Justice
we're
does.
basically telling collection service to
Alright,
give us
that's
a
enough.
table
I'm gonna go to bed.
of all of the Kilbricks.
It's 11:30. I
that
was
have
hoping Kevin
the
was going. He
Kilbricks
said he was
tag
gonna,
that we gave
but
it.
I guess
So now that we
because,
have this table full of
at least I
Kilbricks,
guess, what
let's
is it?
loop through all of
much
these
clothing.
So let's
You
go
have
down
got to
here
be sure. Okay,
and
okay,
we're
you
gonna
win, you
say
win, you win. You can have everything. You can have my
Come on,
life. You can have my life.
kill
You can have my life already.
in pairs. Open
These
parentheses,
guys,
close
Yeah.
parentheses,
these guys just
Yeah,
start
well,
fucking
right.
with me.
bricks. And I
I
want
said
you
it was
to
Friday
note
too, so
that
today would have been a
I
good
made
day
a
for
variable
all of
here
us,
called
but
kill brick,
What?
but
It's
this
about to wait
is
till
referring to
tomorrow.
our kill bricks table that we created.
Okay. Well,
So
I'm gonna go to
over
sleep.
here we're going to say do,
Tired.
and now
So,
what we're pretty
good
much
night,
going
guys.
to
Alright,
do
good night.
is take our code that we had here
Oh,
with
wow,
our
I'm
touch
actually liking
event
that.
and basically just copy it over to our
It's supposed to be like
format.
a sign.
So let's take our original script, let's copy it, and then paste it into here. And now
Sign
this
that I
kill
must keep
brick is
going.
basically applied to this touched event right here for each individual
Shut the
kill
fuck
brick.
up.
So now it's
I'm
pretty much
never
looping
gonna play with you
through
guys again.
each of the kill bricks inside of our kill bricks
This day on, I
table
might as well be a
and
solo.
adding a touched event to that
I was
kill
playing
brick
for my life and
to do exactly what we wanted to do. So we don't have to write
I'm so
six
upset. I
different
could've killed that
scripts
Todoroki
to
too.
put it all in each
There's two
of
goons
these
around my ass all the time.
instances. Instead, what we can do is create a tag and apply that tag to all of these instances, grab all of the instances from the tag, and then loop through that table full of instances and do what we want to do. And that's pretty much it. Let's
Come on,
delete
give
all
me
of our
something
original
good.
Killbrick scripts that we had and let's try this out in game to see if this works or not. So let's go into the game, hit test and hit play. Alright, so let's try out our obby. I'm able to get through pretty normally, but let's see what happens if we step on one of them. So it looks like that this one worked when I stepped on it. Now let's try stepping on this one. This one seemed like it also worked too. So our collection service script should be running just as planned. So we were able to do all of this inside of one script after looping through all of the items inside of our collection to be able to do what we wanted it to do rather than have 6 different scripts for each individual object. So what I just showed you pretty much demonstrates the whole concept of collection service. But let me show you some other things you can do with collection service. So there's 3 commonly methods that trip people up when they're working with collection service.
Hey, quit throwing shit at me.
Get tagged, get tags, and get all tags. And I'm going to
Wow,
be
you actually
explaining
heard
the
me.
difference among all 3 of these. So get tagged is basically
Oh my
a method
God.
in collection service that retrieves a table full of all of the instances that have the tag that we're trying to find and return, so that we can set this up into a variable and then we can loop through all of the instances that do have this tag that we were looking for. The next method I want to introduce to you is called get tags, which is not the same as get tagged. So get tags is basically saying we want to know all of the tags that are contained inside of one specific object that we provide. So you know how over here if we selected one of our parts and we go down here, we can see in the tags category that there's one tag in here called kill bricks. We could even add another tag in here by hitting this plus sign, and we can even create a new tag right here just by saying something, just by giving it a new name, like new tag or something. So now this part has 2 tags, kill bricks and new tag. So if we make reference to that specific part, so let's go in here and rename this
You know what they say, you can only chase a
part 1, and let's go
guy
into
for
our
so
script.
long.
We're basically going to tell collection service that we want to know all of the tags that are inside of part 1, and we want to return it as a table. So let's go in here and let's make a variable called part tags, and we will set this equal to collection service colon get tags, open parentheses, close parentheses, and we're basically going to throw in our
Holy
specific
shit.
part that we want to get the tags from, which is part 1 inside of workspace. So we're going to say game.workspace.part, and what we can pretty much
You're
do
his
is
teammate,
just
you just wanna
loop
fight me
through
together.
these part tags so that we can print all of these out to let us know all of the tags that this specific part contains. Because what's pretty much going to print out is it's going to print out kill bricks and new tag. But let's see how this is written. We're
Motherfucker.
going to say for I tag in pairs, open parentheses, close parentheses, part tags do, and then we're going to print the tag. So let's go into the game and see our change. Alright, so in the output we should see that kill bricks and new tag is printed, because those
Wow,
are
he can really dodge
all the
like that.
tags that are set within part 1 specifically. So that's the difference with get tagged and get tags. But there's one more, which is get all tags, which is a more global, more general method that you would use.
I can swallow
So in our
up,
get tags
bottle
example,
up, I can
this
haul it
told
up,
us to
feel like
get the
Godzilla.
tags from a specific
Right,
instance.
hit the deck like
But what
I'm
if
a
we wanted to
Godzilla.
just get all the tags that are available inside of the game? Then we would just simply say local all tags equals collection service colon get all tags, open parentheses, close parentheses, and there's no arguments that need to be put inside of here. And we can just do the same thing with our for loop here. We can just
want
say
some Mario
for
type shit.
I, comma, tag in pairs, all tags do, print tag. So
Oh yeah,
this
no,
will
I'm not
basically
about you guys.
do the same thing as this, but this is
Why
going
would
to
I?
get all the tags that exist inside of
Only
the
a
game.
fucking dumbass would do
inside of
that.
our tag editor, if we had like 5 or 10 different tags, it's going to print all of those tags that exist inside of the output. So if we go into the game and hit play,
So I
then we
mean, like,
should
at this
see
point, you
all of
might
the
as well
tags
just
being printed
leave.
into the output. Okay, so ignore these
Oh,
first two
that
because
actually scared
this was
me.
for our first for loop. But for our second for loop, it basically printed
best give up.
these 3 down here, which was new tag, kill bricks,
Yeah.
and tag editor, tag
That's what,
container. Don't worry about that one. We did not create that one. So that's
That's
basically
what
the
Omega
difference
Shannon says.
between all 3 of them. This one is not used very often, but I would say get tagged is the most useful one to know about, and the one you're going to be using the most in your scripts. So with our tag editor, we were able to create tags and add our parts to that tag before joining into the game while having scripts. So I'm going to be showing you how to add these tags and also remove them through scripting at any points throughout the game's runtime. So let's add in a new part. So let's just go into workspace, let's insert a new part, and we're going to rename this part to new part. And let's make this special just by changing the size a little bit. Let's even change the color of it as well. Okay, so here's a new part, and let's say we want to add this to our Kill Bricks collection without manually doing it in the tag editor, because all we can do is just select this and click the check mark and it's already in the Kill Bricks collection. But let's say we want to do this through script. We're going to use a method called add tag. So let's comment out these print statements that we have. What we're going to do is find this new part that's inside of workspace, and we're going to add it to our collection using a function called add tag. So this is what it's going to look like. Let's first find our new part by saying local new part equals game dot workspace
crazy.
colon wait for child open parentheses close parentheses quotes new part, and we're wrapping this in a wait for child just in case the part doesn't load in fast enough during runtime for the script. So now what we'll do is we will use our add tag function. So we're going to say collection service colon add tag,
you guys are your teammates.
and this will take in two arguments. So the first one is going to be our instance that we want to add a tag to, which is going to be our new part, comma, and our second argument is going to be our collection or tag name, which in this case it's Kill Bricks. So in quotations we're going to say Kill Bricks. So this add tag method, it's going to take our new part, add our Kill Bricks tag to that part. And of course, we can remove the tag as well. So let's just make a task.wait really quick. Task.wait about 5 seconds. And we're going to say collection service colon remove tag. Parentheses, close parentheses. We're going to take our new part and we're going to remove the Kill Bricks tag name from that new part. Let's also add this task.wait statement behind here so that we can really see the change when we load into the game. So let's add in another task.wait statement right before we add the tag. Let's actually make this 7 seconds so that we can load into the game in time to see the change. So let's go into the game, hit test and hit play, and let me open up the workspace so that we can see the tags inside of our new part. So let's scroll down here, we can see that there's no tags, and now we added the Kill Bricks tag to our new part, and after 5 seconds, it got rid of that tag from our new part. So it basically worked as expected. This is useful for at any point during the game we want to add tags to specific parts to then do stuff to that part as part of a collection. There's also another function where we're allowed to check if a specific part has a specific tag that we're looking for. So let's say that after we add in a tag for our new part, let's make a check to see if this new part still has the Kill Bricks tag. We're going to say if collection service colon has tag.
Finally, Kevin, fuck me.
It's going to take in two arguments. The first one's going to be the instance, which is going to be our new part, comma, and then our tag, which is going to be Kill Bricks. So if this new part has the Kill Bricks tag, then what we're going to do is print out a statement by saying new part has tag. And let's copy this and put it down here after we tag to see the difference. So what should happen is that this is going to print because new part does have the Kill Bricks tag.
I'm gonna tell you
This one is not going to go through because we removed the Kill Bricks
I'm gonna tell
tag
you
from
to
the
tell
new part.
Chris
So as you can see,
about the
we
time
printed
we're
out
gonna
new
be
part
heading
has
over
the
there.
tag, but then in about 5 seconds, we're not going to see the other print statement because we removed the Kill Bricks tag from the new part. So now this if statement is not valid. the new part does not have the new tag, so this is not going to run. So Collection Service has provided us 2 events that we can use to check whether a tag has been either added to a new part, or if a tag has been removed from a part. So we can have this event fire whenever one of these 2 instances happen. And we can do this using an event called Get Instance Added Signal and Get Instance Removed Signal. So this is pretty much what it's going to look like. Let's go into our Collection Service script and let's drop 2 lines after our beginning for loop. And this is what we're going to say. We're going to say Collection Service.
Oh, how are you doing?
You good? Instance added signal. And then inside of these parentheses, we're going to put in our tag name, which is going to be kill bricks. And then this is going to be wrapped around in a function by saying colon connect function open parentheses, close parentheses, enter. So this is pretty much what our header is going to look like. So we're going to use our get instance added signal, which is basically saying if there is a new instance that this tag has been applied to, then we're going to execute whatever is going to be down here inside of this function. So let's just make a simple print statement by saying print kill brick has been added to the collection. And then we can pretty much do the same thing with when we remove a kill brick tag from the instance.
I can't spell Sotra. Where's the other teammate? He was the last teammate. Oh my god, I fucked up.
Colon, get instance.
Why did you go for me then, Bakugo, you fucking idiot?
And then over here, we're going to say kill bricks.
I lost. What did he do? Because he fucking went for me, even though they had like 2 other teammates.
Print kill brick has been removed from the collection. And so there we go. Now we have 2 instance signal events from Collection Service that keeps track of when a kill bricks tag has been added to a part and when a kill bricks tag has been removed from a part. So let's go into the game and we should see our new change. Alright, so as you can see, the event has fired to print Killbrick has been added to the collection, and in about 5 seconds it should then say Killbrick has been removed from the collection, which is exactly what we wanted the script to do. Before I end off the video, I want to show you an example of me using Collection Service alongside other infrastructures for one of my games that I'm currently working on. So over here, we have these obstacles of these spinning parts, and if the player touches these parts, then they basically end up dying. So in my game, I have it set up to be compatible with object-oriented programming and also streaming instances. Don't worry if you don't really know what that means right now. In the future, we will go over more complicated topics like them. But what I wanted to show you was that these parts work perfectly fine with the way they're spinning, and also when you touch them, they kill you. So let's see what happens if I just run all the way back here to where we can barely see them, and it'll basically just disappear from our view when we walk far away enough. So there you go. It's pretty much all the way back there, and what should basically be happening is that the script that's running them is basically dormant right now. You can't even see or tell whether these are running in the background or not. And to tell you the truth, they're actually not running. They're completely still. The scripts that's running all of them are not even running right now because they're out of view. But once we go back into view, where we can see them again with streaming instances, we can see that it's running again back to where it originally was after the script had stopped the functionality of these obstacles when we went out of view. So Collection Service comes a long way. When you add these inside of your Roblox games, there's a combination of things that you can put together to create really powerful stuff, like with the use of instant streaming and object-oriented programming alongside Collection Service. You can have really powerful frameworks that enhances optimization for your Roblox game, and that's pretty much what Collection Service is all about, improving and optimizing your Roblox game, not only for the players, but also for the devs as well. So that's kind of the whole idea here, and you kind of have to experiment with this stuff to really get Collection Service and all of these other advanced scripting concepts under your belt. So that's just one last thing I wanted to show you. So to pretty much summarize, Collection Service is a feature made by Roblox that heavily optimizes the way we organize our scripts when we're trying to pretty much make a whole bunch of instances operate and function the same way without having to write the same script every single time, but instead do it all inside of one script. That's pretty much the basic idea of collection service, and I hope you'll be able to implement these inside of your Roblox games for the future to come. If you found this video to be helpful, be sure to subscribe and join my Discord server. The link is in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care. You ever had those instances when you were writing scripts for your Roblox game and you pretty much had to reuse a lot of code that was from one script into the next? Let me show you something that I've written here. So I have this function that I don't even know what the heck it does, but let's say I wanted to use this in a different script. The only way I would be able to use this in, let's say, this script is I would literally have to take my function and I would have to paste it into my new script so that I can use this function inside of this script and not this one. So this is already a problem because duplicate code is never usually a good thing to have in your scripts because it can be very disorganized very quickly, especially if your games become a lot more complex in the future. We might even do the same thing with our third script here. I would just copy and paste the same exact function because there's no way we can access these functions outside of the script that the function was created in. And not just functions, but also variables that we want to access in other scripts and not just the one that it was created in. This is pretty much where module scripts come in, as part of what we're going to be talking about in this episode to help us with this problem. But before we start implementing these module scripts, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into what these module scripts actually are. Alright, let's think about this for a minute. So far in our Roblox development journey, we've been able to create scripts that run on the server, and we've been able to create local scripts that run on the client as known as a player. So these two types of scripts are very important, but now we're going to be introduced to a third type of script called a module script. So you might ask, what the heck is a module script and why is it useful? A module script, it's essentially a script that allows you to access its content outside of that script itself to any other scripts that's inside of the game. So let's say I had this function called change base plate color. Instead of only being able to access this function inside of the scripts that it was created in, I want to access this function inside of other scripts without having to recreate the same exact function. That's one example. Another example would probably be a global countdown timer for if you're playing a round-based game. You want to be able to access that variable in multiple scripts, not just the script that it was created in. And so, in my opinion, those are the two most useful cases for using module scripts. It's to access information outside of that script that created that information. Alright, but now let's create our module script. And something that's actually really interesting about module scripts is, you know how with scripts, it can only be accessed in the server. With local scripts, it can only be accessed in the client. But for a module script, it can actually be accessed by both the server and the client. So that's something really interesting to know about. And because we can access this module script from both the server and the client, we might say that we want to put it inside of replicated storage. And for the sake of this example, we are going to create a module script inside of replicated storage. But you can basically create this module script anywhere. It can be inside of replicated storage. It can be inside of server script service, server storage, starter pack, starter player. You can pretty much have it anywhere depending on how you want to use this module script. But for the first time, we're going to create it inside of our replicated storage. So let's hit the plus sign and let's create a module script, which looks like this. And you might notice that this looks pretty interesting. So we have built-in code here that's not just our simple hello world print statement that we usually have in scripts. So let me try to give you some insight into what this syntax means. So let me just scroll.
Look at the iron I got.
So we have two lines here. We have a local variable just simply called module, and this is a table. And we're basically returning this empty table that the script has already created for us. So what does this mean? This pretty much tells us that a module script in reality is basically just a table. And you can put whatever information you want inside of this table, and the script will return this table that we created
multiplayer
full
with
of
all the
information that we put down inside of here. And so if we want to use this module script, we have to call it inside of a different script and then use whatever is inside of the contents of this module script. So if that part didn't make sense to you, let's start putting information in this table and let's fetch this information inside of the script. So because this is a table, we can put whatever information we want inside of this table. So let's
I
drop
might
a
just
line
like go
inside of our
excuse
module
him and just
table.
watch.
And
they're
let's make a
fighting?
variable. Let's call
some
this variable
shows.
my number, and we're going to set this equal to some number, which we'll probably just say 10, and we will separate this with a comma because this is a table full of multiple entries. And let's drop a line and create another
put the
entry.
cover
So
anywhere?
we're going to call this one
I know, I'll do what I
my
want.
string equals
What the hell?
hello world or something
Okay.
like that. So now we
gotta
have
be
two
stern.
pieces of information inside of our table. And of course, we're not going to use a local scope
Now while everyone
because
fights, I'm
this
gonna
is
grab
a
this.
table full of information. So essentially now what we're doing
It's a
is
perfect
we put in
plan.
information inside of our table, and now we're going to return this. So now how do we access
Oh,
this
except this
information
fucker came over
outside
here.
of this module script? We're going to do that by using a function called require. So let's create a new script. Let's go to server script service. Let's hit the plus sign and create a new script. Let's rename the script to module call. Let's delete this here, and we're going to make reference to our module script inside of replicated storage. Now, this is a beginner's mistake that a lot of people do. What you probably would do is just simply make reference to the module script itself, just by saying,
Excuse me?
module script equals game.replicated storage.
I'm gonna kill him if it's the last thing I fucking do.
Script. And you might think that, okay,
Well,
so
there
now we
goes my
have a
promise.
module script, we can just access the information that's inside of it. This is not the case because we have to use a specific function
Motherfucker.
to be able to take whatever is inside of this module and get that module when this returns it. We have to essentially wrap this reference around inside a require function. So it's going to look like this. We're going to say require and then open
Wonder if we share?
parentheses, close parentheses. This is what it's actually going to look like, because if we did just game.replicated.module script, it's referencing the instance, but what we really want is the actual table full of the
Who the
information that
fuck?
we're looking for. So now what we can do is we can basically just write a print statement, and
That shouldn't
we can
hit, that should
directly
not hit.
access our variables that are inside of this module table. So we can say module script.
Who are you? Are you even a teammate or just wanna hit me too?
And we can also access the module script my string as well. So if we hit run, then we should see our change in the, so we should see in the output that we printed the number 10, and we also printed hello world because we successfully made a module script table that has variable information, and we required that using a different script to then get the information that we wanted and print it out.
was
And
crazy.
that's the really cool thing about module scripts. We can create stuff inside of this module and access it in any other
I'm
script.
alive.
We can even do the same thing with a local script. Let's say in Starter GUI, we had a local script. We can pretty much do the exact same thing inside of our local script. Now, of course, this is only going to work if I'm actually playing the game, but we're not going to do that. So that is the cool thing about module scripts. There's also one quick little thing I want to note, is that a module script doesn't need to only contain a table full of information or functions to then return this module to whatever script is going to fetch this module. We can even have it execute code if we decide to actually fetch this module script. So what I'm talking about here is that outside of our actual module script table, we can do regular stuff inside of this module script as if it was a normal script. So we could pretty much just say print module script has been activated, something like that.
Who are you,
Now,
dude?
the problem with this is that if we decide to just run this on our own, without calling it, so if we just run it, this print statement is not going to run. It's just going to print some examples that I had previously, no worry about that. But in essence, this print statement is not going to run because there's no script
Alright, you
that
can have them.
required this module script that we created yet. So in order to print this, or any code that we want to execute, we need to first require this module script that we created. So let's create a new script over here, and let's make reference to our module script by saying local module script equals require
Holy shit, there was a trap there.
game.replicated.storage.module script. And this is basically all we need to do. We just need to require game.replicated.module_script, and then what would happen is that as soon as the script requires it, this is going to run. Print module script has been activated. So now let's see the game inside of our output when we call the module script. So it has now said module script has been activated because now we have at least one script that required the module script inside of replicated storage. So not only can we do print statements, we can pretty much do anything, like I mentioned, as if this was a normal script. We can do a print statement, we can make computations, we can do all sorts of stuff.
Can you die real quick so I can get your
isn't
loot?
just information inside of this module script
You have
table.
no
So that's a
loot.
little something I wanted to throw in there in case you were curious about that. Now let's try adding a function to our module table. And there's two ways of doing this. I'm going to show you both
theory?
ways. So the first way is to do it directly inside of our table. So we're going to put another comma after hello world to add another entry. Let's drop 2 lines, and this is how we're going to create a function. So we're first going to put in the name of our function, which we'll just call my function. And we're going to set this equal
the
to
fact that I'm
a
alive is
new
crazy
function.
right now.
So it's basically just going to look like this, open and close parentheses, and then hit enter. And Roblox will
I should
automatically
not be
put in
alive
the
right
end
now.
statement and also a
I
comma
don't wanna
to
be
signify that we can put
alive.
in another
I
entry
don't
down
wanna
here
die today.
after this
I
function.
don't
But we're not going to add a new entry right now.
die.
So now we can do whatever we want inside of this function. So we can just write
What
a
if
simple print statement.
Dark Eight Richie was on
This
your
is
diet?
a module script function.
Your drive.
Just something as simple as that. This is one way of doing
Yeah,
it.
what if I was on
And
your drive with Goku?
we can access this in our module call script
You're learning
by simply
transmission
going
from
down
women's
here,
bedrooms, dude.
and we
Let's
can just
go.
simply say module script dot my function.
And then what would you do? Murder me on the spot?
This does not take any parameters, and
Dude,
we don't have to wrap this inside of a print
bedroom.
statement because this
right.
is
Would
already
Crystal,
going to
would
print
Michael
something.
only would Michael only enter transmission
Let's
to go
hit
to
run
the
and see
burger
our
spot?
output. So we can see
Ooh,
that it has successfully printed this is a module script function because we made a function
gotta
inside of
go.
our module table and we called it outside of here using this external
maybe you're
script.
right.
So that's one way of creating this function. There's another way of creating it, and I think this is the more beginner-friendly
Chill out,
way
man.
of creating this function. So let me show you what it looks like. Let's delete this function right here, and let's drop 2 lines outside of this module table. So we're not going to directly put information inside of this table, but we're going to put information in the table outside of the actual table. So this is what it's going to look like. We're going to simply say function, because this is how a function is declared, and we're going to put in our module table name, which is just simply module, so we're going to say module, dot, and whatever our function name is, which is my function. And then open and close parentheses, enter. And we can do the same thing here with print. This is a module script function. This essentially does the exact same thing we just did with the first way of creating a function. In a technical sense, there is a third way of writing this function as well, just by saying the module name dot my function, and we set this equal to a new function, open close parentheses, enter, and we can just copy the same exact thing over here. All of this basically
Now
does the
that
exact
was
same
close.
thing. It depends on your preference, which syntax you like to do.
Almost
the
died in
most.
that
And you might
fucking
wonder,
giant
does this
battlefield.
only work with functions? Absolutely not.
Yeah,
This
lose
can
it,
work
you
with
lose,
pretty
it's
much
over.
any variable you can
If I lose, I die in real life.
So we can pretty much have this
Really?
as module
dude,
dot
just like
my
SAO.
number equals 10. This essentially does the exact same thing as this. You can add information to this table directly
so how would we
inside the
chill out
table,
together?
or you
Yeah,
can
now I
just do
can't
it
let you
out
do that.
here as well. So we can
what?
delete everything we had here. We can drop
Understand
another
me?
line down here by saying module dot
We can chill it
my
on Friday,
string
Richard, since you don't
equals
work, bro.
hello
Today is Friday.
This pretty much does the exact same thing. It all depends on
we'll go
what
with it.
syntax you like to do.
Oh,
what looks the
yeah,
most
I don't know what days
organized
you
to
guys are free. You didn't tell
and
me.
if you're
the
generally
schedule.
comfortable with
Is
the
it
way you
like-
write these
We
module
be there
scripts.
Thursday, Friday,
I also do
Saturday,
want to
Sunday,
add
and then
as a
we
layer
Well, I mean,
of
like, when you guys are, like,
information is
free
that
for, like,
module scripts
we're
can
all
only
gonna hang out
return
together.
one
'Cause
value.
I know some of you guys are gonna
That's
do your
why
own stuff.
generally we're sticking to just using
I
one
don't
table,
wanna call it days
which
when
is
we're just not
our
all together.
module local variable. Because
What?
this
Don't you have
is a
Monday,
table that
Tuesday,
can
Fridays
store
off?
so much information
That's when we're gonna
that
hang
we can
out.
just wrap this inside of one variable and return it. So that's generally why this module script is structured the way it is. Because a module script can only return one value. So why not have it be a table that can store multiple?
Yeah, it literally was like fucking right down this like 2 blocks away.
So that's something I want to
okay, I lied. Not 2 blocks
Here's
away.
Here's what we're gonna do. Let's take our module script and
Well, you live
let's
nearby
make
me.
it into a basic utility script that acts as a basic calculator for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing two numbers that we pass into. So this is what we're gonna do. Let's rename our module table. You don't have to do this, but I just think it's more convenient to do it this way so that we actually understand what this module script does. We're going to call this basic calculator.
So then I should probably take out
we're going to
whoever
return
this
this
is.
basic calculator table
Well,
down
shit.
as well. Let's remove these two lines over here, and let's write 4 functions for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So it's going to look something like this. Let's say function basic calculator dot add, and then in these parameters we're going to put in our first number and our second number. Hit enter, and we can pretty much copy this 3 more times.
I'm just looking
for subtracting, multiplying, and adding.
My
So
god,
the
I
second
feel
one
that's how
is
low I am.
subtract. The third one is multiply, and then the fourth one is divide. And let's make a result variable for these calculations.
Yeah, I'm dead.
So we can say local result.
I didn't know that Aizawa was solo. I should have killed him.
Obviously, at adding, you're going to use the plus sign.
Oh, not solo. I didn't know he was with the
And we can pretty
trio.
much do the same thing with this down here, but instead of adding,
Couldn't
we're
figure out this shit
subtracting.
out.
And over here, we're going to multiply.
I keep losing because it's like a 3v1v1, and then I don't know which one's the
And
1v1.
now what we'll do is return that result. We'll just simply say return result.
I couldn't
And we can
because
just
I didn't
copy
have enough
this and put it
evidence.
down here to all of these other.
I just assumed like if they were fighting me, that means that they weren't solo.
Simple, really basic calculator.
Yeah.
That we
Well, I was
created
right
that
because
we can
Aizawa
use
wasn't solo.
outside of this module script.
But the other dude died
So
too
let's go
quickly.
into our module call and let's rename our module script to basic calculator. And on the right side, let's actually rename our module script to basic calculator as well. And we're going to change this reference to basic calculator. Let's remove these lines over here. Okay, and so now what we'll do is we're going to create a new variable. We're going to call this one local add result equals basic calculator dot add open parentheses, close parentheses. We're going to put in 2 arguments here. So we can probably say 5 and 5 for 2 of our numbers.
I just don't want to play with this guy then.
Add result. We can do the same thing
Can I not
with
leave?
subtracting, multiplying, and dividing as well.
Please, can I not leave?
So this will be the sub results. This will be the
Look what you did, my hero.
multiply results.
Now I'm not playing your
and this will
stupid
be
game because
the
you're stupid
divide
mechanic
result.
where I can't leave the
And
lobby.
let's do this really quick.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a more stupid mechanic
For
than that.
subtracting, we can
Force
probably
you to
do
stay in the
5 and
lobby even if
5,
they take your
multiply
character.
5 and 5, divide 5 and 5. Yeah, I think we have it
You
pretty
can't
much
even
sorted
leave
out. And we're
regardless.
also going to change the function call to be subtract.
My hero
This
is
one's going
getting
to
a
be
little bit worse every
multiply,
season.
and this one is
Eventually,
going to be
there's going to be a
divide.
breaking point.
Okay, so now let's hit run and see our results in the
But I won't
outputs.
give a fuck
So
anymore.
we can see that
Yes.
the first result is 10 because 5 plus 5 is 10. The second result is 0 because
told you, I
5
got
minus
the
5 is
zero,
0.
nocturnal.
25 because 5 times 5 is 25.
the
And then
zenith at
1
least?
because 5 divided by 5 is 1. So our utility class or module script basically works as expected. So now we can access this module script with these functions in any script that requires this module script that we created at the very top. So that's pretty much the bare bone basics of what a module script is. If you can understand this,
What do I
then
do
you'll be
now?
set for really organized scripts inside of your Roblox
I'm sick of
games for the
power.
future
I'm
to
sick
come.
of grinding power.
And
I'm already done
this
with
is
it.
definitely something you should take into
You're not even done
practice
with it.
and
You are.
I'm done
consideration
with it, dude.
when you try
Exactly.
to
Come on.
create your
Level
Roblox
60.
games, because
I don't
it
need
is
anything
tempting
else.
to just copy and paste
That
the
was
same
60.
EK
function or variable.
I know.
over and over
I like
again.
shattered
There
the
will be
limit, and
times
I do keep
where
it a
module
little
scripts
C.
will come in handy
Shattered
and
it.
will actually be necessary as well
Oh.
when you need
Come
to
on, dude.
Oh, I got
fetch
artisan
local variables
green
that you
tail.
need to use in
We don't
multiple
need those
scripts
stupid green
and variable
tails.
functions and all that sort of stuff.
Pretty cheeks. I don't
So
know what they do.
in essence, a module script is a table that can be accessed anywhere inside of your Roblox game. It's a shared script that has information that any
what the
script can
fuck? I
access
thought I had one
and
of them.
can
I thought they were
use,
nocturnal.
so that you don't have to copy and paste the same stuff over
I guess
and
they
over
just
again.
really like to
And
do
not
it
even
like
just
that.
copy and
God
paste,
damn it.
but
That
sometimes
sucks.
you will need the same variable or same function or whatever it is in your other scripts without having a copy of that instead. But before I end the video, I'm going to show you a couple examples of utility scripts that I've used in the past
I'll tell you what
to
I
show
do,
you
bro.
what they actually look like when they get more complicated. Okay, so there's two scripts that I want to
Let me
show
tell
you
you what
that
I need,
act
dude.
as utility
I need
scripts that have
some
been
fucking
created by the
notes, man.
Roblox community. So the first one I want to show you
I've been
is
aw-
a
I've been
simple
awake
binary
since
search tree
yesterday
module
night.
with functions that can be used in other scripts.
What?
So it's going to be
Who told you?
can't, bro.
and I want you to note
Gosh,
to
so
not
good,
pay attention to the contents because
Crazy.
it can get overwhelming pretty fast.
Has
I
been
want you to
saying?
focus on the module script syntax. So don't even pay
went
attention to
to
the content,
school.
just letting you know about that. So we first
ready
have
for
the
work.
declaration to our module table, which
Now
is
it's
just binary search.
Friday.
And then we have a function call that takes in
Yeah,
two parameters. That's just default compare. And we have another function here, and we have
Did I
another
speak
function
wrong?
declaration
I think I
here,
know I did. That's why I was
another
late to-
function
wait.
declaration here,
Yeah, that's
and
why I was
that
late to
is
stream
basically the
yesterday.
whole
Okay,
script.
yeah,
So
that
this
makes
was a
sense.
pretty simple example,
Yeah.
but if
Can't
you don't know
remember.
algorithms, then
Can't
of course
remember.
this seems very complicated to you.
Reminds
But
me,
in
please.
terms of the module script syntax and structure, this is a pretty basic one. Now let's look at a little more complicated one, which is a custom data store framework. And this one is by Encoded Lua back in
I
2018.
know a good thing to put me to
This
sleep.
one is a bit lengthy,
The
but
fish game.
it is very interesting to see
I play Roblox.
what you can
Oh,
do
you
with
got the
module
fish game,
scripts.
you know,
So over
fish.
here, we have a whole bunch of
Okay.
tables that we're going to be using inside of this one module script. We have a configuration table specifically for
I
the
mean,
developer
dude,
if
come
you
on.
want
There's
to just change a bunch of stuff here.
126,000 people playing this fish.
And then
game.
down
You can't tell me
here,
that
we
makes it
have
bad.
even more tables. We have function
I never said it was
declarations,
bad.
more
I
function
just said,
declarations, another
just
function
fishing
declaration,
game.
another
You
function
just make it really
declaration,
good, yeah.
another one, and
It's
another
hard,
one.
like a fishing game.
And
Come on, you
that
don't know,
Yeah.
you don't know until you
is
play it.
basically the rest of what this module script has to offer. And then, of
Oh,
course,
yeah,
we
it's
also
bad.
have a bunch of stuff here
Oh, you
that's
played it?
running in the background that the module script does not have.
But, I mean,
And then
said, you
it
can't
just simply
judge it
returns
until
the
you play
module
it.
as
That's the
expected.
rule.
So the similarity
I never
with
said
both
it
of
was
these
bad.
module scripts is that they
I'm
both
saying.
follow
Sure.
a similar structure or syntax
say it's
because
good without
obviously they're both module
playing
scripts.
it.
I
It's
want
just
you to
really
get a
hard to
feel
not,
for
fuck up
how
the
these
fish
module
game.
scripts are structured
I don't
and
know,
how
dude.
you might
It's hard-
use
it's
these
hard to
in a
keep
real life
attention
example.
with the fish
I
game.
definitely
They even have
advise you
mini
to
games.
try this out on your own and try to
Like,
create
like,
module
those
scripts
videos-
and maybe
like,
even just
I like
look at
games out
other
there,
module
like, have,
scripts
like,
that
just,
developers
side
have
quest
created.
of just
And
just
if it
doing
looks really
fishing, and it's still
complicated,
really
I mean, don't
good
let yourself
inside
down
of-
on that
Even
because
Fortnite,
True.
people
Fortnite
do
has
come a
fishing.
long way when it comes to developing. And usually
True,
when you're
that's
the
how
one
good
writing
it
it,
is.
you understand your own
the
code
fishing is pretty good.
more than the developer
Fishing is
that
fun.
wrote the code that you're looking at. So that's something I wanted to show you before we ended off this episode. I really hope you found this episode to be helpful, and if you have, then I would suggest liking the video. And if you haven't, you should join my Discord server, the link is in the description. And
Not
with that being said,
bad.
I will see you in the next episode. Take care.
Could have been better, but
Whoa,
yeah.
wait a minute. I've seen this before. What is it doing all the way out here? Oh, whoa, whoa!
Alright, expect this boss, yeah.
Bruh.
you're gonna try and take.
Hold
out
up, I
the
need to
boss,
analyze
bro.
this really quick. What is going
then we'll
on
take
with
a-
this part?
Level
Let's
28
see.
boss.
Okay, we have a script.
That's too hard anymore.
Oh, it uses tween
okay.
service. Okay, that actually makes more sense.
Mackerel?
This
No,
syntax just
mackerel,
looks
bro.
so ugly though. I could definitely do a better job with that. I mean, no wonder. This
need a
speeding wall
Megalodon.
doesn't look to be a very good programmer. I mean, he says right here
what
his
I'm trying to
family's left him
catch.
because he has chronic anger, so probably wouldn't want to mess with him.
Catch the
Alright, well, now that I
Megalodon
understand that
and
this uses tween service, I think
the
that'll be the
hero.
most appropriate thing to talk about in
My
this
name is
episode.
Brian.
And if you're still sort of confused, tween service with the ugly line of code that you saw basically made this speeding wall move super fast in this direction
Perfect.
in order to kill me. And it was able to do it so smoothly as
fish
well.
game.
Like, you saw how smooth this wall was moving across this direction when we gave it an end goal and also a time to be able to
This is it,
get to where it needed to be. And so I think that's something we should be able to understand is be able to move these parts very smoothly. And not even just that, tween service can do a whole bunch of things for you, which we're going to go a bit more into in a little bit. But let's not implement these just yet, because I want you to fully get a grasp of the use of tween service and how we can use them. So with that being said, let me show you a little something before we begin. Alright, let's think about this for a minute. We're going to be re-enabling our script for the speeding wall just to see what's really happening behind the scenes when we use tween service to move this part from where it originally was to its end goal. So let's hit play and watch as the script changes its properties through tween service. So let's open up the Works Explorer with parts and let's go to the position. So the position should be moving very incrementally from its original position. So I'm actually going to show you that one more time just so that you can really see what's happening. So I'm making the part specifically move in its X position with the position and it's slowly moving from where it originally was to its end goal, which we specified to be negative 200 studs from its original position. So it wasn't just going from where it originally was and just simply changed the position to whatever it was over there. It progressively changed the X property to go from where it was to its end position over there. And so that's essentially what tween service is. Tween service allows you to interpolate or pretty much go from its starting position to its ending position very smoothly and incrementally, not very suddenly where we just change the position of, let's say it's Z to 200.
The final thing you need.
It basically teleported back to where it originally was without having that smooth positional changes. And that's basically that. You can do this with most numerical properties, like not just position, but you can even do orientation, and you can even do values that go from 0 to 1, like transparency, reflectance. You can even change the color too, and all that sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of properties you can work with that's compatible with tween service. And so we're going to be diving deep into a couple examples of how we can use tween service inside of our Roblox games. So with that being said, let's get straight to implementing. Now that we understand it, let's create tweens to quote-unquote move these instances or objects around inside of our game. And the first thing we're going to do is just create a simple part where we can move the position of that part, and so we can see it move in real time to a desired end goal that we do have. So we're going to do that by first going to model and then hitting part. Let's scale this up just a little bit so that we can make it look nice. Let's make it blue, and let's also make it anchored as well. So now that we have our part, let's rename this to moving part. Alright, and so now that we have our part, let's create a script inside of this part. We're going to hit the plus sign next to moving part. Let's create a script, and let's delete this code that's over here. And so here's what we're going to do. We need to make reference to tween service, because that's obviously the service we're going to use to create these tweens. We're going to say local tween service equals game : get service tween service. And then we're also going to make reference to our moving part by saying local part equals script.parent. All right, so now that we have our script that references tween service and also our part here, what we want to do is create a tween that has the part start at its position, and then we're going to specify what specific position we want this tween to animate this part to move to where we want it to with our end goal. Before we create the tween, there's two more important pieces of information that we need before we can get to creating it. One of them is tween info, and the other one is our goal. So let me explain what tween info is. It's basically a data type that provides multiple values that lets us customize our tween the way we want to animate a part to do something specific. Like, we can specify how fast or how slow this tween is going to animate. We can specify the style of how it animates from one place to the next. If we wanted to repeat it more than once, and if we want there to be like a delay of some sort when it goes from its starting position to its end position. There's many possibilities for this tween info data type, but I'm going to be showing you a basic example of creating a tween info data type. So we're going to say local tween info equals tween info dot new. So we're going to use the new constructor with the open and close parentheses. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of arguments we can put inside of our tween info object. I would say at the very least, you should have this argument here called time, and it takes in a number. So this is pretty much how fast or how slow you want this tween to execute when you run it. So I would say if you have at least that, then I'd say you're good to go.
Stupid
All the other
plan,
stuff
let me
like
tell
easing
you.
style, easing direction, and everything like that, I would say it's pretty important, but not as important as the time. We will go over some of the other properties in a little
I
bit,
mean, you
but
can only
for
buy
right
2
now, let's
cards,
just
so-
set a time, which takes in a number. We're going to set this to 5 because this represents 5 seconds, and we could just leave it like this. So that's the second piece of information. But now, the final piece of information we need is the goal, also known as the end
Whoops, I didn't
result.
turn off
How
my
do we
bed.
want this
I
tween
didn't
to
even know I didn't
end?
end it.
So
Richard.
remember when I
Sorry,
said
dude, I'm
that
stalling for no
we have a
reason.
starting point for our instance,
What is this
and then we
guy's
have
deck? Is it
an
like a
end
draw
goal
deck?
for
I'm so
our
confused.
tween once we're finished with it. In this
deck
case,
is
our
kind of
end goal for
stupid.
this part would be moving it to a specific position in our 3D world. So let's just say we want to
Serious,
move
man.
this in this direction by about 51 studs. The position here will be about 51 studs on the z-axis with a position of 45, 2, and 51. So let's specify this position 45, 2, and 51 as our positional goal. And so how do we write that as our goal? So the way it's going to work is our goal is pretty much a table full of properties that we want this
Crazy.
tween to achieve. So it could be more than just positions, it could even be sizes and other numerical values that you can
what are you
put
doing
that's
right now?
compatible with
What are
tween
you doing there?
service. So
Grinding
here's
ores.
what
I'm
it's
just
gonna look like.
collecting,
We're going to say
crazy.
local goal
XP
equals
bonuses Pokemon.
open and close hard brackets because this is going to be a table full of information. And let's drop a line. If you know table syntax, then you pretty much know the different ways you can create a table, but I'm going to do it like this. So our goal is just to simply change the position to our specific coordinates, which was 45, 2, and 51. So let's say position equals
So that's your
vector
plan.
3.new because as you know, position is a vector
not a bad
3
plan.
data type.
Let me
We're
tell
going to
you
say
something.
45, 2, and 51.
was-
And then that is pretty
That
much our
was
goal right
stupid
here.
and
Remember that
annoying.
position is case sensitive, so you should
What the
have the
hell?
P as capital. But this is basically our
There
only
you go,
goal that we
fish.
need for this part. It's just to move
Fish
from
on, fish
where it
on.
originally was to this specific place right here.
What kind of
And that's
fun
going
is
to be
that?
at 45, 2, and 51. All right, so now we have all
Wait, Richard,
bits
what?
of information
Hey,
to
there's
make
no R in
this
Wakanda
happen.
Forever.
Now let's create the tween.
Racist.
So what
We're
kind of
gonna
forever?
drop two lines, and we're going to say
No, it's forever.
local tween equals
This guy's racist.
tween
Like this.
service
Yes, racist.
colon
Oh my
create.
God,
Oh,
when you
man.
get
Open and
it,
close parentheses.
man.
And so this
You're
takes in
racist, dude.
3
I don't know you.
arguments with
Racist?
all of the things that we created previously.
Exactly up here,
So the
bro.
first one is going to be the instance itself,
back you up
which
to
is
jail,
just going
that's
to be
what.
our
Get
blue
outta
part
here.
right here.
You
So we're
stupid
just gonna
animal.
put in part,
Damn.
comma, and then our tween info object, which we already created up here. So it's going to be
Sorry guys,
tween
I can't be friends
info,
with racist.
and then our last bit of information is the property table, also known as our goal,
Finally,
what we
level
want to
32.
achieve with this tween. So let's pass in our goal argument there as well. Okay, cool. So now we have our tween, but if we
What?
play the
I
game,
didn't- why
nothing's
did I
going to
put that part
happen
there?
because we haven't activated our
Oh,
tween.
that's why.
All we did was just create it. So the way we
get stupid.
activate
Now
this
we're snapping me
tween
again.
is by dropping a line. We're going to say tween, and we're going to use the function play,
goofy.
open and close parentheses. So this is basically how we create a tween on Roblox. Let's also add in a quick task.wait statement before this plays so that we can fully see the part move when we load in. So let's say task.wait
Do I have to-
2 seconds. All right, so let's go into the game and hit run so that we can see this part move while it's animating. All right, and as you can see,
Stupid
this part
variance.
is slowly moving from where it began to the end position. Just like that. We didn't have to abruptly move the part from where it was
That's right.
to instantly being where we want the end goal to be.
fishing guy, you
It
know.
made a cool little animation that
you.
started from where it was to the
Oh,
end
shit,
position.
wait. This is
And there's a
crazy
lot of
fish,
things we
crazy
can
fish, crazy
change
fish.
with this move property. So we can modify it with
guy's
our
fighting
tween
me
info,
hard.
with things like easing style and easing direction.
Let's go, I got
Now,
tuna.
with these properties, it's going to require a lot
just put this
of
here. I'm
just
bringing up
experimentation
huge
to
electric
know
ends
the
you can-
difference between all of them and
No,
which
wait,
one
though.
works best
Oh,
for
that's
you.
your base.
Easing style is essentially how we want this part to animate
That's a pretty cool
when
card.
it's going
That's
from
two.
its
I
starting
never seen
position
that
to its
before.
end position. So an example of an easing style would be if we had the part go from its beginning to its end in a very linear fashion without anything fancy. and then it'll just abruptly stop. Or you can have it start slow and then it accelerates really fast until it reaches the end. So it's something along the lines of that. I'm gonna show you an example from someone on Twitter that made a great comparison side by side of these easing style types. Alright, this is an old GIF from 2015, so it is kind of outdated, but it still explains how easing styles work. And this post is by Aussie Pig, and I think he's done a great representation of showing the difference between these easing style enums. So let me just play it for you just to show you all these different types of easing style options. So this is what it essentially looks like when you go from its starting position to the end position. And you can have it go the other way around as well if you go from its ending position to its starting position. So this is what it looks like in reverse, and I'm going to play that for you again. This is what it looks like from start to end, and this is what it looks like from end to start. And so we can essentially do this not only with UI, but we can also do this with parts like with our moving part in Studio. So I hope this gave you a bit more understanding of easing styles. Alright, so now let's add an easing style to our tween that we previously created in our tween info. So I believe by default the easing style is something called sine. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So let's separate this with a comma. And now we're into our easing style. And remember, easing style is an enum, so we have to... So it's kind of like a library of different values that we have to fetch. We basically have to say enum dot easing style dot, and now we have all of these different easing style types that we can pick from. Like I mentioned, I believe sine is the default easing style, so that's why we were able to see this animate without us specifying an easing style, because Roblox by default picked sine. But let's change this to something like bounce instead to really see the difference with these tweens. So this is pretty much it. Let's go into the game and hit run to see the difference with our new easing style. Alright, so as you can tell, there was a pretty big difference there compared to the one we had before with sine. With bounce, it was definitely a lot more bouncy, I guess. And there's even more properties we can change as well. We can change the easing direction by saying enum.easing direction dot in out, and then out. I believe the default is in, but you can change it to out, meaning like it's going in reverse. You could experiment with these if you want to. It's not too terribly important, but that's another thing you can add. There's other properties like repeat count, which is just a number, or reverse, which is a boolean, or our delay time, which is also a number. So not all of this really matters too much, and you don't need every single property in tween info. I would say the most important one you need is the time, the duration of the tween when you play. But other than that, all of these other things, you can add them if you want to be more specific with your tweens. But that is essentially the tween info data type that you can use to customize your tweens when you use them in your games. Let's add more goals. Let's say we also want to change the size of this part as it's moving along to its end position. So the current size is 4x4x4, but what if we change it to 10x10x10 while it's moving a long way to reach its end? So we're just simply going to create a new entry in our role
The one that I had
comma
was
and
too
then hitting
big,
enter.
bro. Like,
Let's also change the size to another vector3 value by saying 10 by 10 by 10. Alright, so now let's see our part if we decide to add another goal to it alongside the moving one. So as you can see, it's scaling up while it's also moving. So we can do a whole bunch of things with our end result goal inside of the same tween. So that's another useful piece of information to know about. There are also tween functions that I want to introduce to you. The first one I already did, which is tween play, which obviously plays the tween that we created. But there's two other ones that I want to show you. The second one being that we can actually pause the tween midway without it completing. We can do this at any point during the script, because if we play a tween, that doesn't mean it's going to pause the script with whatever other code that's going to be down here. So that's why we can just pause this tween if we want to. So let's say about after 1 second, we simply just pause this tween just abruptly. We're going to put in a task.wait function right here with 1 second, and then down here we're going to say tween
Oh my God,
colon
Oh.
pause, open and close parentheses. So if we go into the game now, after about 1 second, the playing tween should then abruptly stop. So it just stopped right here, but it hasn't reset, nor has it completed
My God,
because
what am I
it's
hearing?
currently stuck in
Oh my
pause mode.
God.
Jesus
So what
Christ!
we can do
Kevin,
in order
you're
to
fucking crazy,
continue
Kevin.
the
Oh,
tween,
after my
we can
thing.
just
After
simply
my
say,
big boy.
well, first let's
Oh my
put a
goodness.
task.wait
Yeah,
for
you
another
need to do
second again.
something.
We can just simply say tween colon
my God,
play
oh my God, oh my
again.
God.
Oh my God.
So we're using the
Wait,
same
where are
play
you?
method. There's no
I'm
such thing as
down.
like a resume
coming.
method or continue
Jeez,
method
why
or
is there
anything
so
like
many
that.
of
We
them?
just simply say tween colon play again to resume
Gotcha,
where
man.
it left off. So if we
We
play
did it.
this
Wow, we
now,
actually survived.
it's going to take a second
Yeah,
to
most of these
pause, and
Pokemon
then it's going to
take such a big
continue
hit, dude.
where it left
Dude.
off to then finish what it started. And finally, there's one more function, which is just canceling it entirely. So after we pause it, we're going to wait a second, and instead of playing it again, let's just cancel it completely.
No.
And now let's see what happens when we play the game.
Dude.
So it's going to move, and then it's going to stop
Oh,
after about 1 second. It's
they
just
killed
going
one
to
of my Pokemon,
cancel the
dude.
tween. It's kind
Oh.
of hard to tell, but this tween no longer exists because we decided to cancel the tween. So now the tween cannot continue where it left off because we
Wait, there's another guy.
completely canceled the tween, and now there's no more tween for this part. Now there's one event that's special with tween service, and
I did
that
not
is
just
the
catch a
event
mackerel.
of detecting when our tween finishes with whatever object or instance it was trying to tween. We can do this inside of our script after we play the tween for the first time. So let's delete our code down here with pausing and canceling, and let's write in an event that detects when our tween finishes. So let's drop 2 lines, and we're going to say tween.completed connect function, open and close parentheses, enter. And then we can just pretty much say whatever we want here with our print statement. We can just say tween has been completed. That's pretty much it. We can just go into the game and see our change in the output once this tween has finished what it needed to
Yeah, he's got more than
finish.
me. Fuck.
So
more energy
the
than me. Or is
tween
it 50-50?
finishes, and then in the output it says tween has been completed. So the event has been fired
think it's Blood Power.
successfully
Yeah, it was Blood
after
God
the
damn
tween
it.
was finished. Now this is one way you can use this event. You
Let's
can
go.
basically fire something after this tween has been completed, but there's also another way of doing this that pretty much acts as a task.wait function, but we have a very precise way of knowing when this tween finishes. What we can do instead is delete all of this here up until the function declaration. So let's delete that. So we're simply going to say tween.completed colon wait, open and close parentheses. This is the entire code right here, and then down here what we can do is make a print statement saying this tween has
14,
been
16,
finished.
23.
Essentially what we're
I
doing
can
here
tie
is
it
we're
up, but I
creating a
can't
very
win.
accurate wait statement to wait until this tween has been completed,
Unless-
and then we fire whatever code is here with the rest of the script. So let's go into the game and hit run, and we should see the same exact result with our script. This was just one other way of writing it. So let's finish our tween, and then down here it prints
Ooh, get
again, this
fucked,
tween
bro.
has been finished, because we told the script to wait until the tween has been finished
how
to
you like
do
that,
whatever
bitch?
else was down here, which was printing this print statement. So those are 2 ways you
leave,
can
just leave,
use
dude. You're
the
wasting both my
completed
time, just leave.
tween event,
fuck outta
but I usually use completed with a wait statement rather than connecting it to
go,
a
I'll
new
open the door
function
for you.
to
Just
do
go
whatever I
already,
want it to
man.
do inside of a function. So I hope you will find great use with using this completed event, and I believe that's
I
the
just
only
forget that I need to
event
take my melatonin.
that's unique to
Like, I'm knocked
tweens.
out now.
I hope this video served you as a good introduction to tween service if this is your first time using tween service. I further made more improvements to my part by adding in an easing style of bounce, and I basically wrapped this around in a while true do statement to give me a random goal every single time by picking a random color and a random orientation, and then play that tween, and then just simply wait till that tween is done to do it all over again. So you can do some pretty cool stuff with tween service. And so if you plan to use this in the future, this is definitely a much greater way of animating your parts or instances to do what you want them to do in real time. It's definitely more efficient than just using a normal while loop to manually change the properties of its positions or sizes or whatever you want it to do. Tween service just serves as a great tool to do the really complicated stuff for you. And so that's what I really like about it. My name is BrawlDev, and if you found this video to be helpful, then be sure to like the video. And if you haven't joined my Discord server, the link to that is in the description. But apart from that, I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Press R, I dare you. Well, when you phrase it like that, that sounds like a challenge, so that's a challenge I can't back down from. Whoa, 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 what is happening right now? What is happening with this game, bro? Oh my god, I need to get out of here. This is too insane. Alright, so that just happened. Yeah, the purpose of that, whatever that thing was with the sky, whatever that was doing, that was supposed to represent user input service, I guess. So it's basically how we're able to detect user input from the player whenever we're making our Roblox games. So an input could be if I'm clicking my mouse in the game, if I'm pressing W to move forward, if I'm just pressing any sort of keys that are on my keyboard right now. You can actually see that in the output down here, it's detecting every time I do any sort of input that is just going to print the string input. That's because we're able to detect when the player is pressing down on a key on whatever device that they're playing on. So for me, I'm playing on a computer, but let's say I was playing on a mobile device, then we would probably detect when the player is moving or pressing the jump button, or just pressing buttons on an Xbox controller or a PS4 controller now that Roblox is on PS4. So things like that. And I want to be able to introduce this concept in Roblox Studio so that you will know how to detect user input and also creating the best experience for players depending on the device that they are playing on. So if that interests you, then you should stick around till the end of this video. So with that being said, let's go straight into implementing. Alright, let's think about this for a minute. You can see that with user input service, the thing we're going to be talking about in this episode, there's so much to uncover with this concept that I'm going to be here forever if I'm going to try and go through every single thing that's inside of this documentation. So what I'm going to do in this episode is give you a general introduction to how you can use user input service to get user input and also configure your game depending on what device the user is playing on. Okay, I'm going to treat this episode as an introduction more than an in-depth guide compared to some of my other episodes. And maybe in the future I will dive deeper into some of these concepts in specific videos. But for the purposes of this episode, I'm just going to go over some basic stuff for user input service, and hopefully you will be able to experiment with user input service on your own time, or stick with me for future videos where I talk more deeply into some of these concepts with user input service. So with that being said, let's now go and start implementing this in Roblox Studio. Now that we understand it, let's add user input into our game. There's two important use cases to use user input service, at least for the sake of this video, where the first one is detecting user input. So if they're pressing down a button while they're playing the game, and just things like that. The second use case is detecting what device the player is playing on so that we can give them the best experience depending on what they're playing on. Because obviously, when a player is playing on a mobile device, the experience is a lot different than playing on a PC. So that's something we're going to have to detect in our game using user input service. And before we start adding it, you might ask, does this belong in a script or a local script? So user input service is only local sided. This cannot be done on the server. This can only be done from the player directly. So you're going to have to put this in a local script, probably somewhere that fits it best, like starter character scripts. So let's hit the plus sign next to starter character scripts, and let's insert a local script.
Come on, man.
So let's delete this, and first thing we will do is make reference to user input service. We're going to say local user input service equals
I caught a sardine in the shitty ass pipeful fucking pond.
User input
got to be
service.
Shitting me.
So the first part of this video is just detecting user input whenever they press down on any key. This is going to use a function called input began, and this is pretty much what it's going to look like. So we're going to say user input service dot input began colon connect function open and close parentheses enter. So this input began event takes in two function parameters. The first one is the user input, and then the other one is a boolean that's called game processed event. I'm going to go over what this one does in a little bit, but for now we're going to focus on the input, which is basically an input object made by Roblox themselves that contains information that tell us what type of input the user is currently
But why am I
pressing
getting
down on
salmon
when
from a
this
spiteful
event
pool?
fires. So if we were to
You know
not
what's
pay
really good?
attention to the input and just simply do something whenever the
They're
user
just
does
kind of ass right
anything
now, I'll be
related
honest.
to user input, let's just make a print statement really quickly just to see whether this is working or not. So we'll just simply say input, and then let's see what this looks like when we play the game. So in the game, I can literally do anything to make it so that the input began event will fire. I can right click and it will say input has been printed down here. I
There's
can
been a
move
green
around
hammerhead shark
and
spot
it'll
in the ocean.
constantly
Be the
print out
first in order
input
to
because
catch it.
I'm pressing down
That's
on
kinda
multiple
cool.
keys while I'm moving my
That's cool.
character. If I jump or just like really press anything on my keyboard, then
Not
it's going to
cool.
activate the input
Just
began event. And this basically applies with any input that I do. So not only is this going to work with keyboard and
Can I
mouse, but
discard
this would
anything?
also apply to if you're playing on a phone, a tablet, or even on an Xbox or PS4. Just any sort of input will be detected using the input began. But this is important to note when we're pressing down on a key and not when we're
so.
lifting it back up. I'm going to show you how we're going to detect that in a little bit. So let's go back to our script, and we can see that this is basically being printed anytime
Yeah,
we
it's
press
growing.
any input. So it doesn't really matter what input it is, as long as we're pressing down something. But now, let's say we wanted to focus on specifically which input we want to look out for
No, we
whenever
need one.
we're pressing down a key.
What?
So let's say we want the player to
Here, I'll
press
go
a
pick it.
specific key, then we want it to do something once we know that we pressed something. So you know, with my very weird example from the beginning where I pressed R and that specifically triggered
I
something.
got rid of your blue marble.
We can do that using this input that was passed in to check whether this input was specifically R. So we're going to do that down here by dropping 2 lines, and we're just going to do a simple if statement. We're just going to say if input. Now, the thing about input is that this is an input object, and it has multiple properties that are layered onto this input object. The thing we're most interested in is the key that was
Is that your
pressed.
goal, to try and get the 100? 'Cause
This
you're not
property
gonna
is
get it.
called key code,
guarantee you
which is
that.
an enum value, which describes the kind of input that is being pressed from the user. So this is how we're going to detect whether the input is the one we're looking for. It's not just input because input is an object. We're looking for the key code property. So then we're going to say if this is equal to R, so we can do it like this as a character, but the more conventional way of doing this is by using an enum value from key code. So you know how key code is an enum value? We want this to match
fucked
a
yourself
key
with that
code
thing.
enum that exists in Roblox's library already. So we're going to do
Because I
that
know
by
what your
saying
deck is now. It's the Living
enum
Tribunal
dot
deck.
key code
Which I
dot,
can respect,
and
that's not
as you
meta.
can see, there's a whole list of options that we can choose
I like
from
non-meta
using this
decks.
key code enum. Now, key code is a specific thing for certain keyboards, so this will not work for devices such as phones, tablets, and consoles. This is specifically for keyboards. So let's say we want it to be R. Then we're going to say print player has pressed R. So this is the syntax we're going to use to figure out whether the player has pressed down the R key using the key code enum
There
from
he is,
our
the
user
gray
input.
hammerhead
So let's
shark.
go into the game and
They can
try this
catch
out.
him.
All right, so over here, I'm just
what?
spamming my keyboard to print input, but I'm not pressing R yet. Now when I do press R, you can see that in the output,
I know
it says
until you
player has
try.
pressed R because we made a check to see if the key code is equal to R specifically. Then we're going to execute whatever is down here and not just any random input that we set out input began to detect. So that pretty much works as expected. So I mentioned that input began has 2 arguments. So we have the input, and then we have this random boolean called game processed event. What is this? So let's first write down
There
what
it is.
actually
Check it out,
happens
the shark.
when we do check whether this game processed
cool.
event is true or not. So let's just simply write if game processed event, then print game processed event. Now let's go into the game so I can demonstrate to you what this does. All right, so I'm in the game. Let's say, for instance, I want to type something in the chat for whatever reason. So I'm gonna press the chat, and then I'm just gonna type in rat. I don't know, just like something completely random. Obviously, if I have a local script that's detecting user input, I needed to press down the RAT key
Oh
to
my
be able
God,
to
there's so
press
much people here, it's
to be able
lagging.
to type out this message. But what if I don't want to detect this user input while
It is really
while the user is
crazy.
just typing something in the chat, that's basically what game processed event is. We're seeing whether the player is currently interacting with Roblox's GUI system, or I believe any GUI in general, as a matter of fact. I could be wrong about that. With certain interactions like this, especially with the chat, we don't all of a sudden want it to do what it needs to do with this script if, let's say, the player is chatting something using Roblox's GUI. That's where we detect with game processed event. If the player is currently interacting with Roblox's GUI system, then we don't want to do the user input checking. So that's why in most cases we would just simply return this input began event. Because if, let's say, the user is typing something in the chat, we don't want to process this input began event. We just want to simply return this with no issues whatsoever. And that's basically what game processed event is. I hope that made sense to you. All right, so we have an event for input began, which is basically when the player presses down on a key. But now let's try making another event to detect when the player lifts the key back up. We will do that using an event called input ended. So down here, the syntax is relatively similar-ish. So we're gonna say user input service dot input ended connect function open parentheses close parentheses input and then game processed event.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And this will pretty much fire whenever the player lifts a key off of the keyboard or any input in general. So we're gonna say user has lifted the input. And so we can go into the game and see this change anytime I press down a key and then lift it back up. So I'm going to hold the left mouse button. So I'm going to press the left mouse button. It still says the input is down there, but then when I let go, it says user has lifted the input. So this pretty much happens whenever we just let go of any sort of keys. So I'm currently pressing S. If I let go, then it's going to say user has lifted the input. And this can be done for every single input began and input ended. So that's one quick little thing I wanted to introduce there to get you familiar with that. So over here, we detected user input based on the key that they were pressing on the keyboard. But obviously, there's way more different types of input other than just keys on the keyboard, like my mouse or a gamepad or mobile, things like that. We can do that using another property of input, not called key code, but called user input type. And this is what it's going to look like. So let's detect if the player is pressing the left mouse button. We're going to do that by typing if input.user input type equals, and this is going to be another enum value. So we're going to say enum.user input type dot, and there's a whole bunch of options here. So mouse button 1 is basically our left mouse button, and then there's mouse button 2, which is our right mouse button, and then mouse button 3, which is like the little mouse scroll wheel if we press that down. And then there's a bunch of other stuff too that we're not really gonna worry too much about as of right now. So we're gonna say mouse button 1, then print user is pressing the left mouse button. And so if we try this out in game, this is how we're going to detect mouse clicks in our game. So I'm going to hit the left mouse button and it's going to say user is pressing the left mouse button, and this will only work with the left one. If I try pressing the right one, it's not going to print the left mouse button, or if I even press the middle button, it's not going to say left mouse button. Mouse button 1 is specifically the left mouse button. And so that's pretty much how that works. We can do the same thing with mouse button 2, mouse button 3, and we can also do this with different device inputs as well. We can say touch, which basically means that the user is on a touch device. So like a mobile device like an iPhone or a tablet. This is how we can detect that using this. And even a gamepad as well. So usually it would be gamepad 1 if we're just detecting player 1 on like an Xbox or a PS4. This is how we would detect that. It's pretty much one way of detecting the type of user input just by using user input type when we're checking this in our input began event. So this was one way of detecting the user input type of whether the user is playing on a phone, a tablet, a console, things like that. But there's actually an easier way to do this without doing this if statement check inside of this input began event, because user input service has these properties that automatically tell us whether the user is playing on a specific device. So these properties are usually named after the device that they're playing on. So touch enabled is telling us if the player is on a mobile device. Gamepad enabled is if we're playing on a console and things like that. It's pretty simple actually. So let's drop 2 lines up here. to make a check whenever the player joins into the game to see what device they're playing on. We're just simply going to say if user input service dot touch enabled. So this one tells us if the user's device has a touch screen, so this is usually for mobile phones. We're going to then say print player is playing on a mobile device. And we can do something cool with this as well
Kevin,
to really show us the difference. So we're going to say workspace colon wait for child baseplate, and we're going to put in a wait for child so that it can load in fast enough. Dot color equals color3 dot from RGB. We're probably going to do some blue.
I can't because it keeps saying I overlap
and then
something.
let's go into the game and try this out. All right, so we're in the game, and as you can see, the baseplate's color has changed to blue because we are playing on a phone. If I were to back out of this and then get off of device emulation to play on my PC, then this change should not happen since I'm now playing on a PC. So yeah, because now that I'm playing on a PC, the script is not going to tell me that I'm playing on a mobile device in order to change this baseplate's colors. So we were able to do that successfully, and we can do this with console as well, just by simply replacing touch enabled with gamepad enabled. And we can also do this with VR as well, if you're playing Roblox VR, just by saying VR enabled. So these properties can pretty much signify whether the player is playing on a specific kind of device. And you can use this property from user input service to do specific things with the player experience, like changing GUIs to fit the player's screen better, or modify GUI screens, or modify user controls based on the device that they're playing on. And another instance I can think of that this would be very useful for is if you're using tools, where the tool will play out differently depending on the device that you're playing on, because a lot of the times tools require different controls for different devices that the user's playing on. You're not going to be able to press W, A, S, and D if you're on a mobile phone, and this is especially true for tools if you're trying to press specific keys that you're not able to on a different device. So that's something else I wanted to throw in there. User input service also allows us to detect when the player is jumping using an event called jump request. So this is what it's going to look like if we just go down here and then say user input service dot jump request. And this is basically going to fire every single time the player wants to make a request that they're jumping, also known as pressing the spacebar, or pressing the jump button or A button, whatever device that they're playing on. Just making any request that makes the player jump. We're going to say connect function, open parentheses, close parentheses. This one has no arguments, so we can just hit enter. And now we could just print something like player has jumped. You might think that this is basically the only thing we need to do, but that's actually not correct, because let's say we do try playing the game and try to make a jump request. Let's see what happens in the output when we do try and jump. So I'm gonna hit spacebar, and down here, it said the player has jumped, but I only pressed spacebar one time, but for some reason, this printed 3 times. And if I try this again, I press spacebar, it's continuously printing 3 or 4 different times, maybe even more every time I just press the spacebar button. This especially happens when I'm holding down the spacebar, when it's just printing like this many times. The reason it's doing that is it's because the event is detecting when a jump request is happening, and a jump request can pretty much happen every millisecond that we try and attempt this jump request. So an easy solution to this is to wrap this in a debounce boolean variable. So up here we could just write a very quick boolean by saying local is jumping equals false. And then down here we can make a check by saying if not is jumping, then we will set is jumping equal to true, and then we're gonna take our print statement and then put it in here. And then what we'll do is put a task.wait statement over here, like maybe about 0.5 seconds, and then set is jumping back to false. So when the player does decide to jump, then we will make the script wait for a little bit before setting is jumping back to false so that we can make the jump request check again. And this should pretty much prevent our issue that we had before. All right, so I'm gonna hit jump, and it says the player has jumped. So if I keep holding it, then it's going to print player has jumped whenever my character gets back down on the ground to then print it again in the output. So it pretty much now works as expected. This is very useful if we're trying to detect when the player is jumping, of course, and that is pretty much the end of that. What if we wanted to detect multiple key presses? There's actually a couple of ways we can do this, but the easiest way I know is by using a function inside of input began whenever we press a new key. And this function is called isKeyDown. So we can use this function to tell whether the player is currently holding down this key alongside this new key that they just pressed down. So we can probably do that by modifying this if statement right here with our input began. So what if we wanted to hold the keys R and Q at the exact same time? We can pretty much do this by first checking whether the player is already holding down the Q key, and then we can fire this down here when the new input the player is pressing down on is R. Right before this, we're going to say if user input service is key down, and this takes in a key code parameter. So we're going to say enum.keycode.q. And then what we're going to do is put an and here so that we're going to say if the Q key is currently being pressed down right now, and then our new input is going to be R, then we're going to print player has pressed R while holding Q. And so that's pretty much how we're going to detect whether multiple keys are being pressed at the same time. So let's hit play and see what happens. All right, so I'm pressing R. And as you can see, nothing's being printed right now because I need to hold Q first. So let's hold Q and then let's press R. So now it says player has pressed R while holding Q. So that is pretty much how we detect multiple keys at the same time. So now that we bring up the idea of pressing multiple keys, what if we wanted to do a double tap on a key? We'd pretty much do this using a feature called tick, which I don't expect you to know about because we never talked about this yet. But just for the sake of this example, you can follow what I do. But for a basic explanation, tick is basically a feature that lets us keep track of time in our script. What if, let's say, we wanted to detect whether a player is double tapping W to do some sort of cool functionality? We can first do that by creating an if statement down here, saying if input.keycode equals enum.keycode.w, then print player has double pressed W. Now, obviously, if we do this, this is just one input of W, not double pressing, because we want to have the double press happen during a specific window of time so that it would count as a double press. So a double press would probably be like if we press W once and then press W twice, we want to have it in the span of like 0.5 seconds or something so that we can make it count as a double press and not just a single press. So up here, let's write a tick variable by saying local current tick equals tick, open and close parentheses. And then down here in our if statement, let's say and current tick minus tick is less than or equal to 0.2. Let's make it 0.2 in this case. And let's also wrap this condition in a parentheses so that we don't get confused with it. And then down here, let's write current tick equals tick open and close parentheses. So this is pretty much how we would be able to track in time whether the player is double pressing W or just pressing W singularly if it passes 0.2 seconds in between when we press W. Oops, I made a little typo here, my bad. So it's tick first and then minus current tick. My apologies on that. Let's play the game. All right, so I'm pressing W and nothing is being printed. If I press it again, nothing is being printed. If I double press it, then it's going to say player has double pressed W because we very quickly pressed W within the span of under 0.2 seconds or exactly at 0.2 seconds. So let's press it again. Nothing's being printed. Press it again. Nothing's being printed. And it's still not printing. So let's rapid tap it. And now it says player has double pressed W. So it's very quick. And obviously we can adjust this duration by changing this number from 0.2 to maybe 0.5 to make it more lenient. But you get the general idea.
That's what's up.
No
I don't
way.
expect you to know about tick until we discuss about it in a whole nother video, But this is one way of detecting whether a player is double tapping on a key. I think that'll pretty much wrap up the introduction to user input service. It's a very big feature that Roblox has, and I encourage you to go and try some of these other functions and events and all sorts of stuff on the API that Roblox has provided.
Yeah, I bought it.
It's a very big concept to know about because user input is one of the most fundamental things that scripts can do when making the best experience possible in the games that you're playing. If you've made it this far into the video, then I encourage you to watch my other videos on my advanced scripting tutorial playlist, or just check out any of my other videos that I have on my channel. But with that being said, that's pretty much where I'm going to end it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to join my Discord server, the link's in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.
Okay, never mind.
Why not?
Damn, that's a pretty nice looking car over there. I don't even know what it's doing out here in the middle of nowhere, but
Overwatch.
I don't think it would hurt if I tried to take this out for a spin.
Dumb.
Alright, let's see if I can get on this car. Alright.